Sup, my fellas. Don't forget to leave feedback, and enjoy the story. Once upon a time, the protagonist thought that he and his sister would have an ordinary life, until dragon blood got into his eyes. Beast summoners entered his world. The whirlpool of fate sucked the young man in, and gave him a great opportunity. But life was not that simple. They shouted at him that no one could give up, no one. However, he still decided to fight for his future. Even if his enemies mock him, his friends betray him, and those around him look down on him, he will still destroy their illusions and rise above them, proving his strength. The hero will rise to the very top. 1,000 years ago, the dragon clan ruled the magical beasts. And those who stood above all were called the demonic god. He had exorbitant ambitions and sowed chaos everywhere, leading an army of magical beasts that captured the human world. His greed knew no bounds, striving to plunge every part of the universe into endless darkness. And then, in the face of death, humanity fully revealed its potential at the dawn of the awakening of spiritual power. A select few gained the ability to control magical beasts. They became known as beast hunters. The dragon that destroyed houses was attacked, and it was reported that a magical beast had been shot down over the northern part of the city. It fell into a residential area, and emergency assistance was needed. Sinyu stared in horror at the huge dragon face in front of him. Blood splashed into his eyes. The protagonist stood and watched in panic. His mouth dropped open in surprise when he heard a voice that said that at the beginning of this disaster, when heaven and earth were not yet separated, he made a pact, sealed it with his blood, and summoned spirits from the void. At the moment when the fire lion attacked the dying dragon, the voice continued, "Let his blood be his payment, and his words his bonds," calling for his command to be heard. The speaker confirmed that the magical beast was dead. But noticing the young man wiping his eyes, he said that there were survivors. The boy looked forward in surprise when he heard that no one was hurt. Ruyan put her palm on her lion's mane and apologized for the inconvenience. With a smile, the girl handed the hero a business card from the Azure Dragon Academy, on whose behalf she promised to compensate for the damage to his house and pay compensation. The young man stood in the middle of the destroyed apartment, confused. Looking at the guys flying away who were saying goodbye to him, he realized that they were the trappers. Looking at the card, Sinyu thought that everyone in their world dreamed of becoming a trapper, if only they had the chance. But he did not have money to buy an animal, and without one, he could not pass the national trapper exam. But then a skinny puppy rushed to the surprised young man, and looked at him with huge eyes. The next moment, the dog was already happily licking his face. Pointing his finger at the hole in the wall, the boy asked if he had been following the dragon all this time, where did it come from, and if it could be tamed. Looking at the puppy, the hero remembered that the textbooks mentioned a creature similar to a dog. It seemed to be a storm dog. It had a weak pedigree and did not require much spiritual power. Maybe he could feed it, which meant that now he had a beast and he could become a trapper. Raising his eyebrows, the young man realized that there were only 3 days left until the national exam. He would hardly make it in time. Raising the dog above his head, the boy asked the good boy to come here, and decided that he had come. Soon the boy stopped near the trapper's shop. Thoughtfully looking at the window, the hero thought that maybe it would be better to give him to someone who could take care of him. Raising an eyebrow, the young man remembered his empty refrigerator and muttered that the baby had no future with it, and added to himself that this little glutton had eaten his entire week's supply of food in one night. At that moment, the door swung open and the owner asked what this guy was doing at the door of his store so early in the morning. Holding out the puppy, the hero asked if the owner wanted to buy this animal. He waved his hand and said that he did not need a storm dog, an animal with a low pedigree and no evolutionary path, who would agree to buy it anyway, demanded to leave and not interfere with his work. The dog pressed closer to the young man, and he noticed he does not want it. Let him not take it, why shout like that? But suddenly a window with information appeared in front of the surprised eyes of the guy, and at first he decided that these were glitches. Why did he see some kind of system window? He rubbed his eyes, but the window did not disappear. Moreover, the hero read about the hidden path of evolution. The shop owner even grabbed a broom at this point and barked that the storm dog had no evolutionary path and demanded that he get lost. The guy tried to knock on the window and realized that since the owner couldn't see the window, it was only accessible to him. Joe approached the hero and called him by name, and remembered that he hadn't decided to take the exam because he didn't have a beast. Looking at the puppy's face, the arrogant young man asked if Sinyu had managed to scrape together a few coins. Turning away abruptly, the hero demanded that he mind his own business while the rich man laughed at the choice of a pet. Smiling, the guy noted that it seemed that Lin was right. His interlocutor didn't want to take the trapper exam at all. Then he laughed and added that the loser wouldn't have passed it anyway, even if he really wanted to. The hero's face expressed surprise. He paid attention to the name that his rival called, and he mockingly said that he really didn't know about his girlfriend. Throwing a mocking glance at the young man, the rich man clarified that now his ex-girlfriend Jiang Lin was dating him. The girl immediately came up to him, taking the young man by the hand, and asked where her beloved had disappeared to. She barely found him. to which he replied that he simply noticed her old acquaintance and decided to greet him. Throwing an arrogant glance at the ex, Lin said that they shouldn't joke about her like that, because she had broken up with him a long time ago, and she thought to herself, why should she even care about the opinion of some loser when she was dating such a rich guy, and also dragged some mongrel with him, a pitiful sight. The protagonist's face twisted in anger, and he declared that the girl had forgotten who had helped her when she was at her lowest. He didn't care, let him continue to waste his life on this rich idiot, demanded to notice that he was the one who abandoned her. The young man walked away, sticking his tongue out at the traitors, while the rich man shouted that he shouldn't talk to his girlfriend in such a tone and that he would grind him to dust during the exam, to which she asked him to ignore this loser. It was necessary to break up with him earlier. Walking away, Sinyu walked further, remembering that information window, and thought, who said that the storm dog is useless, decided to see what awaits them. 3 days later, at Xilin Square. A crowd of candidates had gathered here for the national exam. The city examination center in Chifeng City welcomed them and asked them to take their seats. The protagonist stepped forward when the exam was announced. He walked confidently towards the table while the others were talking among themselves. Could it really be Sinyu? Why did he even come here? After all, he didn't even have a beast, and he still couldn't buy one. But 3 days ago he signed up for the exam and even applied to the Azure Dragon Academy. The young man looked at the ball intently, while the crowd continued to discuss how such a loser could even apply to one of the 4 best academies, how he even dared to do such a thing. The guy frowned tensely. Looking at the teacher sitting at the table, the hero said that he came for the exam. Raising his hat, Qin called out the name of the candidate, and he confirmed that it was he who wanted to take the trapper exam. Squinting, the man remembered that this was the only student in Chifeng City who applied to the Azure Dragon Academy, which he himself was from. At this moment, Zhe appeared from behind the young man and noticed that he really knew no bounds. In the last 5 years only 8 students from their city applied to the Azure Dragon Academy. The rich man's face twisted with malice when he reminded that none of them passed. None. Poking the hero in the chest with a paper, the young man asked if he really thought that someone special, even he himself was ready to kneel and call him father if he succeeded. But this will not happen. The guy looked at his rival with fury, threatening that then he should get ready, that soon he will have 2 fathers at once. Turning to the teacher, the hero announced that he was ready to begin. The man picked up the documents and immediately warned the student that the selection for the Azure Dragon Academy is extremely strict, and he did not even choose educational institutions in case he fails, so if he does not pass the exam, he will no longer be able to enter the Beast Hunter Academy. Placing his palm on the table, the young man stated that he understood everything and asked to begin, although the crowd began to laugh, that the passing score of spiritual power for the Azure Dragon Academy was 800. Did he really hope to get it if no one could? Reaching out for the ball, the teacher said that the first test was a test of spiritual strength. The young man placed his palm on the ball, waiting for his assessment. But the ball showed only 316 points. Pointing his finger at his opponent, the rich man laughed and shouted that he considered himself special, but he himself did not even come close to the threshold. Closing his eyes, the teacher first thought that he was a rather promising student, and asked out loud to call the next one. But then the guy frowned, and everyone noticed that the spiritual strength indicator was changing. It had already reached 621, and continued to grow. Then 700, and then more than 800. When the figure reached 900, the crowd decided that the device for measuring spiritual strength had simply broken. The growth of points stopped at 1028. The man opened his mouth when the hero removed his hand from the ball. Looking at the confident face of the student, he even thought that he was some kind of monster. The spiritual strength indicator was directly related to the potential of a hunter. Every 100 points of spiritual power allowed one to make a contract with one magical beast, and if he had 1028. This meant that in the future, Sinyu could even become a 10-star beast hunter. The teacher looked at the youth thoughtfully, repeating the last words to himself. In the past decades, there were only a few of them in the Dragon Country. While the hero smiled contentedly, the man thought that it seemed like they had found another genius, and he voiced the candidate's spiritual power indicator out loud, while the crowd whispered that it seemed that the genius Nishuang, who took the exam a year ago, had 2 points higher, and no one expected that this loser would be so strong. Folding his arms across his chest, the rich man countered that there were 2 tests at the Azure Dragon Academy, and his girlfriend expressed her belief that her ex would definitely not pass the next test for the quality of the magical beast's bloodline. Suddenly, an employee ran up to Mr. Chen as he announced the next test. Covering his face with his hand, the boy whispered that there was a slight glitch in the spiritual power meter. The candidate's final result was 1032. Frowning, the teacher realized that he was 2 units higher than Ninishin and ordered him not to tell anyone, who said that he understood everything. Turning to the student, the man announced that the second test was a test of the quality of the magical beast's bloodline. The youth raised his clenched palm when asked to summon the beast. Extending his palm forward, the hero shouted that it was Black Fang's turn. Magic waves spread across the square. The Owishers standing in the crowd opened their mouths. But a sleeping storm dog appeared in the press, which was immediately called the worst choice for a bloodline test. Who would even enter into a contract with such a creature now? Slapping his forehead, the teacher remembered that besides spiritual power, the quality of the bloodline was one of the decisive factors that limited the development of beast hunters. It was obvious that this dog's was extremely low. Coughing into his fist, the man began to say that he was very sorry, but his beast was not suitable. But suddenly, someone in the crowd tensed up and shouted that this was not a storm dog at all. A hellish storm wolf proudly stood in the circle, and no one could believe that this beast had an evolution path. The teacher scanned the beast, and was surprised to find that it had a second form of evolution. The man's gaze warmed. He looked at the confident youth, and admitted that this guy knew how to surprise. A bird flew over the square, and it was announced that candidate Sinyu had passed the test and was welcomed into the Azure Dragon Academy. A couple of spiteful critics tried to sneak away quietly. They could not believe that he had passed. Putting his hand in his pocket, the protagonist asked if the boy would not even say goodbye to his father. Pointing angrily at his rival, the rich man barked for him to know his place. He was not going to kneel and call him father, and he would not do anything to him. The young man frowned and called his pet. The scoundrel looked at the wolf in fear. The beast pinned the boy to the ground, and the hero asked what he would say now. Trembling with humiliation, the rich man apologized and called his rival father. Turning around, the newly minted trapper said that he could not have such a worthless son. Let him go. At that moment, Lin approached him and said that in fact, over the past 2.5 years she had fallen very much in love with him, and asked if they still had a chance to start all over again. But the young man passed by, answering that everything between them was already in the past. The girl fell to her knees, begging for forgiveness. She admitted that she was wrong. Heading down the street, the hero pulled out his phone, thinking that he needed to tell his sister that he entered the Azure Dragon Academy. He put the phone to his ear, saying that it was him. But he immediately frowned when he heard screams on the other end of the line, after which the connection was cut off. At this time, on the outskirts of the city, everything was burning at the farmer's market. People were running from the scene of the disaster, screaming about a monster. Someone was looking for their child. A little girl was crying in fear. The protagonist's sister hugged the baby and persuaded her not to be afraid. At that moment, a shadow covered them both. The girl turned around and saw a huge scorpion, whose sting was directed at her. The protagonist ran through the crowd, wondering what was happening here and where his sister was. Houses were engulfed in flames. Local residents were running away. A huge scorpion plunged its sting into the ground. Sinyu rushed forward with Black Fong. Bloody tears flowed from his eyes. The system asked if the user wanted to use the skill Bonds of Hell, Hell Howl. The boy opened his mouth wide and loudly confirmed it. The storm dog looked back. Its owner wondered why the skill was not working. The monster took out a sting from the ground. It approached the frightened girl. The boy's eyes widened in fear and remembered Ruyan. In his memory, the dragon opened its mouth. The hunter thought about how at that moment the man from the Azure Dragon Academy shouted something like a spell. The student stopped and decided to try to do the same. His dog increased in size. The wolf rushed forward. The protagonist thought about how at the beginning of this disaster, when heaven and earth were not yet separated, he made a pact, sealed it with his blood, and summoned spirits from the void. Sinyu raised his hand and wished for his blood to become payment, and his words to become bonds. A cloud of aura appeared in the mouth of Black Fong. A powerful beam of energy shot out and pierced the body of the scorpion. Looking at its corpse, the boy realized that he had killed the enemy and decided that this was his current strength. The young man opened his mouth in fear and remembered that his sister was still next to the monster. He ran up to her and asked if she was okay. The girl put her hands on his shoulders and asked what was wrong with him. The beast hunter apologized for coming so late and was glad that she was okay. The student smiled and told him that he had entered the Azure Dragon Academy. The storm dog jumped into his arms. The dog wagged its tail. The protagonist explained that it was his contract beast. The animal happily raised its paw and stuck out its tongue. The boy's eyes widened in shock when he saw that the monster was dead. Sinyu put his hands in his pockets and confirmed it. The woman extended her hand to her daughter and thanked the boys for saving her. The child rushed to her and asked where she had been. The boy approached the monster's body and offered to check it. The core of the magical beast was glittering inside. The young man picked it up and noticed that although it was only an initial stage core with a poison attribute, even this would help the Black Fong evolve. The beast hunter immediately threw it to his pet. The student smiled widely and shouted that the monster had been killed, so everyone was safe now. The locals immediately surrounded him and began to call him their hero. A little girl approached him and said that she wanted to become as strong as him. The protagonist patted her on the head and declared that she would definitely succeed. Moonlight was shining through a huge hole in the wall. Sinyu was sleeping peacefully on the bed. The girl approached him. She wordlessly opened her mouth. Her eyes lit up. A seal lit up on the boy's back. The huge dragon frowned angrily. The woman came into the kitchen and reported that the curse of the dragon rune was still in effect and the seal on the Dragon King's essence was intact. The girl frowned and asked why her brother was able to make a contract with a magical beast, since it made no sense. She gritted her teeth when someone asked her to keep a close eye on him. The woman frowned sternly and promised to continue to spy on him. The heroes stood on the platform of the Chifeng City Railway Station. Their parents handed them a basket of salted duck eggs and some gifts. The boys approached the train. The young man waved and promised to come visit them again during the holidays. The heroes entered the carriage and took their seats. A few hours later they looked up when they heard that magical beasts had been spotted on a section of the railway. They were warned that there might be some shaking. The train pulled onto a bridge. The driver reported that they had successfully passed the dangerous section and were on schedule. The beast hunter smiled and was glad that nothing had happened and that they were almost along. The girl reminded him that school would soon start and asked him not to be lazy. Suddenly, their carriage began to shake. The passengers asked what was going on. The student frowned menacingly when he heard that a flock of three-eyed giant monkeys had been spotted ahead. The people opened their mouths in fear and asked if they hadn't already passed the dangerous section. Cracks appeared on the ceiling of the carriage. The passengers did not understand what to do now and wondered if no one would help them. A monkey broke through the ceiling and jumped into the carriage. The woman jumped up and asked what her brother was going to do. The protagonist asked her to sit there and not stick her head out. His sister knelt down and tried to stop him. The monster jumped down right in front of Sinew. At that moment, the golden fox hit him with its tail. Yanran waved her hand, asking if he was just going to stand there and watch, and urged him to leave right now if he didn't want to die. The girl twirled her staff in her hands and used Thunder Flash. Her beast immediately rushed to attack. The guy's eyes widened in surprise and read that it was a three-tailed thunder fox. The beast jumped forward. The young man realized that in front of him was the daughter of the head of the Heaven Guild, judging by her spear and magical beast. The monster began to beat its chest with its fists. The passengers were happy that someone had come to save them. The beast hunter smiled and wondered if they were sure about this. The monkey appeared behind him. The student ordered everyone to leave the carriage immediately, and wondered how it was possible that there was only one monster if they lived in packs. The monster began to destroy everything in its path. The protagonist called on Black Fang and said that they must help the passengers. The woman pierced the enemy with a spear and noticed that his relatives had also entered the carriage. Two monkeys pounced on her from behind. Sinew stretched out his hand forward and used the spell bonds of hell. Dark chains immobilized the monsters. They fell to the floor. Yanran was surprised that there was another tamer of magical beasts among the passengers. Holding her fox in her arms, she thanked her comrade for his help. The guy said that everyone would have done the same in his place. The young man frowned suspiciously and noticed that something was wrong with her pet. The girl's eyes widened in surprise. The system reported that her animal suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder. The Beastmaster opened his mouth wide and suggested that her fox had been becoming overly active during battles lately, and then becoming very lethargic afterwards, and the woman asked how he knew that. The student scratched his cheek and realized that he couldn't tell her the truth about the system, and explained that he had read in a disease manual that three-tailed thunder foxes were very likely to suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. The tamer slapped him on the back and thanked him, and understood why her pet hadn't been smiling much lately. Yanran hugged her colleague and called him her little brother. His sister was watching them from the side. She had a very menacing look. She stood between the heroes and apologized. The girl hugged the protagonist's arm and called him her brother. The daughter of the head of heaven frowned sternly. The girl immediately hugged Sinew's other arm and asked if that was true. The women began to pull him towards themselves, calling him their brother. The boy closed his eyes in displeasure and thought that they would simply tear him in half. People gathered in the central square of the Azure Dragon Academy. Lin Sung, holding a microphone in his hands, greeted the freshmen. The young man stood in the center of the crowd. The dean asked everyone to be patient and wait for the director. The beast hunter remembered how he waved his hand to Yanran and said goodbye to her. He frowned and was glad that he was finally at the academy. The huge lion opened its mouth wide and roared. The guys smiled happily when they saw it. Ryan flew over the square on her pet. The predator spread its giant wings. The girl jumped off it. The man handed her the microphone and asked her to say a few words for the freshmen. The student, shocked, wide-eyed, realized that she was the one who defeated the shadow magic dragon, and was surprised that she had such an important post in this academy. With a stern frown, the woman congratulated everyone on entering their academy and wanted to remind them of one important thing. The principal opened her mouth wide and shouted that it did not matter to her what family they were from, whether they were poor or rich. Frowning furiously, Ryan declared that they all had to obey her rules, and especially emphasized the 8th rule. The children's eyes widened and wondered what this rule was. With a wave of her hand, the girl explained that if there was a conflict between students, they had to resolve it through a duel in the arena, regardless of who was right and who was wrong, and added that the loser would have to apologize to the winner. With a threatening frown, the protagonist decided that this rule might seem harsh, but in fact, It prevented rich heirs from using their power to oppress the weak, and he realized that even ordinary guys could defend their honor. 2 hours later, a scream was heard outside the office windows. The boy pointed at Sinyu and said that he couldn't believe that he was in the same class as the very same monster whose spiritual power was comparable to Ningxuang. The boy turned away and tried to ignore him. Qingyan gritted his teeth angrily and ordered everyone to sit down because the class had already started. The man placed his hands on the lectern. The student sat down at his desk and said that he would always follow his classmate from now on. The teacher wrote something on the board and asked the children to remain silent in the classroom. Turning to them, the supervisor hoped that they would all achieve great things in the Azure Dragon Academy, and asked them to open the first chapter of the illustrated handbook of magical beasts. There were various monsters depicted there. The strength of a magical beast was determined by 2 factors, the first of which was form. An image of the black fang and its evolution appeared. At the moment, 5 stages of the beast's development were known. The first 3 were the initial, mature, and full. Then the fire fox Yenren appeared. It had a transcendental form. The next one was the headmaster's lion. It was the form of the beast king. The 8 stones glowed. The next factor was the quality of the bloodline. According to the records, the blood of the magical beasts was classified from the lowest to the highest. The animals ran after each other. Their attributes could affect each other and suppress other attributes. Each stone was associated with a different animal. Based on the 5 basic attributes, others could appear, such as the sand attribute or lightning attribute. There were hieroglyphs on the blackboard. The protagonist fell fast asleep on the desk. Qingyan threw chalk at him and ordered him to wake up. Sinyu raised his head. The man was indignant that he had the audacity to fall asleep in his class, and asked what the demonic lizard's weakness was. The teacher gritted his teeth and said that he should pack his things and leave if he did not know the answer to this question. The curator looked at the student and repeated it again. The monster's green eyes lit up. The boy looked at his hand and said that his weakness was the poison sac under his stomach. The boys stared at him in amazement. The teacher asked what area the ice giant crocodile usually lived in. The boy said that they lived in the southern part of the Dragon Country, near Lake Shuangjian and the subglacial Kunlun Falls. Putting his hand to his chin, Qingyan decided to test further and asked what he should do if he encountered a sky-tearing demon tiger in the wild. The beast hunter smiled and said that he would clamp his ID tag between his teeth and hide in the shadows. The man raised an eyebrow in surprise and asked why. Raising his index finger, the student replied that it was a mutated species of the king of beasts, that only a person of at least 6 stars could fight, adding that the only option for beginners was to prepare for death. The protagonist raised his hand and explained that he would take the token in his teeth so that his body could be identified, and lie down somewhere in the shade to prevent the tissue from decomposing too quickly. The teacher clenched his teeth tensely. Slamming his hand on the table, the curator said that this answer was beyond praise, and asked how he knew the information in the next 3 editions of the textbook. Sinyu picked up the books and said that he had already studied them all. His classmates looked at him in amazement, wondering how they were supposed to keep up with him. Coming out from behind the lectern, the teacher encouraged the students to engage in self-study and asked the student to leave the office with him. The heroes found themselves in the corridor. The guy apologized and promised not to sleep in class anymore. Qingyan said that this was not the case at all. The man scratched his beard and was surprised that his student had learned the entire course of theory in just half a lesson. The young man explained that this was all thanks to his talent, and called him an excellent specialist. Closing his eyes, the teacher asked him not to flatter him and suggested that his comrade move on to more advanced material. The curator handed him a pass to the Azure Dragon Academy library. The trapper looked at him in amazement. The teacher explained that with its help one can freely visit the library and take books for free. Qingyan put his hand on his shoulder and said that he had nothing more to teach him. There was a long table with chairs in the library. The student picked up a book. He sat on the floor and began to read. There were several more books on the floor. Wanyan walked into the office and declared that this library belonged only to him today. The other students ran away when they saw him. The boy extended his hands to the girls and asked them to stay so that they could study together. The girls trembled and asked him to let them go. The protagonist slammed the book shut. Sinyu threw it at the villain and asked him to shut up. The bully grabbed his head and asked who did this. His accomplice decided that their classmate clearly did not know his place. The guy approached him and asked if he really had no conscience at all. The bully wondered if he really thought of himself as some kind of hero. The young man looked back when the student asked him to leave because he was the son of the vice dean, and it was better not to mess with him. The beast hunter grinned and realized where so much pride came from. Wanyan said that he was glad that everything became clear to him. The boy lowered his thumb and ordered him to kneel down and beg for forgiveness. The boy kicked him in the groin, causing the bully to turn blue. He fell to the floor, and his friends asked if he was okay. The scoundrel raised his hand and asked if his classmate didn't understand who he was dealing with. Clenching his fist, the bully asked if he thought he could handle the consequences, and promised to make sure he didn't leave this library alive. Lying on the floor, Wanyan declared that he would show him who the real owner of the Azure Dragon Academy was. Someone entered the library and was outraged by his arrogant tone. Ruyan frowned and said that she didn't know he was the boss here. The boy narrowed his eyes in displeasure, surprised that she had come so quickly. The girl looked down at him and reminded him that if a conflict arose between the students, they must resolve it as stated in the 8th article of the Academy's charter. The book opened. It was written that if a conflict arose, the students must resolve it through a duel in the arena. In the middle of the city there was a huge coliseum. A first-year student shouted that the duel would begin very soon and that they could not miss it. The young man smiled widely. The guys wondered if their classmate had a chance to win. Qingyan looked at him sternly and wished that the student would not let him down. The host of the duel raised his hand and announced that the fight would begin soon. The bully shook his opponent's hand and decided to show him what happens to those who dare to go against him. The beast hunter smiled widely and reminded him that he could still just ask for forgiveness. The scoundrel frowned with displeasure. Bright rays of sunlight illuminated the arena. The host announced the beginning of the fight. A magic circle appeared under the bully's feet. A giant leopard immediately emerged from it. The student's eyes turned bloodshot. Icy energy swirled around his opponent, and a window appeared describing his pet. The protagonist's eyes widened and he realized that he had 2 attributes at once. Sinyu clenched his fist and declared that it was his turn. A black fang appeared on the battlefield. The boy opened his mouth in surprise and noticed that this beast looked very impressive. His friend said that the 6-legged leopard was definitely inferior in beauty. What was happening in the arena was broadcast to the magic ball. Ruyan crossed her arms over her chest and thought that she had never seen such a beast before. The girl frowned and realized that it looked like an evolved form of a storm dog. Dark energy swirled around the ball. The woman remembered that people always believed that it had no path of evolution, and wondered how the guy managed to do this. Wanyan held out his hand, shouting that he would not be intimidated by such tricks, and urged his opponent to begin preparing an apology. The leopard cut through the air with its claws as its master used a deep freeze spell. The youth waved his hand and commanded the dog to use rapid dashes. The dog ran forward, dodging the ice blocks. The wolf approached the leopard. The big cat immediately jumped back. The monster struck from behind. Smoke rose around Black Fang. Qingyan put his hand to his chin, recalling that the hellish storm dog had the attributes of fire and wind, while the 6-legged leopard had the attributes of wind and ice, and concluded that he would not be able to overcome the advantage of the elements. The magical beast tried to strike the dog. Opening his mouth wide, the bully declared that he would destroy the enemy's pet, and used an ice flurry. A wave of ice magic burst out of the monster's mouth, and immediately immobilized the dog. Black Fang was frozen. The wolf tensely clenched his teeth. Wanyan, looking at the protagonist, turned to him. The guy, raising his palm, exclaimed that very soon his beast would simply freeze to death. Ruyan, lowering her eyebrows, wondered what Sinyu would do. It was clear that many people frowned angrily. The protagonist smiled and clarified whether he was so sure about this. A moment later, the hunter called his pet and told him to hunt in the darkness. Black Fang was inside the block of ice. A second later, the beast disappeared somewhere. Qingyan, through the sweat on his face, realized that this was an attribute of darkness. The girl, biting her lips, muttered that it turned out that Sinyu's beast had 3 of them. Wanyan shook his head and asked where he had gone, adding that he had become a shadow, and it was no wonder that the ice could not hold him. Suddenly, a menacing dog appeared behind the guy. His pet waved his paw and repelled the attack. The protagonist clenched his fists and shouted that he should show what he was capable of. Opening his mouth wide, the protagonist ordered Black Fang to use the Oblivion Claw skill. Suddenly, the beast pushed off the ground. An unusual force swirled around the ice leopard, and its owner said that he needed to fight back and not just stand there. The director of the Azure Dragon Academy, crossing her elbows, said that the Oblivion Claw was a skill of the darkness attribute, and when it hits the target, it causes paralysis for 3 seconds. Sinyu, stretching out his palm, said that it was time to finish. The protagonist told his pet to use Hell Howl, after which a bright light appeared in the beast's mouth. A moment later, a magical beam pierced the enemy. The ice leopard began to wave its paws in bewilderment. Suddenly, the host raised the protagonist's hand and exclaimed that this was a victory. The audience joyfully opened their jaws. Wanyan, falling to the ground, said that this was impossible. The protagonist, shuffling his legs, explained that he had lost. Ruyan, approaching the boys, said that now, according to the rules of the school, he needed to apologize properly. Lowering her eyebrows, the girl added that it was time to stop this farce. The young man bared his teeth angrily. Leaning forward, Wanyan apologized to the protagonist. The principal, putting her hand on her side, exclaimed that it was a wonderful duel, and Sinyu was already the 2nd student who impressed her, after which the guy thought that he would still pay for this. Ruyan, smiling broadly, said that she was looking forward to his performance at the ranking tournament for freshmen, which would take place in 3 days. The protagonist, scratching the back of his head, thanked her for the praise and asked who was first then. The director of the Azure Dragon Academy, looking ahead, answered that it was a genius girl with a spiritual power level above the 1000th, and her name was Ningxuang. Sinyu, lowering his eyebrows, muttered that it was her again, and they talked about her at the entrance exams. Ruyan, widening her eyes, said that she knew how to appreciate talent, so she could take this spatial ring as a reward. The protagonist was very surprised, which is why he opened his mouth wide and thought that you can store anything in it. A magical artifact was visible, and the system reported that it was high-tech equipment created to store various things, including food and supplements for summoned beasts, as well as the magical cores of monsters. The protagonist, smiling, replied that he would gladly accept this reward then. Taking the ring, the trapper thanked the director. The daytime sky appeared. Sinyu, standing at the gates of the Azure Dragon Academy, thought that his sister was probably already worried, so he needed to go home as soon as possible. The protagonist quickly walked forward. Suddenly, the girl hit his stomach. The protagonist, grabbing her by the shoulder, asked if she was okay, to which he received a positive answer. The beast trapper stroked the child's head and said that next time she should look around, after which he added that he could run home. The girl, hugging the guy, explained that she had nowhere to go, and asked if he could shelter her. After some time, the family dormitory appeared, and Ruashio exclaimed that she had just arrived, and here this is already happening. Pulling her brother by the ear, the girl asked if he had kidnapped the child. A large TV was visible, and the young man said that of course not, and let him explain everything, to which his sister clarified that he was going to explain if he had already done everything. The sun's rays illuminated the room. A few minutes later, Sinyu stretched out his palm and said that it was like that, and Sherman was afraid of magical beasts, so she couldn't become a trapper, and at home she was constantly bullied, so she ran away. Lowering his eyebrows, the protagonist said that he decided to bring her here to help her overcome her fear. The girl, with wide eyes, asked Ruashio if she could stay with them, since she didn't want to go back home, to which she received a positive answer. Suddenly, the girl looked at the child thoughtfully. The protagonist's sister, turning her gaze to the side, asked her brother to remember that he should not date a girl from the Yi family. After a while, the Azure Dragon Academy and many guys appeared. Biting his lips, the trapper wondered whether he should date a girl from the Yi family, and why his sister even brought it up. Shinyu, with his mouth wide open, asked what he was muttering, and whether it was something about the Yi family, and also said that teacher Qingyan said that in this lesson they would be determining roles on the battlefield, and then asked if he happened to know what that was. Sinyu, scratching his head, clarified whether it was true that he was talking about roles in a group, and said that most often, hunters act in a team, and their roles and responsibilities differ. Introducing the red bird, the protagonist said that the shooter has long-range skills, which allows him to destroy enemies from a distance. A formidable bear appeared, and the protagonist continued that the mage has well-developed mass control skills, giving a significant advantage in a team fight. A healthy beast with spikes was visible, and the guy explained that the tank has strong defense and skills that restore health, so he is a shield for the rest of the team. The eyes of the magical cat were shining brightly, and the young man added that the assassin was endowed with high maneuverability and the ability to finish off enemies, and his task was to attack those who could barely stand on their feet. Introducing the unusual butterfly, the hunter said that the support was famous for its strengthening skills, which imposed many positive effects on all team members. Opening his jaw, Shinyu exclaimed that this is what it meant, and asked Sinyu what role he thought his butterfly was best suited for. Suddenly the teacher, stretching out his finger, asked to stop chatting in his class, to which his request was obeyed. The man, lowering his eyebrows, explained that now, according to the ordinal numbers, let them call the beasts to take the test, because in this way they will determine their role in the group. Songhu menacingly clenched his fists, and it was said that his beast had powerful defense, so he was now a tank. A butterfly appeared behind Shin, and Qingyan said that his pet had mass skills based on the water element, so he was a mage. A second later, the protagonist began to step forward. The teacher, with his mouth slightly open, explained that the first test was an attack check, and asked if he was ready. The protagonist, raising his finger, replied that he was always ready. A moment later, the storm dog appeared. The trapper ordered his beast to use the Hell Howl skill, after which a powerful explosion was heard. The sign said that this was a triple critical hit. A 4-digit number appeared on the screen. The guys, opening their jaws, were very surprised by such a blow. Qian, raising the corners of his lips, thought that usually the attack of a novice trapper fluctuates between 500 and 1,500 points, so he did not expect that the hellish storm wolf could inflict more than 2,000 with triple critical damage. Sinu's eyes widened as he asked the teacher if the attack test had been passed and if he was suited to be an assassin. The teacher lowered his eyebrows and told him to continue, muttering that he would see what his potential was. In the range test, a bright flash was visible, and Shinyu exclaimed that it was almost 800 meters, and clarified that maybe the protagonist would be more suited to be a shooter. In the defense test, a magical barrier appeared around Black Fang, and the boy was very surprised that he had even withstood the attack of the teacher's ice-armored turtle, so the hunter was a real monster. The control test was taking place, in which the storm dog was visible, and the young man asked if he could be a mage. The teacher held a tablet in his hand, conducting a reinforcement test, and said that according to the data analysis, any beast within 10 meters of the Hellstorm Wolf would receive a 30% increase in rage, 10% in rage, and 10% in movement speed. The boy opened his mouth in alarm and asked what role the protagonist would have then, since any of them would suit him, so it was hard to choose, and then thought that this youth was so good that he had nothing to say. The man raised his finger and said that in fact, in addition to these 5, there was another special role. The protagonist put his hand in his pocket, and the teacher exclaimed that this student had the role of a generalist. The boy widened his eyes and clarified what exactly that meant. The man raised his finger and explained that this was the name for a beast hunter whose summoned creature was equally suited for all roles, and then added that then the beast hunter would be awarded the special role. Qin Yan smiled and pointed out that it was obvious that Sinyu was the only generalist in their group. The protagonist raised his eyebrows in admiration. The student, pursing his lips, asked how his classmate had managed to become so cool, and the other exclaimed that he was also interested. Scratching the back of his head, the hunter said that he was not that cool. Putting his fingers to his chin, the curator noted that there was no need to rejoice prematurely, because universal students are rare, but they still exist, after which he added that the data on their flow had not yet been fully processed, but at the moment they knew not only about Sinyu. Silhouettes of students were visible, and the teacher said that in the second group there were Yeninshan and Tianjun, and in the third Muruin and Xuanqing. The man said that the guys needed to continue trying hard, to which they enthusiastically widened their eyes. A little later, the protagonist was walking down the street. The protagonist smirked as he thought about how classes were finally over and he needed to buy some Black Fang supplements to prepare for the newbie ranking competition. Suddenly, a crowd of guys appeared in front of him, and one of them asked him where he was going in such a hurry. The hunter frowned and asked what they wanted. The bully smiled evilly and asked if he had never heard of their Black Tiger Guild, then yelled that he had asked for it. Pointing his finger forward, Wanyan asked why Lei was even talking to him, then ordered him to break his leg to see if he could still be so brazen, to which he agreed. Clenching his fists, the guy asked if Sinyu had dared to cross the young master, then yelled that it was his own fault. The students' uniforms showed badges, and the protagonist noticed that they were all 3rd and 4th level hunters. The protagonist pursed his lips and asked if they weren't ashamed to attack someone who was only a 1st level hunter. Wanyan opened his mouth wide and asked if he was offended and suggested that he cry if that was the case, while his partner asked the master not to worry, as he would deal with him himself. The boy released his pet forward. The thunder tiger was surrounded by a magical aura, and the master ordered it to attack. Suddenly, Black Fang attacked the animal from the side. A red cross appeared on the storm wolf's forehead. The tiger fell to the ground. Lei gritted his teeth and thought about how the young master hadn't warned him that this boy's beast was so strong, but he didn't understand how he could resist his thunder tiger, which was at a full stage, when it only looked like a mature form. The two magical pets clashed in battle. Frowning, the bully decided to see if some weakling of the 1st level would be stronger than him. Clenching his fist, the youth exclaimed that the elite of the Black Tiger Guild of the 3rd and 4th levels would be stronger. The animals bared their teeth viciously, and suddenly a voice said that he had always been curious about something. The boy's eyes widened in alarm. Yanran put her hands on her hips and exclaimed that she had always been curious about who would win, the Black Tiger Guild or her Heaven Guild. Sinyu turned towards the girl. Raising his eyebrows in excitement, the protagonist called out to the girl. The hooligans exclaimed that something bad had happened and they were surrounded, and raising their eyebrows, they saw that it was the Heaven Guild in front of them. The boy lowered the corners of his lips and thought that Heaven was the 2nd guild in the Longing City Trapper rankings, and even the Storm Guild, which was in 1st place, did not dare to conflict with them. Lei folded his arms and asked what brought Miss Yenran here. The girl hugged Sinyu and replied that if she hadn't passed by, she would never have known what the esteemed member of the Black Tigers Guild was going to do to her dear brother, to which he muttered that she was the only daughter of the guild leader. Frowning, the girl said that the main character was her adopted brother, whom she recognized on her own. The beast hunter exclaimed with her eyes widened that if anyone decided to offend him, they would have to deal with her first. A drop of sweat appeared on the guy's face. Magical animals appeared behind the heroes, and the daughter of the Heaven Guild leader exclaimed that they would have to deal with the entire Heaven Guild as well. They closed his eyes and said that there had been a big misunderstanding. Pointing his finger at his partner, the young man shouted that everything happened because of him, and that this guy hired them to cause trouble for her brother. Wanyan lowered his eyebrows and muttered that he didn't know that Sinyu was her brother. Yenren folded her hands and pointed out that the Black Tiger Guild master knew what to do, to which he exclaimed that of course he did. The young man opened his mouth wide and began to shout that the trapper dared to offend the young master, and ordered his partners to punish him for it, to which he couldn't understand how they could do this to him, since he hired them himself. The Sky Guild skyscraper was visible, and the girl asked how the protagonist had met them, to which he explained that he wanted to buy tonics for Black Fong, but no one knew that he would be so lucky. The guildmaster's daughter extended her palm and said that they could have just asked her for it, since their organization specialized in this. Smiling, the trapper noted that if he ever needed tonics, he could just say so and his sister would give him everything for free, to which he admitted that he did not expect her to be so generous, and it was immediately obvious that she was the only and beloved daughter of the guild leader. A sports ground was visible, and the girl said that this was their training room, equipped with the most advanced exercise machines that help the beasts master various skills as quickly as possible. The heroes stood in the corridor, and Yenren said that they had a recreation area here, where the trappers could relax after a mission, and there was even golf, a sauna, and many other entertainments. A huge screen and seats appeared, and the daughter of the guild leader said that this was a conference room where they held meetings on important issues and made plans for further development. There were medical devices by the wall, and the girl explained that this was a medical area with advanced equipment and a wide range of medicines. Pointing her finger at the boy, the trapper stated that the most important thing was that their doctors were highly qualified and provided the best services for treating injured animals, which surprised the protagonist greatly. Hugging his sister, the protagonist asked if he could join their guild and become a doctor. A woman with dark lips appeared and gave a negative answer. Lowering her eyebrows, Luwa stated that it did not matter who the person was or where they were from, and clarified whether the young man really thought that with his age and experience he could get a job in their guild, because it was even ridiculous. Extending her palm to the side, Yenin explained that this was the one she had told her aunt about earlier, and it was this guy who helped her back on the train, her adopted brother. A worker burst into the room and cried out that several seriously injured animals had just been delivered to them. The deputy guild leader turned around and asked him to calm down and ask other branches for help, and then asked if Yenren could handle the matter. The beasts were lying meekly on the medical equipment, and the young man exclaimed that there was no time left, and they were bleeding heavily, so they would not last long. Sinyu put his hand to his chest and said that in that case he would help himself, and noted that there was not a second to lose. Doctors appeared in the corridor of the Heaven Guild. The men were rolling the beast on a couch and shouting that they needed to take Hornstiff to the third operating room, because it was bleeding heavily, and to quickly bring extra blood bags. The young man's eyes bulged and he ordered everyone to quickly move aside. With his mouth wide open, the young man asked for his beast to be saved. The men ran after each other and said that the animal had already lost a lot of blood and needed to stop it as quickly as possible, and the clamp was not helping, so they needed to prepare medicine, but the bleeding was not stopping. Lowering his head, Sinyu exclaimed that the usual methods were not working. The protagonist frowned in confusion. The horned owl was lying on the couch, and the system reported its characteristics. There was a hole in the beast's body, and the protagonist said that he had encountered the queen of poisonous bees, and the greenish liquid was a special poison that interfered with regeneration. Opening his mouth wide, the trapper cried out that he could stop the bleeding of his battle beast, but he did not know if the owner would allow it. The guy raised his eyebrows in alarm and shouted that he had no other choice in this situation, and asked his horned owl to help. The protagonist pointed his fingers out and explained that he needed to mix 1 stalk of heavenly grass with a purple crystal flower to make 20 grams of the medicinal mixture, then add the core of a mature magical beast with a poison attribute, and boil for 5 minutes, to which the doctors noted that all of these ingredients were highly toxic, and it looked like they were going to put out a fire with gasoline. The protagonist closed his lips and ordered that the medicine be prepared immediately according to his recipe, otherwise they would just waste time and this horned frog would die. The owner of the beast shouted that they needed to do as this guy said, when suddenly the doctors rushed forward. 5 minutes later, the doctor brought a flask in his hand and said that everything was ready. The guy began to put a glove on his palm. The young man began to open the potion. At the same second, Sinyu was smearing the edges of the hole with medicine. A moment later, the battle beast raised its head up. The wound began to heal, and the protagonist exclaimed that the bleeding had stopped and the healing process had begun. The owner of the Hornstiff was happy that his pet was alive, and the protagonist smiled and asked if the deputy was satisfied with the work she had done. Lu Wei extended her hand forward and exclaimed that this was beyond praise, and said that she had to admit that she had rushed to conclusions about him, after which she asked to officially invite him to the guild as a special pharmacist. The guy enthusiastically raised his eyebrows and happily agreed. Frowning, Ruoshua clarified whether her brother wanted to say that he was late because he was signing a labor contract with the Heaven Guild. The young man, opening his mouth in alarm, answered in the affirmative. The girl closed her eyes and muttered that someone had completely forgotten about his own sister after finding a rich woman, to which he cried out that he would never do that to her. Holding a pillow in her hands, Sherman asked if a pharmacist was something edible, to which he replied that it was not quite so, but since he now worked for the Heaven Guild, he would be paid well. Raising his fist in the air, Sinyu exclaimed that this weekend he would even be able to take them to a restaurant, which the child was very happy about. Wanyan was lying on his bed in his ward. With his mouth wide open, the guy was indignant that he would never forget the humiliation that happened because of the main character. Folding his arms, the man declared that his son was a worthless weakling, to which the child said that his father should help him. Dongxing looked down and asked if his son had lost to some small-town bumpkin, then exclaimed that the boy had disgraced not only himself, but the entire family. Wiping away his tears with his fist, the young man explained that the sinew beast had 3 attributes at once. Frowning, Wan Yen pointed out that besides, the Heaven Guild was behind him, so he had no chance of taking revenge, to which his father replied that their family was no match for the Heaven Guild. Adjusting his glasses, the Vice Dean said that if the protagonist accidentally died at the hands of the magical beast during the trials on Mount Yunnan, it would have nothing to do with them. The forest on the mountain appeared. Standing in front of the huge screen, the man announced that today, all the newly arrived students would face another test, which would be broadcast in real time on all the screens. Holding the microphone in his hand, Dongxing explained that the bracelets they wore would record the number of magical beasts they killed, as well as keep a log of their combat actions. A grading scale was visible, and the Vice Dean explained that killing up to 10 beasts would result in AC grade, up to 30 would result in AB grade, up to 50 would result in an A grade, up to 80 would result in an S grade, and any number greater would result in a plus. Turning her head, Ruyan asked the man to announce the exceptional talents among this year's new recruits before the test began, and the student pointed out that it was said that Ningxuang had won first place in the test last year. Spreading his fingers, the Vice Dean announced that according to the results of the entrance tests, they could single out 3 exceptional talents this year. The first of them was Yang Shuo, who stood with his hands folded. Another Xinxin, who widened her eyes, and the other students did not understand how there were 2 all-round talents in the first grade. And the third was Sun Yu, who thought about the Murong family, putting his fingers to his chin. A map appeared, and the protagonist thought about how there were 4 great dynasties of beast hunters in their country, including the Yi family, the Li family, the Murong family, and the Shangguan family. In the broadcasting studio of the Azure Dragon Academy, there was a man. Yang Shu held a microphone in his hand and greeted all the viewers, and then introduced himself as the host of this test. The director of the academy smiled and clarified how many magical beasts did Dongxing think Sun Yu could kill. The man lowered his eyebrows and said that he thought no more than 50, and he still had some to spare. The teacher lowered the corners of his lips and said that he categorically disagreed, because if you take into account the talent of the main character, he will be able to kill at least 80, when suddenly he was asked what will happen if this is a mistaken opinion. Putting her palm to her cheek, Ruyan expressed the idea that this guy will perform a real miracle and break Ningxuang's record. The newcomers began to enter the territory, when suddenly they were told that the test was officially starting. The woman frowned, and the host said that in less than half an hour, a student from the 2nd grade successfully killed a short-tailed bear, and the total number of magical beasts killed has already exceeded 10. The guy opened his mouth in fear, and the commentator congratulated the student from the 5th grade on killing the 20th magical beast. Yang Shuo sat on a stone, and the observer said that after just an hour of the test, he managed to kill 43 enemies, and the audience fiercely supported the guy. Frowning, Yang Shu exclaimed that the White Griffin was the only beast in this trial that had reached its full form, and its spatial dash ability not only instantly shortened the distance to the target, but also strengthened any attack by adding a piercing effect. The bird grabbed the snake with its beak, and the host noted that although the silver-fanged snake had exceptional recovery abilities, it was unlucky enough to meet someone who completely nullified its regeneration, and the fate of this beast was already sealed. The bird tore the snake's body apart, when suddenly its master told it to stop torturing it. Yang Shuo stretched out his hand and decided to extract the magic core from it and move on. In the ranking table, the guy overtook Sun Yu. The host suggested leaving the young master of the Murong family and checking on his sister, who was standing on the cliff at that time. The girl's pet bared its teeth viciously, and the announcer explained that her beast was a bone-winged wyvern with a legendary bloodline, and also the only undead beast in this trial. The huge lion opened its mouth wide, and Yang Shu explained that the bloodthirsty lion was a mature stage 2 magical beast with an epic bloodline, and its attacks dealt 5 times the damage, but when it encountered the bone-winged wyvern, it could only accept its fate. Clenching his fist, the announcer pointed out that if Xinxin managed to kill this lion, the total number of victims would be 51. With the corners of his lips down, Yang Shuo did not understand whether his sister would be the one to take first place in this trial. Frowning, he noticed that someone had overtaken his sister. A moment ago, a girl and a lion were standing on the cliff. The pet of the youngest daughter of the Murong family released a stream of magic from its mouth. The student grinned and thought that she had almost done it. Suddenly, Xinxin's eyes widened as Sun Yu ordered the pet to attack. The black fang ran forward and released the claws of the underworld. The defeated bloodthirsty lion lay on the slope of Mount Yunnan. Smiling, the protagonist thanked the girl for distracting the monster. Xinxin's lips turned down, and she remained silent. Pointing at the screen, the host exclaimed that this was a very unexpected turn of events, because this guy was clearly not lacking in cunning, and no matter how they hid, they still could not escape the real genius of hidden attacks, who stole the beast from a classmate and topped the table. The sinister beast appeared, and Yanxu noted that it was too early to relax, because the three-eyed magic ant had just appeared. The protagonist frowned, and the man said that even through the screen he could feel the danger emanating from the animal. The girl's eyes widened in alarm, and the commentator did not understand which of them would dare to challenge such a ferocious creature. The black fong began to release magical streams from its mouth, and the man noted that Sinyu was the first to attack, and also explained that the three-eyed ant is known for its durable shell. Red rays pierced the body of the beast, and the commentator exclaimed that the Hellwolf's fire ignored armor and still dealt damage to this formidable monster. Clenching his fist, the guy asked his pet to finish off the enemy. Using the Hellhowl spell, the storm dog released a flurry of flames forward. Shinshin also decided to join the game, when suddenly her bone-wing wyvern used sound waves and did not allow the Hellwolf to finish off the enemy, causing him to fall. The ant fell to the ground, and the host noted that the girl did this in order to immediately use necrotic flame and become a three-eyed ant herself. There was a bright crystal on the ground. The youngest daughter of the Murong family reached out to grab the magic stone. The protagonist came up from behind and admitted that he did not think that his dear classmate was so vindictive. Spreading his fingers, Yanxu exclaimed that the situation was getting even more heated, and at this point, both students were tied and shared first place. A waterfall appeared, and the commentator announced that at the same time, there was less than an hour left until the end of the test, but the audience could only wait for the outcome to find out who would ultimately win. A porcupine was wandering around on the rocks, and the protagonist asked the pet to get ready. The storm dog bared its teeth. Shinshin folded her arms, and the man noticed that she was snatching from Sinyu again. The protagonist, with his hands down, was silent, and the host suggested that wherever the guy went, his vengeful rival immediately appeared next to him and took away his prey. With his mouth wide open, Yanxu exclaimed that over the past half hour, Shinshin had confidently secured first place by killing monsters, which Sinyu found. Closing his eyes, the protagonist wondered if this justified her behavior, although he stole one beast from her, to which she was indignant, and the host asked if the girl would be able to increase the gap even more, and the guy would catch up with her. The student lowered the corners of her lips, and the audience said that she had an offended look, and someone praised her. The protagonist said that he would no longer give in to her, when suddenly the commentator frowned and noted that the young man had been holding back all this time. The magical beasts ran forward, and the man said that there was even less than half an hour left, so it was unknown whether he would be able to return to first place. The protagonist saddled his pet, and the host announced that the minutes were ticking, and the number of monsters they had killed had already broken all records. The hellish storm dog bared its teeth viciously. Shinshin flew overhead. The X-winged wyvern opened its mouth, and its owner realized that her opponent would not be able to get around her in the air. The girl leaned over and remained silent. The protagonist turned around, when suddenly his classmate shouted that he was a scoundrel. Raising his hand, the protagonist declared that there was less than a minute left, and she would no longer be able to defeat him, and Yanxu declared that if nothing unexpected happened, this guy would take first place. The young man opened his mouth in alarm, and the girl called him a scoundrel, to which he clarified whether this was the only word she knew. The magical beast clenched its jaws. The heroes approached the monster, who was hiding in the stones. Sinyu looked away, when suddenly the commentator did not understand what was happening, and how a fully developed magical beast of the third form appeared here. The protagonist jumped on the body of the pet. The magical monster pounced on the participants of the test. The protagonist's eyes widened in surprise. The boy held out his palm and shouted that things were bad. His classmate raised her eyebrows in fear and started calling him. The boy grabbed a branch on the cliff with his hands. The youngest daughter of the Murong family reached down and asked for his hand. Wanyan appeared in the bushes and the protagonist didn't know if he was there again. Suddenly, the branch started to crack. Shinshin opened her mouth in alarm and called out to the protagonist. The academy members were sitting in the broadcast studio. The teacher frowned and said that he would personally go and rescue the students, to which the principal remarked that there was no need to worry so much, because these students were hers too and she would not allow anything to happen to them. Turning away, the man exclaimed that he would immediately activate the emergency rescue program through the security service. Dongshin grinned and thought about how he was a genius, and just a small trick allowed him to send Sinyu to the realm of the dead. At the foot of the mountain, a forest appeared. Opening his mouth, the protagonist did not understand whether he was still alive. In his memories, the protagonist saw Wanyan in the bushes. Scratching his head, the guy exclaimed that this hooligan again, and this time he would definitely have to pay. Turning around, the young man began to call his pet. Upset, raising his eyebrows, the protagonist asked if the storm dog had offered his body to save him. In the rays of teleportation, a flask with medicine appeared. Pouring the liquid into the wolf's mouth, the protagonist asked him to drink it to feel better. The clouds thickened and turned gray. Lowering his eyebrows, the guy noticed that it began to rain. Lowering the corners of his lips, the young man suggested that his pet find a place to hide. After some time, Sinyu entered the cave. The protagonist raised his eyebrows and wondered when it would all end. The protagonist pressed his lips together, thinking that his sister must be very worried. Remembering Shinshin, who had extended her hand to help, the guy wondered how she was. Suddenly, a shoe broke a branch. Looking away, Sunyu did not understand if there was anyone else in the cave. At that very moment, someone grabbed the protagonist by the neck. Frowning, the girl exclaimed that the man had seen the Empress's face and now he would have to kill him. The protagonist angrily clenched his teeth. The system reported that the nine-tailed fox was in front of him, when suddenly she widened her eyes, and the guy realized who it was in front of him. Opening her mouth in alarm, the half-beast admitted that she hadn't expected a human to know who she was, while the boy thought that it wouldn't help, and that he didn't stand a chance against a monster of that level. Gritting her teeth, the Beast King form suggested that he definitely couldn't be left alive, when suddenly the protagonist asked to wait. Clenching her jaw, the protagonist asked if it was true that she had been wounded by a pure-blooded dragon, and would die in literally half an hour without treatment. The girl lowered her eyebrows in confusion. Closing her eyes, the nine-tailed fox asked how he knew about this, and he decided that this was his chance. A magical seal appeared on the boy's hand. The girl began to cover her face from the bright glow. The Beast King form put her hands in front of her head. Grabbing her neck, the boy clarified whether this detail could have escaped him, since he realized who the stranger was. The system reported that the fox was seriously injured and would die in half an hour without treatment, when suddenly the half-beast put her fingers to her chest, and Sunyu thought that although he did not understand where the pure-blooded dragon, whose species was considered extinct 300 years ago, came from, but first he needed to stabilize her condition. The protagonist frowned and exclaimed that he could save her. Rubbing her mouth with her hand, the nine-tailed fox muttered that she was just a pathetic one-star beast hunter in front of her, and asked if he could do it. Putting her palm on her side, the girl said that these wounds were inflicted by a pure-blooded dragon, and even the most outstanding doctors could not help. The protagonist opened his mouth and explained that it was not that difficult, and he could cure her. Putting his fingers to the side, the guy thought about how he did not want to be killed as soon as he felt better, and then declared that the stranger should make a contract with him. It was raining outside the cave. Kicking up rocks, the fox called Sunyu a bastard and asked if he really wanted her to submit to him and become his beast. The young man confirmed it with a frown. The girl rushed at the protagonist with fury and roared that he was finished. She grabbed the hunter by the throat. The student looked at her tensely and warned that she could easily kill him, but then she herself would not live long. Gritting her teeth, the queen wondered if she really had to bow to this man. But then her whole body shuddered. The fox was shaken by a cough, and the boy assumed that the dragon's power had already penetrated her heart. If she did not make a contract with him, it would be too late. Looking at the hero with despair, the girl thought that she could not die now, she still had to complete her sister's task. She let go of the young man's throat. Pressing her fist to her chest, the queen agreed to make a contract. The trapper bit his finger. A drop of blood appeared on it. The student pressed his finger to the fox's forehead and declared that from that moment on, she belonged to him. Pressing her palm to her chest, the girl mentally repeated his name, and out loud asked if he could now heal her. Starting to undress, the guy answered that of course, since they were now connected, he would definitely save her, to which the queen indignantly asked why he was undressing. Raising the dagger, the protagonist explained that it was necessary to heal her. Gritting his teeth, the young man made a cut on his chest, and when the fox demanded that he put his clothes back on, he asked how else he could give her blood. Pointing to his wound, the trapper asked the girl for a drink. The embarrassed queen waved her hand, and clarified what he was saying, and added that she could never do such things. Frowning, the student explained that his blood would protect her heart. The fox leaned down, brushing her hair away from her face, realizing that there was no turning back anyway. Licking the blood, the girl noticed that her heart was filling with some kind of power, overflowing it. Putting his clothes back on, the guy said that this would help for a while, and asked the queen to tell her her name now. After all, he was her master. The fox replied that her name was Dailu. Raising her eyebrows, the girl remembered, since he himself said her master, let him explain to her. Frowning, the queen clarified how he knew that her wound was inflicted by a purebred dragon. Sunyu tensed up and thought that this girl was somehow connected to the missing dragons. This was clearly not without reason, and perhaps she would be able to understand what was happening to him. Looking down, the hero decided not to hide it, and said that it seemed like his eyes had changed after the dragon blood had gotten into them 2 months ago. Forcing his eyes to glow, the young man added that now when he concentrated, he could see a panel with information about the beasts. The fox visibly thought about it when she heard that it was similar to the game system that had let him know about her injury, and came to the conclusion that the hunter's eyes were similar to the legendary eyes of a demon god. Looking away, the girl remembered that they had said that they could see all the information about any beast, but the student standing in front of her was a simple man. Looking closely at the guy, the queen could not understand who he really was, and he asked why she was silent. The queen raised her eyebrows, weighed the pros and cons, and thought that although it no longer mattered, this man had become her master, If these were really the eyes of a demon god, then it was even better. Sitting down on a rock, the fox said that the protagonist was lucky. Crossing her legs, the girl continued that most likely his eyes changed under the influence of dragon blood and became the eyes of a demon god, to which he clarified, "Isn't that a system?" Looking sideways at the young man with irritation, the queen demanded that he not make things up. He is not a hero from books. It was time for him to stop reading so much fantasy. What he saw was just a visualization of the abilities of the eyes of a demon god. The beast trapper rubbed his chin, repeating the words of the fox, and in his mind wondered why he heard that voice then. He remembered finding that crystal, and someone told him to pick it up. It will awaken the blood of his beast and allow him to be reborn. Looking at the seal on her palm, the student remembered that the first time this happened was after the attack of the shadow dragon. He was shown a crystal, which, according to him, will awaken the bloodline of the storm dog. And later, at the exam of the Azure Dragon Academy, he gave him this crystal, and he really evolved into a hellish storm wolf. Frowning, the boy thought that he wondered when he would hear that voice again. Suddenly, a growl was heard. Some kind of beast was approaching the interlocutors. When it pounced on the boys, the queen grabbed Sinew by the collar and shouted at him not to stand there like a pillar. Outside, the rain continued to pour, and the beast was approaching the heroes. Looking at the lava tiger, the protagonist remembered that it was because of him that he fell off the cliff. Clenching his fists, the young man added that he did not expect that it would find him even here. The boys scattered from the fireball. The hunter was pressed against the wall. The tiger moved towards him, and he realized that things were bad. But then a magical light pierced the beast's body. The student opened his mouth in surprise. Fluffing up her tails, the fox declared that although she was wounded, she still would not allow some creature to growl at him. The enemy tried to hit the girl with his paw. Clouds of dust rose into the air. The beast pounced on the queen, and she roared at how dare he attack her, and added that he asked for it. She cast a murderous glance at the enemy, after which the tiger turned to stone and began to crumble into pieces. The fox sat up when she heard the boy exhale with relief, admitting that they seemed to be safe now, but he felt unwell. The hero's gaze became clouded, and the last thing he heard was Dailu calling his name. The next moment, the young man fell into his own consciousness, and heard the same voice that said that he was finally here. A huge dragon looked at him, calling the hunter the eye of a demon, and he asked who was speaking. Looking at his interlocutor in surprise, the student asked who he was and where he was, to which the dragon asked if he had already forgotten him. It was he who helped his beasts evolve. Thanks to his instructions, he found that blood awakening crystal. Rising to his feet, the guy remembered that it was the owner of the voice that led him to the crystal, and asked to explain who he was. Sinew rubbed his chin with his finger when he heard that the blood had awakened his interlocutor, but he himself was not sure who he was, and the other realized that it was the dragon. The beast twisted its body and said that it could help the protagonist achieve greatness, and the other found it funny that he could be helped by someone who did not even know who he was. A system window appeared in front of the young man, and when the dragon reminded him that he had already seen its abilities, he realized that, apparently, all these system panels were his doing. The further dialogue resembled a chat, in which the beast explained that it could see all the information about magical beasts. It was necessary to simply concentrate to call it and it would appear. And if he followed its instructions, the hunter would ascend to the top of the world. He was surprised by such a number of advantages and clarified what he wanted to achieve, but the interlocutor himself did not know, except to return his memories, and when he asked why he appeared only now, before that he thought that it was some kind of system, and he was told that he was able to establish a connection with his consciousness due to the fact that he became stronger. Now that he had made a contract with two beasts, the time had come. Thoughtfully looking at the dragon, the student noticed that he still had not answered where they were and how he ended up here, and he explained that while it was his consciousness, while he was unconscious, he decided to meet you, and when he asked if he had really lost consciousness, he heard that it was time for him to wake up. Putting his hand on his waist, the boy asked when they would see each other again, and heard that the beast was always nearby. Opening his eyes, Sinew found himself in the hospital, and did not understand how he ended up here, because he was in a cave. Qin Yan and Rong Yan entered the ward, looking at the hero with concern, called him by name, and he apologized for making them worry. The young man sat up in bed and rubbing the back of his head said that the last thing he remembered was a cave near the cliff. But then how did he end up here? And the headmistress replied that the rescue team found him unconscious nearby. The woman frowned and added that the strangest thing was that they found a corpse of a lava tiger near the cave, only 100 meters away from where they saved the hunter, and asked if he knew anything about it. The student raised an eyebrow and pointed out that Principal Su herself said that he was unconscious. How could he know what happened, or did she think that a one-star student could defeat such a monster? The headmistress continued to look at the boy suspiciously and decided to herself that she was wrong. The protagonist scratched his head when the woman asked him out loud not to worry. The academy would conduct a thorough investigation and sort out this situation, and replied that of course he believed her. Raising his palm, the teacher said that, in addition, in the Yunnan Mountain test, the young man in Murong Xinxin received an S+ and set a new academy record, so he had better focus on recovering and preparing for the newcomer ranking competition this weekend. After the teachers left, the trapper activated the summoning seal. Dailu immediately appeared next to him, and the trapper said that he had been wondering where she had disappeared to. With her arms folded, the fox explained that her master had sacrificed his blood to save her, and then passed out. A shadow fell over her face as she added that the rescue team had come just in time, and she had hidden because she didn't want to be seen. Frowning, the queen remembered the student saying that falling off the cliff was not an accident. Remembering the villain's face, the boy replied that it was not an accident, he knew who had done it. Frowning, the hero promised that she wouldn't get off that easy this time. At this time, in the Wang Dongsheng family study, he was calmly reading a book. At that moment, his son burst into the room with a frightened face, shouting that something terrible had happened. Putting the book aside, the vice dean told the boy to pull himself together and tell everything in order, and he replied that things were bad. Showing the phone, the student said that Sun Yu survived. Wan Yun looked at his father with despair and said that the guy would not let it go and would definitely take revenge on them. He was even supported by the Heaven Guild, to which he clarified whether they had anything to do with that accidental incident. The man stood up, and when his confused son tried to object, he reminded him that even if the enemy suspected them, he had no evidence. The vice dean opened the drawer of the table, and when the young man asked what they should do now, he said that nothing for now. Holding a box with a skull in his hands, the man added that since they had started throwing the box to the guy, the father finished, he would have to finish off that student. At this time, the protagonist heard a phone call in the dormitory, and wondered who was awake at such an hour. The young man even covered his ears when his voice came from the phone, shouting that his bro was alive and had even won first place. It was incredible, he sincerely admired him, and if he needed anything, he should just say so. Zverlov smiled against his will when he remembered his family's reaction to his awakening, and realized that it seemed like everyone was really worried about him. The student had to take the phone away from his ear again, because his friends started shouting again that the freshman tournament had been postponed. But his bro would still easily beat everyone and win first place, and in general, they were friends forever, and he asked him to calm down. But then he raised his eyebrows in surprise, realizing that the tournament had been postponed. Was it really because of him? To which the guy heard that, he probably didn't know, but his disappearance was the most discussed topic. The academy even declared a state of emergency and organized a large-scale search. Because of this, they even postponed classes. The freshman tournament was the main event of the Azure Dragon Academy, which was held every year. All participants were divided into groups, the order of matches was determined randomly, and after the 8 finalists were determined, the fight for the 3 prize places began. Clenching his fist, the mage said that this was an intense and exciting competition, where the future of each participant was at stake. Sun Yu hung up when his friend asked him not to be late, and he said that he understood everything and wished him a good night. Looking at his reflection on the screen, the hero thought that a good result in the freshman tournament could attract the attention of the academy and its material support. The skills of beasts depended on the level of their master's spiritual energy. The stronger the beast, the more spiritual energy was needed. With the help of the academy's resources, the young man could significantly accelerate its development, which would prevent a repeat of the situation when Dailu's skills completely depleted his spiritual energy. Frowning, the beast hunter mentally added that she would still need her help to get rid of the Wang family. The student lay down on the bed, continuing to think that, however, in order to use the fox's skills, he must not stand still under any circumstances. He was thinking about how he could increase his spiritual energy before the freshman tournament began. Closing his eyes, the boy decided to ask him. The protagonist fell into his own consciousness. He opened his eyes. A dragon's eye stared at him, and a question sounded, "Is the young man really looking for easy ways?" The beast hunter scratched the back of his head, and remarked, "But she has him, why not take advantage of this opportunity?" The dragon replied that it would be good if the student could return his memories, he would do everything in his power to help him. To which he replied that it was not a question, promised that he did not make empty promises, and in general, they were in the same boat. A new window opened before the guy's eyes, and the beast explained that only deep meditation would allow him to penetrate the space of consciousness and communicate with it. But this was associated with risks, so he upgraded the data panel based on the game systems of the human world. The store button glowed the brightest of all, and the dragon added that now he would be able to buy the necessary items through the store. Sun Yu opened his mouth in shock. They explained to him that so that he would not relax and not forget about the return of memories, he would periodically be given tasks through the system, for the completion of which he would receive points and other rewards. And he noted that there was a lot of things here. The young man pointed his finger at the dragon's spiritual pill, which instantly increased spiritual energy tenfold, but after 5 minutes depleted all strength and caused weakness. While the hunter was looking at the pill, the dragon explained that it was exactly what he needed, but it had very strong side effects, so he advised him to use it with caution, asked him to consider it a gift, but in the future he would have to earn money for what he wanted to buy. Frowning, the beast added that it was enough to mentally say, "Divine panel, submit to my will," to activate the system. Now he needed to recover and order not to disturb him unless absolutely necessary. The student put his hands in his pockets and wished the dragon a good rest, and he thanked him. His eye looked closely at the boy again, and he expressed the hope that he would not be disappointed. The next morning, Sunyu told his sister that he was leaving for class. Seeing him off, the girls asked him not to run like that, because he had just recovered and to take care of himself, and he wished them a good day. Heading towards the academy, the hero thought that the freshman tournament was already today, and he wondered if Xing missed him. The young man tore the announcement from the pole and looked at it in shock, not understanding what it was. He saw his fox, who was wanted for theft by order of the Imperial Palace. The hunter went to a quiet street and called Dila. And then he pounced on the girl, demanding to know why she deceived him. Showing the announcement, the student asked why she did not tell that the Imperial family was looking for her, to which she reasonably replied that she did not hide it, she was simply not asked. Angrily pointing to the paper, the guy noted that the queen was wanted by personal order of the Empress. This was not some trifle, she could not tell about it herself, and she clarified, and what would change, if he regretted that he had made a contract with her, he could have given her away for a reward. The protagonist raised his eyebrows and reminded her that he was now her master, and he wanted the fox to trust him and not hide anything anymore. With a pitiful expression, the girl recalled drinking his blood, after which she looked up and agreed to tell. The queen took out some crystal and explained that the woman had set such a reward for her because of this thing. Looking at the stone in confusion, the young man asked what it was, and she explained that it was the ultimate treasure of dragons, a dragon tear. It was said that pure-blooded dragons had 3 great treasures: the Scales Sword, the Dragon King's Whiskers, and the Dragon Tear. The Scales Sword and the Dragon King's Whiskers were artifacts with devastating attack power that could be used in battle. Picking up the treasure, the fox added that the Dragon Tear had no combat use, but consisted of the tears of 10,000 pure-blooded giant dragons. The trapper's jaw dropped when he heard that if he used the full power of the artifact, he could turn back time and return to the past. Rubbing his chin with his finger as usual, the student said that he wanted to ask her earlier, but weren't the dragons completely destroyed 300 years ago, so why did they reappear recently? Frowning, the guy asked what was behind the war against the dragons 300 years ago, but before the queen could answer, someone called his name. The girl disappeared, and Sunyu turned around. The Murong siblings were approaching him, and the former was surprised that he met a hero here, while he thought that his sister was mistaken. The guy closed his eyes and admitted that the trapper had just gotten out of a real hell, and asked her to make sure that he was not killed next time, while the girl could not understand why he was speaking so rudely if he was worried about him. Frowning, Yangshua said that after the student fell off the cliff, his sister was so worried that she couldn't even eat. The genius knocked on the door and said that it was time for his sister to eat, but she refused. Continuing to recall, the guy added that only when she saw on TV that her friend was okay, she ate several servings at once. Shinshin tried to cover her brother's mouth with her hand, but he calmly continued scolding her, saying that he was trying to calm her down, demanding that she be careful, otherwise she would eat too much at once again, and next time she should think about the consequences, otherwise his sister would lose her appetite again. Extending his hand, the guy promised that he would try. How could he make such a girl worry? The freshman tournament was about to start, he suggested going inside. The interlocutor got angry and said that they were not close enough to go together. Besides, in the trial on Mount Jinan, he stole his sister's points for killing a monster, so they still hadn't forgiven him for that. The hero tiredly closed his eyes. Yanshua walked away, leading his sister away. The young man watched them with a gloomy look, not understanding why he decided to talk to him at all. At this time, the tournament was starting at the academy, and the host wished the teachers and students a good morning. Yangshu waved his hand and announced that the annual freshmen's tournament was about to begin, and all the freshmen had to draw lots to determine the order of the fights. The assistant put out a box with lots, and the students were asked to stand in line. Wanyan noticed his sworn enemy in the crowd, and made sure that he really did return safe and sound. Gloomily looking at the hero, the young man decided that this time he would definitely make sure that he never rose again. The vice dean's son walked heavily through the crowd when the next student was called to come forward. There were whispers among the onlookers that this guy had used his father's status to harass girls in the library, but Sunyu had beaten him to the point of losing all dignity in the arena, and that he was the greatest disgrace of the Azure Dragon Academy. The veins on the student's face bulged as he recalled the humiliation that the guy had inflicted on him. When he saw the note, a dark triumph appeared on his face. He had been lucky in the first round, he was ready to return it 100 times more. The note was emblazoned with the name of the hated opponent. On the screen, images of Sunyu and Wanyan were seen competing against each other. The vice dean's son crumpled up the piece of paper, confident of his victory. He pointed his finger at the protagonist and called out loudly, The boy furiously frowned and promised that he would personally destroy his pet in the arena. The all-rounder chuckled and replied that they will see. The two opponents stood opposite each other in the arena. The senior student stared ahead tensely. Yan Shuo looked at his sister, who was constantly looking at this young man. The eldest son of the Murong family looked puzzled. The girl, looking straight ahead, replied that after the protagonist fell off the cliff and returned, he had become much stronger. Ruyan frowned, not understanding what he had gone through in these few days. The judge raised a red flag, starting his speech. Sharply lowering his hand, he shouted that the battle had begun. Wan Yan quickly rushed forward. The owner of the wolf jumped to the side with lightning speed. Frowning, he summoned his pet. His opponent, in turn, summoned a white leopard. The electronic board displayed the information about the beasts obtained by the scanning device. Shinshin said with a wary expression that there was something wrong with this aura. The initial form and the first stage were indicated opposite the line, level. Looking at the burning wolf, the girl thought that its level was clearly higher than what was stated on the screen, but the scanning device could not be wrong. She thoughtfully touched her lips with her hand. Then her mouth opened in surprise when she guessed that the protagonist was deliberately suppressing the level of his beast in order to use this fight to break through. The ice leopard attacked its opponent. The latter quickly appeared behind it. The spotted predator released an ice ball from its mouth. The projectile rushed forward. A light blue fog appeared above the spectators. They hugged themselves and shivered from the cold. The leopard stood motionless in the arena. A black wolf could be seen behind it. There was a bright red flash as he used Hell Howl. Wan Yan's pet was sent flying backwards. The spectators watched the battle tensely. The referee shouted into the microphone, noting the sudden change in the weather. The beast trapper raised his hand and used his signature move, the Claw of Oblivion. Black energy accumulated above his wolf. This stream of aura rushed towards his enemy. It attacked the ice leopard in the muzzle, causing it to growl in displeasure. The predators stood opposite each other as the speaker said that the six-fingered ice leopard had been hit by the Claw of Oblivion and could not use its abilities. Wan Yan clenched his hand into a fist and shouted that he would not fall for the same trick twice. He frowned and gestured with 2 fingers. His pet opened its mouth, revealing a small blue ball. Then it clenched its teeth, and blue shards appeared on its muzzle. Blue flames began to emanate from its body. The leopard opened its mouth, revealing its huge fangs. It stomped its clawed paw on the ground. Then, an azure beam of light shot out from its mouth. Shinshin looked down, trying to understand how the owner of the black claw had become so strong in such a short time. The white predator opened its mouth wide and rushed towards the enemy. Sharp blocks of ice appeared in front of it. Sinew frowned his thin eyebrows, not understanding why the opponent's pet had suddenly become so strong. Frozen growths were visible all over the animal's body, and the youth guessed that his opponent had used a forbidden potion that temporarily enlarged the leopard's body. The protagonist raised his hand and loudly asked if Wan Yan had forced his beast to take such a potion in order to win, and the youth replied that it was none of his business. The predator with red eyes rushed forward as its owner used the ice barrage technique. Sharp shards of ice crashed against the body of the black wolf, who gritted his teeth in pain. Red blood appeared on his fur. The hunter looked at his pet and verbally encouraged him. The opponent raised his hand and shouted that there was more to come, using an ice hammer move. A huge chunk of ice was approaching the black fawn. He stood still, looking at the giant projectile. When it landed, a loud explosion thundered in the arena. The protagonist's pet was surrounded by ice. The spectators' mouths dropped open in shock at how the white beast had suddenly become so strong, and that the other participant in the battle was currently at a disadvantage. The youth raised a finger and said with a grin that he had given in to his opponent last time, but this time he would show off his full power. The director crossed her arms as Dongxing looked at her and said that his son's talent was no less than Sinew's. The woman furiously frowned and thought that both father and son were equally stupid, because only a blind person would not notice that something was wrong here. The hellish storm wolf was surrounded by ice blocks, and the leopard master used the winter cold technique. Shinshin clenched her hand into a fist in displeasure. Ruyan frowned tensely and sweat began to flow. Qin Yan scowled angrily. Xinyu arched his eyebrows in excitement. The protagonist grinned and thought that his black fawn had not killed more than 100 magical beasts on Mount Yunnan by accident. He raised his hand, preparing to attack. Suddenly, his pet broke through the obstacle surrounding it and ran forward. The deputy director's son extended his hand to the side and ordered his leopard to dodge. The beast obeyed and jumped back, high in the air. The wolf breathed fire, creating gray smoke around itself. Then, he roared loudly, creating a bright red lotus. The teacher recognized this move with a smile. The headmistress raised her eyebrows in surprise and thought that her student had used a combat skill that was only available to fully evolved beasts, so his future was limitless. Her deputy frowned tensely, thinking that his son's enemy should definitely not be left alive because he was growing too fast. The ice leopard avoided the red lotus, but the flower was quickly catching up. Suddenly, it was right above the predator, and its petals began to open. The beast hunter raised his hand, activating the move. The next second, a powerful stream of red aura shot out from the flower into the air. A black silhouette of the enemy's pet was visible in the fire. Gray smoke appeared in the arena. The ice leopard was lying in a smoldering crater. The siblings of the Murong family looked at the battlefield in shock. The rest of the spectators were also surprised. The judge raised his hand in the air, preparing to declare the winner. Then he pointed his finger at Sun Yu and shouted that it was him. The people raised their hands with joyful smiles and shouted in approval. The defeated beast lay on the ground in the middle of the gray clouds. Black Fang opened his mouth wide, listening to the praise. The deputy's son fell to his knees, looking down at the ground in confusion. The protagonist waved to the audience, standing next to his animal. Wanyan stood up and walked over to his pet. The protagonist stroked the wolf and praised it, while in his mind he said that after the wolf killed dozens of magical beasts on the mountain, encountered the lava tiger, survived all this, it was now on the threshold of evolution. It was only a little while before he could enter this gate of evolution. The protagonist used the leopard's ice abilities to drive Black Fang into a corner, so that it would destroy the barrier in front of it. Dongxing stood up and shouted, saying that everything must be supported by evidence, and do they have any? Sun Yu frowned slightly, trying to figure out what the man was up to again. Dongxing pointed to the arena and said that the rules of the competition stated that the fight would continue until a winner was determined, but the leopard was dead. Wasn't that enough evidence? While everyone around the director was indignant, saying that Sun Yu was being too cruel, she was unwavering and said that the administration would thoroughly investigate everything and pass judgment. Looking at the man next to her, she said that until the truth was revealed, she would not spare anyone who tried to slander her student. Crossing her arms over her chest, the girl asked to bring her the body of the ice leopard so that the veterinarian could perform an autopsy. The doctors carefully examined the pet's body. Ruyan approached them and asked if they found anything. One of the veterinarians raised his head and said that the internal organs were badly damaged, probably due to the lotus of hellfire. Dongxing put his hands behind his back, mentally saying that it was good that he had bribed the academy veterinarian in advance. He knew that the rector might resort to that method of checking. Raising his hand, he said that now even the doctor confirmed it. Suddenly, the protagonist appeared next to Dongxing, asking what kind of killer he thought would act so brazenly in front of so many people. Standing in the middle of the administration, the guy said that his lotus only attacks the soul, and this leopard died of internal bleeding. Pointing at the veterinarian, he asked him if he was sure of his diagnosis. Approaching, the guy whispered to the doctor that he should not risk his career because of bribes. After the guy straightened up, telling the director that the matter was extremely serious, then he asked to conduct a full blood test on the leopard to check everything again. The events take us 10 minutes forward. The doctor continued to examine the body of the beast. Then he approached Ruyan. Pointing to the analysis sheet, he said that the leopard died because of the rampage pill. Wingyan rushed forward and shouted, telling the doctor not to dare lie so openly. The guy fell to his knees and asked if he could give his pet such crap. The veterinarian interrupted him, saying that here are the analysis results, and he can confidently say that the leopard took the rampage pill. Taking the analysis sheet in her hand, the rector asked Wingyan what he would say now. The guy immediately turned around and asked his father to save him. The man frowned and asked the rector if she could give his son another chance. The girl turned to him angrily. Frowning, she said that he should not forget about his position. After all, he is not only a father, but also the vice-rector of the Azure Dragon Academy. If they plan to cover for their son, then they can go home with him now. Dongxing gritted his teeth in anger. Wingyan was struck like lightning when Ruyan gave the verdict, which resulted in his expulsion from the academy. The boy turned to his father in fear, asking if he was really going to expel him. Approaching his son, the man said that the fact of using the forbidden pill had already been established, and he left them no choice but to avenge him. Throwing the boy's son, he ordered him to be thrown out of the academy. Soon after, the top 8 participants of the arena appeared on the screen. Xinxin and Yanshua looked at the screen in surprise. For them, the protagonist who took second place was a dark horse that they did not expect. Yanshua looked at his sister and said that he would definitely take revenge on Sun Yu for stealing so many points from her on the mountain. The girl objected, saying that he should not do that. Looking at the boy's name on the screen, she said that she herself wanted to defeat him. Xinyu waved his hand, telling the protagonist that he entered the top 8. The out-of-breath guy stood in front of his friends, saying that they should definitely celebrate. Dongxing gritted his teeth and turned around. He wanted revenge with all his heart. Remembering the appearance of the room he destroyed, the man said that he would still see if the guy would laugh like that when he returned home. The events take us to the night city. The protagonist walked down the street, saying that Xinyu made him walk around a lot. The guy entered the room and was shocked to see scattered things and a broken door. Xinyu burst into one of the rooms screaming. Crying, Sherman raised her head when she saw the guy. She hugged him, saying that Roshyue's sister was kidnapped by a masked man. He only left a letter. The protagonist stroked the girl's head, saying that she should not cry. The guy took the letter in his hand, which said, "Go to the Yinanshan Mountains, if he wants to save his sister." The events take us to the Yinanshan Mountains. Xinyu frowned, not understanding that he dared to touch his sister. Soon the guy found his sister unconscious right in the forest. Dongxing, who was standing next to her, told the guy not to scream, because she was still alive. The protagonist screamed, demanding to let his sister go. The man chuckled, asking the guy if he was not interested in knowing who he was. Sinyu frowned even more, saying that recently he had a conflict only with Wang Yan, but he did not have the courage or the ability to kidnap a person, which means that he was his father. The man took off his hood and laughed, saying that it was amazing analytical skills. Dongxing, raising his hand, told Sinyu that if he were his son, he would make him the strongest young beast trapper in the Dragon Empire. Releasing his mana, he said that everything turned out sadly. He even injured his son. Now he had to die. A bear, his pet, suddenly appeared near the man. When a hammer appeared in the bear's paw, Dongxing said that his stone demon bear had the form of the king of beasts. It was constantly in a state of absolute defense, which made it invulnerable to physical attacks. The bear opened its mouth and roared. Raising his hand, the man laughed, saying that now his path would definitely be interrupted. The protagonist clenched his fist, saying that he would definitely be disappointed. Adjusting his glasses, the man asked if he really wanted his dog to become a snack for his bear. The protagonist raised his hand, saying that he had more than one beast. Thunder began to strike in the clouds in the sky. Frowning, the man said that it was a frightening aura. Dailu twitched her ear and asked what happened now. She stretched out, saying that she was not getting a good night's sleep again. He should think carefully about moral compensation for her. Adjusting her hair, the girl asked if she could continue to sleep after killing this bear. Having received confirmation, the girl yawned. Dongxing was sweating heavily. The fox had terrified him so much that if he did not do anything now, he would definitely lose. The bear, with a hammer in his hand, rushed to attack. Dailu opened her eyes wide. A huge eye appeared above the bear. His hands immediately turned to stone. The bear's entire body turned to stone. He could no longer fight. Even the bear's legs were turned to stone. Dongxing pointed at the fox with a trembling hand. Dailu released her mana when the man said that she was the king-level beast that was wanted throughout the country. Clenching his fist, the man told the protagonist opposite that he had made a contract with the most wanted criminal in the empire, and if this became known, he would die. The protagonist bared his teeth, saying that since he had summoned the fox, it meant that he had no plans to let him go alive. Concentrating his mana in his hands, the man became angry, saying that the gap between 1 and 6 stars could not be bridged with just one summoned beast. The bear's body began to glow brightly. Fiery streams spread from his body. A moment later, the bear roared and freed itself from the stone shackles. Afterwards, the bear stood next to its master. Raising his hand and smiling, Dongxing said that the 9-tailed fox was certainly strong, but he should not forget the fact that he was only a 1-star hunter. Raising his hand and concentrating his mana, the man said that he would now show that the gap between the 1st and 6th stars could not be bridged so easily. The bear shattered the ground beneath him with a blow. He roared, releasing dark mana from his body. A moment later, black fog spread from his body in all directions. The protagonist gritted his teeth, realizing that the bear in front of him was a dark attribute bear. The bear roared, releasing dark mana from its body. The protagonist said angrily that about 5 years ago, low-level beasts began to disappear in the city. Could it really have been him? The man adjusted his glasses, saying that he already knew that dark attribute beasts needed to feed on the blood of humans or other beasts. Then he showed the red skull mark on his face, and said that it was a great honor to die from the fangs of his bear. The protagonist froze when he saw the red skull. A guild that specializes in training dark attribute hunters, the Red Skull Guild is listed as a terrorist organization. It was also one of the 5 largest dark guilds. Standing behind Dailu, the guy asked what would happen if everyone found out his true identity. Dongxing raised his hand, saying that he simply would not leave here alive. Dailu looked at the owner and said that with the current energy reserves, she could not use any combat skills. Sinyu smiled and told her not to worry, because he never entered into battle unless he was sure of victory. The guy threw a pill into his mouth. After that, he began to inhale mana from the air. A moment later, a huge amount of energy burst out of his body. The man raised his hand and directed his bear to attack. Sinyu raised his hand and ordered Dailu to act. The girl stood in front of him and bent her knees. In an instant, the bear with a hammer in its paws appeared in front of them. Sinyu frowned and shouted, ordering him to use the bloody gaze. Dailu's body took on a beast form. The fox rushed forward. She raised her head. At the same time, a huge eye formed above her. Magic circles burst out from the center of the eye. A sight formed on the bear's chest. A moment later, a beam of mana pierced his chest. The beam passed through and hit Dongxing. The man raised his hand in despair, saying that he could not lose. His body suddenly caught fire in hell. This was his guild's method of getting rid of corpses. The protagonist climbed up the hill with Dailu. His body swayed to the side. This was a side effect of taking the dragon's spirit pill. The boy's eyes began to close. Dailu slapped the owner's face, asking him not to fall asleep. Suddenly, someone moved behind her. Roashua grabbed the girl by the throat. The fox fell to the ground in surprise. Soon, the fox stood up. She could smell a terrible smell from Roashua in front of her. Frowning, Roashua said that she never thought that she would make a contract with his brother. The fox widened her eyes in horror. She felt the power of a dragon. The spiritual power of the girl in front of her burst out of her body. Its amount was astonishing, as was her power. Gritting her teeth in pain and terror, Dailu asked why she was emitting dragon power, since she was Sinu's sister. The girl raised a finger to her lips and hissed. Her eyes lit up slightly as she said that she didn't need to know everything. Letting go of the fox, she said that she was just Sinu's sister now. Then the girl crouched down in front of the guy. She released energy from her palm. Dailu walked up to her and asked if he was okay. She leaned towards Roashua when she said that the guy took a medicine that temporarily increased his spiritual energy, and now he was experiencing side effects. Roashua closed her eyes and said that her brother would definitely be okay, he just needed 3 days to recover. The girl leaned forward. Then she walked to the edge of the cliff. Her pupil lit up brightly. A melody burst out of her mouth. The melody spread throughout the area, taking on a material form. The strings of music twisted and flew around the forest. The destroyed plants began to recover. The fox frowned as she realized that she was hearing the whisper of a dragon, a combat skill unique to purebred dragons. It allowed any entity in the world to be recovered through a melody. The trees in the area began to recover. Roashua bared her teeth, saying that now there was no trace left of today's battle, except for her and her. No one else would know what happened here. Looking into the girl's eyes, Dailu said that only one among purebred dragons had such scales, and his name was Chaos. Roashua's eyes suddenly lit up. Revealing her spiritual form, the girl said that she didn't care that she was wanted by the Empress, but since she had already made a contract with her brother, it would be better for her not to betray him. Frowning, she said that she had better help him properly in the future, then he would not harm her. Roashua pointed at the fox and said that she would cut off its tails if it did not comply. The girl's pupils flashed as she said that she had better not tell anyone about its identity. The events take us to a hospital room wherein 4 was installed. The protagonist woke up to see his sister and director next to his bed. The sister put her head on the guy's chest, saying that she was glad that he was okay, because she was so worried about him. She raised her head when Sinu said that he had difficulty breathing, after which he asked what happened that night. The girl clenched her fists and said that when she woke up, she found that they were in the mountains, and he was lying unconscious next to her, although she did not know what happened, but she saw that he was covered in sweat, so she brought him to the hospital. The guy smiled, assuming that since the sister did not notice anything, Dailu cleaned everything up thoroughly. The director raised her hand and said that he had been unconscious for 3 days and missed the semi-finals and finals of the freshman ranking tournament. The girl extended her finger and said that the first and second places were Xinshin and Yangshuo, so his absence was considered a voluntary refusal to participate. After saying this, the director smiled. The protagonist saw her smile and smiled nervously. A moment later, he frowned sharply. The guy sat down on the bed. The director closed her eyes and sighed. Opening her eyes, the girl said that Deputy Dongxing had disappeared 3 days ago. The protagonist frowned even more, realizing that they might have started to suspect him. Roashua, who was sitting next to him, was just waiting for a chance to kill the director. The nails on her hand turned into claws. Raising her hand, the director said that she believed that he was innocent and would continue to investigate this case, but the academy would have to find a new deputy director. After exchanging glances with his sister, the guy decided that the rector had decided to protect him. Sitting next to Rian's bed, she said that she had come not only to check on his condition, but also to report on the supernova competition. The supernova competition was a major event jointly organized by the Azure Dragon, White Tiger, Red Crane, and Black Tortoise academies. Each school selected 3 of the most talented newcomers to represent their academies. In the past, the most talented student was Ningxuang, but in last year's competition, she lost to Muqing, from the White Tiger Academy, and only took 2nd place. Opening her eyes, the girl said that she wanted him to become one of the representatives of the Azure Dragon Academy and restore their honor, and for him, this was a chance to make up for the missed opportunity in the ranking tournament. The protagonist turned to the director, saying that he did not even know the conditions for participating in this competition. Extending a finger, Rian said that the first condition was that the participant must have at least 2 beasts, and the participant must also be at least a 2nd star beast hunter. Grabbing the guy by the shoulders, she said that the competition will be held next month. She believes that he will be able to qualify for it. Sunyu frowned, deciding not to let down the person who hoped for him. Besides, he wanted to see the strength of the White Tiger Academy, which was able to defeat Ningxuan. Putting his hand on his chest, the guy told the girls not to worry, because first place in the competition will belong to him. Soon, the protagonist found himself on Mount Yunnan. He mentally said that the participants of last year's competition signed a contract with at least 2 beasts. Remembering his pets, he said that he also had 2 beasts, but Dailu was wanted throughout the country. She could not be shown in open battles, Besides, Black Fang is now only a hellish storm wolf of the initial form. It will be difficult for him to participate in such a high-level tournament. Standing in the middle of the clearing, the guy decided that it was time for the wolf to become stronger. A moment later, he summoned the wolf. His ring on his finger lit up. Various ingredients immediately appeared. The guy said with a smile that he had prepared everything in advance, having bought several fire supplements and evolution materials with his salary as a beast doctor in the Heavenly Guild. One of the crystals was a reward for the trial on Mount Yunnan. There were also rewards for the ranking tournament. Having placed a mound of various things in front of the wolf, the guy told him that this would definitely be enough for evolution. The wolf opened its mouth and began to absorb everything. Artifacts and nutritional elixirs turned into a stream of energy. A stream of spiritual power suddenly burst out of the wolf's body. The protagonist called Dailu and said that Black Fang might have a breakdown during evolution. She needed to protect him. The wolf's eyes shone brightly. His body was enveloped in spiritual power. Dailu formed a barrier to stop the wolf. The protagonist fell to the ground. He felt the pain that Black Fang was now experiencing. Frowning, he ordered the divine panel to obey his will. Looking at the energy storm, he decided to check how much time the wolf had left before completing its evolution. The systems changed one after another, notifying the guy of the ongoing progress. Sinyu frowned as he looked at the screen. Suddenly, the wolf's paw burst out of the energy storm. Black Fang, who had evolved into a wolf of the underworld, majestically climbed to the heights. Dailu opened her mouth in surprise, seeing that the wolf had opened its demonic attribute. Looking at the guy next to her, she mentally said that this guy was truly a unique beast hunter. The protagonist hugged his wolf, saying that he had become even stronger. The fox standing behind asked the guy what he was going to do, because he needed to make a contract with another beast. Sinyu frowned as he looked at her. Soon, the guy stood in front of Yanran, thanking the girl for her help, and as soon as she heard that he was taking part in the competition, she said that she would buy him everything. The girl put her hand on her chest and said that he was her brother, so his problems were her problems, and it was just one beast. The couple came to the animal market. The employee immediately turned her head, seeing new customers. The girl smiled and asked Yanran what she was buying today, maybe an electric drug or a lightning crystal. Raising her hand, Yanran said that in a month her brother would be participating in the competition, so they came here to find a suitable beast for the contract. Pointing to the spider behind her, the saleswoman asked the handsome man how he liked this spider. After she explained that the demonic red spider was good, its attack was much higher than other beasts of the same level. Pointing to the shadow tigress, the girl said that this tigress was very fast and inflicted increased damage from stealth. Yanran, who was standing behind, interrupted the saleswoman, saying that she did not need cheap options. Hearing her words, the saleswoman led the couple to a secure room. Smiling, she said that she would introduce them to her best beasts. Pointing to the beasts in the capsules, she asked if they liked any of them. The first was an underground pangolin, with excellent characteristics. The second was a three-eyed fire snake, which dealt fire and poison damage. The last beast was an ice-bone bird. The protagonist thought about it. He did not see any of them with a hidden pedigree. Yanran, who was standing next to him, asked if he really did not like anyone. Raising her hand, the saleswoman asked if he really did not like any of these top-class beasts. If so, she could order specially for him. Suddenly, all three froze when they heard that new goods had been brought into the hall. The bald man, smiling broadly, said that he had brought some of the best beasts he had ever seen. 2 water pixies, of the elven type, were locked in a cage. The protagonist raised his hand and said that animals of this type are mostly useless, so why do we need them at all? Yanran approached the guy and said that if we sell them as battle animals, then of course no one will take them, but as pets, they will be sold out in an instant. The protagonist's eyes sparkled. He looked at one of the water pixies. To her surprise, it turned out to have a hidden angel bloodline. Yanran looked at the guy and asked if he was okay. Sinyu smiled and said that he wanted to buy this water pixie. The 2 girls moved away from him, asking what he was even thinking about. The guy angrily said that it was none of their business. Approaching the cage, he said that he wanted her to become his beast. The events are transferred to the Nanshan Mountains. Sinyu stuck his hand into the cage, saying that the pixies are not afraid, because he will not harm her. Handing over a pill, he told the fairy to eat it so that her wounds would heal. Her body and wings were indeed restored after taking the pill. The protagonist extended his finger and asked if she agreed to make a blood contract with him and become his beast. Pisky clenched her fists. She bowed her head, remembering all the moments with the guy. Without thinking twice, she grabbed the guy's finger. The protagonist put his hand under the pixie's legs, saying that from now on, they are connected. Blood from the wound flew towards the pixie. The girl smiled and closed her eyes. The contract was successfully concluded. The pixie circled around the protagonist, while he said that since she agreed to accept the blood contract, it means she recognizes him as her master. The guy smiled, playing with the girl. He took out a crystal saying that it was a bloodline awakening crystal. He got it especially for her, and if he ate it, he would be able to evolve. The pixie frowned looking at the crystal in the guy's hand. She happily bit off a piece of the crystal. At the same time, she dropped the crystal. Her body was seized by intense pain. She clenched the pain because of the pain. The protagonist standing next to her told her to endure it for a while. Suddenly, a pillar of spiritual energy rose into the sky. Dailu appeared in front of the protagonist asking what happened to him here. Realizing that the grinning fox was tense, the guy said that everything was fine. The water pixie was enclosed in a cocoon of light. Soon, 4 wings formed on her body. The pixie who evolved into an angel spread her wings. Sinyu smiled, saying that the hidden bloodline had awakened. Standing in front of the angel, he said that when he became a 9-star beast hunter, he would be able to evolve into a 12-winged seraph. Rubbing his chin, he said that he had not yet given her a name. Before awakening the hidden bloodline, she was a rather quiet water spirit. The angel smiled when the guy gave her the name Freya. After she landed on the ground, the protagonist, seeing her kneel down, said that from then on, they would fight side by side. The fox stepped forward and told the guy that he had taken another step towards participating in the supernova competition. The guy smiled widely, saying that all that was left for him to do now was to become a 2nd-star beast hunter. Qin slammed the table. The man frowned and angrily asked the guy if he was really going to take the 2nd-star beast hunter exam. The guy scratched the back of his head and said that the supernova competition was about to start, so he needed to do it as soon as possible. Qin couldn't stop frowning. He didn't understand why the youth were so eager to grow up, and the Murong clan brother and sister had also passed the 2nd-star exam 3 days ago. The teacher handed the boy the watch and said that if his spiritual power level met the standard, he would let him pass the exam. The boy put on the watch, saying that he would take him at his word. The counter on the watch quickly exceeded 1,000. Soon, the number reached 2,000. A moment later, the number reached 2,500. The teachers looked at the watch in surprise, saying that if they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they would never have believed it. Qinyan's pupils lit up as he mentally said that usually when a beast evolves, the host's spiritual power also increases. But according to statistics, the average spiritual power of a 2nd-star beast hunter is in the range of 2,000 or 3,000. The professor raised his hand and said that none of his former students, even the most talented ones, had spiritual strength that reached 1,500, and only when their beasts entered their mature form. The events take us to the Blood Mist Canyon. The helicopter was flying over the canyon. The protagonist opened the door of the helicopter. Standing on the edge, he said that he now understood where the exam would take place. Through the radio in his ear, he heard Ruyan say that he had arrived at the entrance to the canyon. The exam for the 2nd-star beast hunter was about to begin right here. The guy bent his knees and expressed his readiness. The girl standing in front of the panel said that his task was to pass through the canyon. If he successfully reached the exit, the exam would be considered passed. Sinyu jumped off the helicopter. From the observation room, Qinyan said that Xin.Y had already entered the Blood Mist Canyon. In order to get through the canyon, the examinee must first fight the iron-toothed crocodiles. The man frowned and said that the boy next had to escape from the blood demon spiders that lived in the demon cave. But among them there were sometimes individuals of the 3rd foot of the mature form. Even Sinyu would have a hard time dealing with these huge and vicious spiders. Due to yesterday's rain, many creatures appeared in the Crimson Swamp. The crocodiles raised their heads. The protagonist, who was falling right on them, was surprised. The iron-toothed crocodile released discharges of electricity from its body. A huge number of crocodiles surrounded the boy. Sinyu raised his hand, calling Freya. A bright light appeared behind the boy. A moment later, a 4-winged angel appeared in front of him. Qinyan opened his mouth in shock, realizing that Sinyu had not summoned the black fawn. The director also frowned, realizing that it was the boy's 2nd magical beast. The angel stretched out her arms, enveloping the master with spiritual power. Qinyan's eyes widened when he said that Sinyu was simply a monster. After all, he had made a contract with a mythical angel of light. Raising his hand, he said that this simply couldn't be. After all, they hadn't met for many years. Ruyan replied by saying that 2 days ago, a guy bought a water pixie from the magical beast shop. Could it be her? Crossing her arms over her chest, she told the professor not to forget that at first, the underworld wolf was just a storm dog. Qinyan raised his head and said that Sinyu always makes the impossible possible. That's what a true hunter is. The crocodiles rushed straight at the angel. Freya swung her sword and killed all the monsters in front of her. The professor slammed the table. He couldn't believe that with just one blow, the angel defeated the iron-toothed crocodile. Now he was sure that she had a mythical bloodline. The protagonist raised his hand and asked the angel to take him across this swamp. Suddenly, Freya's hand grabbed his waist. She suddenly flew up with the guy in her arms. The protagonist, being in her arms, screamed, demanding to quickly put him down on the ground. Sinyu covered his face with his hands in embarrassment. He had never experienced such shame. Soon Freya lowered the guy to the ground, right in front of the thick fog. A dozen spiders flew out of the cave. They glowed brightly in the darkness of the cave. The protagonist, being behind the attacking angel, asked her to be careful. Freya raised her sword, wrapped in web. She cut the huge web with 2 swings of the sword. A huge spider burst out of the depths of the cave. It opened its mouth and roared. Sinyu gritted his teeth seeing the bloody demonic spider. The guy saw many bright lights of eyes in the cave. He realized that there were at least 20 spiders in this cave. The demonic spider rushed towards the protagonist with a scream. Qingyan frowned, saying that although the holy angel of light was only in its initial form, it could ignore the difference in strength and deal damage even to mature demonic spiders. Sinyu managed to dodge the spider's attack. His mark on his hand lit up. The guy was summoning his wolf. A moment later, Black Fang appeared next to him. The wolf rushed forward while the angel remained hovering next to him. The protagonist frowned when the director told him that he had better not waste time, because in order to pass the exam, he needed to reach the finish line, not kill all the magical beasts. The guy's lips stretched into a smile. He stretched out his hand, ordering the wolf to use Hellish Howl. One of the spiders was thrown back. The demonic spider shot out a web. Black Fang jumped up, dodging the web. One of the spiders on the tree stared at the wolf. It shot out a web. The web wrapped around the wolf's leg. Black Fang froze and looked towards the beast. Suddenly, his other paw was also bound by the web. 2 more spiders shot out webs. The protagonist extended his hand, ordering Freya to activate Black Fang's sacred shield of light while he used the Lotus of Hellfire. The girl extended her hand and released her spiritual energy. The wolf's body was enveloped in the power of light. A moment later, the wolf created a whirlwind of energy and defended himself from the spider's attacks. The spiders turned and ran away from the whirlwind. The whirlwind struck one of the monsters. The edges of the whirlwind were sharp as swords. The protagonist looked at the spider's corpse and asked if that was all. Suddenly, the cave began to collapse. The protagonist's legs and his body trembled from the intense pressure. The guy trembled and said that there was a terrifying aura here. The wall in front of the boy exploded. A huge spider crawled out of the hole in the wall. The crypto spider opened its mouth and roared. The protagonist frowned when the processor told him to retreat immediately. The boy screamed, saying that in this case he would not be able to pass the exam. Qingyan objected, saying that life is more important than the exam, which he can retake. Clenching his fists, the boy said that this was a waste of time, because even if God himself stood between him and successfully passing the exam, he would die. The wolf opened its mouth and released a stream of energy. Freya swung her swords and sent a beam of mana at the enemy. The crypto spider defended itself by forming a barrier around itself. The protagonist gritted his teeth when Qingyan told him to stop risking his life. They were already heading after him. The boy didn't stop frowning even when Dailu told him that he should give up on this idea. His teacher was right and he shouldn't go ahead, especially with his current strength. The protagonist suddenly grinned. He clenched his fist, saying that he wanted to pass the second Star Trapper exam and kill this magical beast. But even more, he wanted to know his limit. The crypto spider released an incredible amount of pressure from its body. Sinyu ignored it and smiled, shouting, ordering the wolf to approach the spider from behind and use the Claw of Oblivion. Black Fang immediately sank into the shadows. At the same time, the crypto spider shot out a web. The guy frowned again and shouted, telling Freya to take action. A second later, the wolf was behind the spider. He jumped up and attacked the spider from behind. The crypto spider immediately struck the wolf with his belly. Sinyu froze for a second and shouted. Black Fang's body was thrown straight towards the guy. Freya used her holy shield to block the body. Due to the force of the blow, the protagonist flew back and crashed into the wall. The guy's eyes were closed as he was pressed into the rocks. Black Fang and Freya were right in front of the guy. The crypto spider slowly approached them, as if laughing at their opponents. Pointing his finger down, Sinyu said that he had no reason to rejoice yet, because he was the one who would die today. The spider frowned and opened its mouth. A stream of web burst out of its mouth. The protagonist climbed onto the wolf's body and dodged the spider's attack. The boy found himself next to the spider. He turned to it, realizing that it was not so easy to escape from the monster, and they definitely needed to come up with something. Suddenly, Sinyu saw that the monster's life bar was gradually decreasing. Black Fang mana was bursting out of the wound on the spider's back. The protagonist frowned, realizing that the wound was not very deep, but the web that the spider released became weaker. Could it be due to its blood? Freya caught the master when he said to cover him, otherwise the wolf was wounded and would not be able to withstand it for long. A moment later, the angel lifted the master into the air. Smiling, Sinyu said that the crypto spider's life bar was decreasing again. Now he finally understood how to deal with it. Indeed, the monster's life bar had decreased. The guy looked at the wolf and shouted, ordering him to spit right on the spider. The wolf turned his head and spat. His saliva landed right on the spider's head. He, in anger, shot a web. Black Fang sank into the shadows, dodging the monster's attacks. The protagonist looked at the enemy and said that the spider spends its life force when it releases a web. The monster frowned. He himself understood that as soon as he used up the last thread, he would be dead. Clenching his fist and raising his hand, the guy ordered the wolf not to take risks. He just needed to wear out his opponent. Black Fang, obeying the order, began to move around the spider. He suddenly jumped right on him. A web got into his hind leg. The wolf bared his teeth and looked at the spider. He attacked Black Fang without paying attention. The wolf quickly broke away from the attack. The protagonist frowned and shouted, ordering Black Fang not to hold back and activate demonic power, after which the guy ordered Freya to use the sacred shield of light on the wolf and remove the negative effects from it. The pet's body was enveloped in a bright light from Freya's power, and his own demonic power. At this time, the helicopter was approaching the canyon. Qin Yan, who was sitting in the helicopter, asked why they had not intervened yet. The director answered and said that he should not rush, because it seemed that the guy had already found a way to deal with the enemy. Soon, the storm clouds in the sky dispersed. The protagonist's fight with the crypto spider continued for another 7 hours. The guy was barely breathing, he was tired and sweating. Sinyu mentally said that the enemy had already lost more than 90% of his health, and even his web had become lighter. The spider definitely could not cope with Black Fang, strengthened by demonic power and Freya's protection. Frowning and breathing heavily, the protagonist said that something was clearly wrong here, because all living beings instinctively want to live, but this spider, having lost so much blood, still did not try to escape. The spider concentrated the web in front of him. The web rotated, turning into a drill. A spear from the web rushed at the guy. Sinyu frowned and shouted, ordering the wolf to use hellish howl. A stream of spiritual power shot out of the wolf's mouth. The guy's eyes widened. He shouted, saying that the enemy had almost no life left. Black Fang, being angry, used the lotus of hellfire. A stream of fire struck the spider's body. However, this only angered him. There was not a single burn left on the monster's body. He raised his head and shot a web. Freya and Black Fang stood in front of and above the protagonist, protecting him. Frowning, Sinyu said that they did not need to worry about him. They should go on the offensive, deal with the enemy once and for all. Black Fang opened his mouth and used hellfire. The hellfire lotus hit the spider's side. Due to the force of the attack, the monster's body turned over on its back. It died. Sinyu sat on the ground and breathed heavily, saying that they finally killed the enemy. Smiling, he said that now they can find out what is hidden inside this cave. The protagonist barely stood up. He touched the radio in his ear, then Qin Yan shouted, telling the guy to leave immediately, because even after death, the spider can continue to move for some time. The guy abruptly turned around after hearing his words. The spider really began to get up. He raised his head and roared loudly. The monster blocked the only exit in the cave. Suddenly, its body swelled up. The protagonist screamed, ordering the pets to hide in it. Angel frowned, remembering all the times the guy was kind to her. She suddenly rushed forward. The protagonist extended his hand, asking Freya to stop. The girl did not listen to him and plunged her sword into the spider. She rammed the monster and pushed it out. The monster's body flew into the air. A moment later, it exploded. The protagonist, coming out of the cave, asked Freya if she had just mastered the skill on her own. The guy hugged her, saying that she was incredible. Looking at the strange object in the cave, Sinyu said that he now understood what the spider was so fiercely protecting. The protagonist reached out to the seed, asking Dailu what it was. The fox replied, saying it was a seed from a celestial soul vine that had an ancient bloodline. Sinyu smiled widely, saying that with such a bloodline it would be very difficult to grow. Did she know how to do it? Dailu put her finger to her face and said that he needed dewdrops from a feather grass and nectar of a magical yellow color, as well as fertilizer from experiments of higher beasts. Sinyu frowned and said that it was just a seed, but it was even more troublesome than a noble's daughter. Passing by the beasts, the guy told Dailu that she had the form of a beast king. Besides, she was so dangerous that the empress was still furious with anger. She should have acquaintances with beasts of such a level. The fox objected, saying that she would not stoop so low as to collect fertilizer. The protagonist smiled, saying that she would simply ask them. Dailu immediately objected. The guy, hearing the refusal, headed for the exit. The director sitting in the helicopter asked if he was okay. The guy raised his hand and said that everything was fine. The events transfer us to the city. 2 weeks later, we find ourselves in the city of Xiling, on the site. The protagonist sitting in the stand said that this was exactly what was expected from the national competition. Yang Shuo spread his arms to the sides and said that the great Sinyu himself had come here so early. The protagonist smiled and greeted Yang Shuo as usual, but he called Xinxin by her nickname and noted her extraordinary beauty. Yashua spat out the water in his mouth from such impudence. He frowned, asking what he called his sister. Sinyu smilingly said that the name Murong Xinxin was simply too long, so he came up with a nickname for his sister. The angry guy clutched the glass in his hand and said that he would immediately teach him a lesson for his impudence and rudeness. Xinxin sat down and told her brother to calm down and sit down next to her. Smiling at Sinyu, the girl boasted and said that her first beast had evolved and reached the second stage of its mature form, and the second had awakened the ability to control lightning. Yang Shuo was struck by an electric shock. He could not believe that his sister had spoken to another guy herself, and even so calmly accepted this stupid nickname. The guy cried mentally, saying that girls grow up too quickly, and she was so vindictive. Raising his hands, the guy screamed, saying that this world has gone crazy. Now the cat gets along with the mouse, and apparently soon a crayfish will whistle on the mountain, because his little sister found herself a betrothed. The protagonist and Xinxin froze, not understanding what was happening to Yang Shuo. Scratching his head, the protagonist asked the girl who she was fighting today. She answered by saying that the results of the draw had not yet been announced. The director came up and surprised everyone by saying that the results had already been announced. Holding a notepad in her hand, Ruyan said that their first opponent would be the White Tiger Academy. They must destroy them at all costs. The woman's chest heaved as she asked Ruyan why she was so nervous. Exhaling smoke from her cigarettes, the woman asked the director if she was really that afraid of losing to their academy. Turning her head to Qingyu, Ruyan said that she shouldn't be here, she should be in her training area, and if she wanted to check the news, it would be better to look at everything on her phone. Qingyu responded by saying that she only wanted to take a look at their trump card this year, saying that he was a master at fighting fully evolved magical beasts. Clashing their breasts, Ruyan said that this guy can do something, he just happened to be another Ningxuang, and just because someone was in a more advantageous situation, it doesn't mean that he is truly strong. The protagonist frowned, he knew that these women had been rivals since elementary school. Qingyan made the girls turn away from each other, saying that the Empress had arrived. Qingyu raised her hand, saying that she would soon make them return to their pathetic academy in disgrace. The girl frowned, telling her students to follow her and greet the Empress. The roof above the arena parted to the sides. A lone figure was visible on a cloud in the sky. Many saw the image of a mighty beast, which was a lady. Pointing to the sky, people rejoiced at the arrival of their Empress. Covering his eyes with his hand from the sun, the guy said that he could not believe that he would see the most beautiful and powerful woman in the country today. Lan was descending on the virgin soil. The girl frowned slightly, looking into the distance. The protagonist, looking at her movement, mentally said that only her arrival, gave him goosebumps. Soon the girl stepped onto the floor. She stood right next to her throne. The protagonist opened his mouth in shock when he saw the sign of 12 stars, placing him above the 10th star. Such a significant icon was attached to the girl's chest. The guy's eye flashed. Looking at the 7-colored qilin, he could not see most of the information about it. The guy frowned, the gap was so big that even the dragon's eye could not appreciate the beast. Smiling, the guy mentally told Dailu that she was probably glad that she met him, because otherwise she would have definitely died. The girl, being dissatisfied, said that although he was rude, he was right about this. Looking at the Empress, the fox said that the qilin was not the most powerful beast under her command. The protagonist felt the avatar of the dragon around the Empress. His mouth opened in shock at the sight of the power of a real dragon. He clutched his head and asked Dailu if Lan really had a purebred dragon. Didn't they die out more than 100 years ago? And according to the annals, dragons, phoenixes and qilins have divine origins. In terms of strength, the dragon was the strongest, the phoenix followed it, the qilin was the weakest among the three. If purebred dragons were extinct, then how could a dome make a contract with those hunted by all humans, despite the losses? The girl sat on the throne, waved her hand and announced the start of the battle. Sinyu smiled, saying that victory would definitely be his. The first to enter the arena against the guy was Tianqi, the son of the head of the Tiger Guild. The protagonist abruptly called on Black Fang, and the opponent his red snake. Xinxin, who was standing next to her brother, said that this was a snake with a sand attribute, a natural enemy for Black Fang with its fire. Yang Shuo, hearing her words, said that in battles between opponents of equal level, the decisive factor is not the pedigree, but the elemental advantage. The hurricane rushed towards the wolf. The protagonist frowned, ordering the use of Hellish Howl. Black Fang opened its mouth and released a stream of energy. His attack hit the tornado straight. Blood spurted when the sand touched the wolf. Tianqi grinned and said that the advantage was on his side. Now he should give up so that everything would end quickly and painlessly. Sinyu smiled and spread his arms out to the sides. He raised his hand in front of himself, saying that this was just a warm-up. Now he would only need 2 attacks to win. Tianqi frowned upon hearing such impudence. The protagonist waved his other hand and ordered the wolf to shoot a hellish howl into the sky. He immediately obeyed and fired a beam into the sky. The Empress's subordinate standing next to her asked if this guy really wanted to melt the sand. The girl smiled, saying that it was not so. The wolf's beam pierced the clouds in the sky. Putting her hand under her head, Lan said that the guy was going to use the 7-colored clouds that he summoned. Tianqi looked at his opponent in shock. She frowned when it began to rain. A red snake appeared in front of him when the guy ordered the wolf to be interrupted. The protagonist spread his arms out to the sides, saying that he had already missed his chance. Looking at the floor, the guy began to swear. His sand was wet. His beast could no longer create whirlwinds and hurricane blades. The wolf jumped up. He released a lotus of hellfire from his mouth. The lotus struck the snake in the arena. The burnt snake hissed. The smoke that had risen began to develop. The snake's corpse lay on the arena. Tianqi fell to his knees. He had received some of the damage from his pet. The Empress smiled and said that this guy had calculated the moment perfectly, and he was thinking well. Soon the maid came up to her and said that nothing strange had been found in Sinu's past. Lan looked at the girl and said that in that case he would accept the first invitation to the training camp of the Emperor's Souls. The maid bowed, expressing her understanding. Soon the protagonist returned to his comrades. He waved his hand to the director, saying that she should not forget about the reward. The guy suddenly froze when Dailu said that she smelled the scent of phoenix grass. Xinxin approached the guy and asked if he would watch the next fight. Xingyu answered by saying that he needed to go for a walk. Pointing to herself, the girl said that now it was her turn to fight. The guy, hearing this, affectionately said that she would definitely win. Yang Shuo got angry and asked if he really dared to flirt so obviously. The protagonist, scratching his gloss, apologized and said that he really had things to do and could not watch her fight. Turning away, the girl said that in that case he had to go somewhere with her after the tournament. The protagonist agreed and ran away. The events take us to Yuding Street. A huge crowd of people gathered on the street due to Zhou's arrival. The protagonist saw the rhinoceros and asked himself, did so many people come to welcome the army? In front of him, the guy saw an old man in golden armor. Behind him was an imperial war rhinoceros. Sinyu opened his mouth in shock when he saw the rhinoceros's characteristics and indicators. Dailu frowned slightly, saying that he was from a clan of war monsters who lived by fighting. They even had a feud with her clan, but the only one who could be the ruler of the western city on the border was Zhou. Scratching his head, the protagonist said that it was Zhou's father, who was currently fighting Xinxin. Clenching her fists, the fox said that the phoenix grass grows on the glacier in the west, where there are many magical beasts, and Zhou protects this area. He definitely has this grass. He should steal the grass from his bag. Sinyu smirked, saying that he is not that stupid. The guy suddenly frowned. He saw that the rhinoceros was limping. A small parasite was visible on the rhinoceros ear, and his eyes were completely filled with bugs. The protagonist, pushing his way through the crowd, shouted that the fighting rhinoceros was sick and he could help him recover. The old man frowned at him and asked if he was really sick. What did he mean? The protagonist, holding out his business card, said that he was a visiting doctor for the Heavens Guild. He immediately realized that his beast often looked lethargic, that red spots appeared in rainy weather, and that his skin became inflamed and covered with ulcers. Taking the business card in his hand, the old man said that he had specially returned to find a cure for his beast, and that until he earned his trust, he had to say why the beast was sick, then he would see if his diagnosis matched what the other doctors had said. The guy pulled a tick out of the rhinoceros. He smiled, looking at the insect on his hand. Zhou saw this and told the guy next to him that he really knew something, but many doctors couldn't do anything with his rhinoceros. But since he dared to offer help himself, how was he going to treat it? Sinyu smiled widely, saying that they should find a less crowded place. Thinking about it, the old man said that they would go to his house, then he would tell him what he needed and he would get everything. After he treated his beast, he would fulfill one of his wishes. The protagonist smiled and looked at the old man and mentally said that he would not only get the phoenix herb, but also make a useful acquaintance. The events take us to Zhou's residence. Sinyu stood near the shelves and said what ingredients he needed. Soon the protagonist brought the purple soul extract and said that it was a special drug. If he did not trust it, he could test it on another beast. The old man replied saying that he was too worried, he trusted people, so it would be slow. Handing the extract to the rhinoceros, the old man told him to drink it. Zhou sat down in front of the beast. Soon it fell asleep. Insects began to crawl out of its body. The old man saw this and raised his hand and said that his beast had not slept so well for a long time. Spreading his arms out to the sides, the guy said that he knew what was bothering him, so he could give him a recipe so that he could treat the soldiers' war beasts when they returned to Hanyang. Raising his hand, the guy said that in exchange he needed phoenix grass and a magical radiance flower. The old man frowned and said that the grass was easy to get, but the flower would take some effort, after which he invited the guy to stay with him for dinner. The protagonist scratched his head and said that he had already sneaked out here. Now his son had most likely already finished fighting with his girlfriend. Zhou's eyes widened. He was surprised and offered the guy to go with him. He was just about to visit the Empress. Returning to the arena, the protagonist was shocked that the fighters were still fighting. Xinxin was still in the arena. Zoe grinned and asked her why she was fighting so hard. Moreover, she seemed absent-minded from the very beginning. Was something distracting her? Xinxin clenched her fist, determined to win at all costs and prove her strength to the protagonist. She turned her head sharply when Sinyu asked her if she had run out of spiritual energy for the fight. The guy's pupil lit up. Mentally he said that the girl's condition left much to be desired. She was almost exhausted. For both sides this was both good and bad news. The snow-winged hunter spread his wings and let out a loud cry. The demonic wolf of darkness on the contrary howled. He had the cloning skill, because of which his clones surrounded him. Ice shards and clones rushed towards each other. The wolves dodged the attacks of ice. The wolf of darkness bared his teeth, approaching his target. The eagle flew into the air. 2 clones jumped and attacked his wings. The guy next to the protagonist was cursing, saying that the demonic wolf's technique was too mean. Shinshin carefully looked at the guy. He suddenly started coughing. He grabbed his chest and began to breathe heavily. Shinshin turned around and tried to understand what the guy was showing. Then she looked at the wolves. Her eyes involuntarily widened. Behind everyone stood a breathless and tired wolf. She immediately pointed at him with her hand, and the eagle sent ice crystals at him. Ice shards pierced the wolf's body. Zoi gritted his teeth and frowned, saying that the girl was just lucky. However, the dark wolf did not have time to do anything, as he was imprisoned in a block of ice. Shinshin wiped the sweat from her forehead. Yangshuo and the protagonist happily congratulated the girl on her victory. Yangshuo froze in shock when his sister hugged Xinyu. His body trembled as he asked the protagonist what he dared to do to his sister. Pointing at him with his hand, he ordered him to take his hands off his sister, and if he tried to touch her again, he would kill him. Zhou awkwardly scratched his head and approached the director, saying that he had also lost. The woman broke the cigarette in her hand. Pointing at them, she said that they would meet after dinner and discuss battle tactics, and no one would go to bed until they came up with the perfect plan. Zhou, who was standing next to the empress, said that his son still had a lot to learn. Lan smiled and told the old man to pretend, because he himself realized that someone had prompted her, and that someone was the very doctor he had praised so much. Zhou fell to one knee, asking her not to punish them, to give them a chance. The girl got up from the throne and said that Zoi, Shinshin and Xinyu had proven themselves worthy, so they would receive an invitation to the camp of the Emperor's souls. Meanwhile, Xinyu smilingly asked Yangshuo if he would go to the barbecue in the evening. He swearingly refused. After some time, a servant brought the couple a letter saying that the Empress was impressed by their performance, so they were invited to the camp of the Emperor's souls. The protagonist took the letter in his hand. Yangshuo crossed his arms over his chest and said that this was an elite program for the best freshmen, which was headed by the Empress herself. All who came out of there become pillars of the dragon state. Xinyu frowned. He understood that although it was tempting, he was bound by a blood contract with Dailu. Suddenly, Shinshin touched the guy's face. She removed her hands and smiling told him to stop frowning so much, because they had already agreed on the barbecue. The events take us to a restaurant. The meat was pleasantly smoking, cooking on the grill. The protagonists, along with Yangshuo and Shinshin, are having a barbecue. Xinyu, looking at Yangshuo, told him that even being from an elite clan, they did not disdain street food. He closed his eyes and replied saying that they were not monks. He and his sister eat not only barbecue, but also malatang and even youtiao. Shinshin covered her mouth and ate carefully. Closing her eyes, the protagonist remembered the little girl who was now in his house, after which he said that he thought that all the descendants of great clans were accustomed to luxury. Shinshin closed her eyes and sighed. Looking at her, Xinyu asked if something had happened to her. She replied saying that her brother really annoyed her. Pointing at himself, the guy offered to give her a massage. Yangshuo immediately spat out what he had just drunk. He jumped up saying that he would kill him now. The protagonist raised his hand saying that he would drink the penalty for impudence. The guy did not agree saying that it was not alcohol, but some kind of water. After that, he squeezed the can in his hand. Xinyu stood up and raised his hand asking the owner to bring something stronger. He soon brought them a box of alcohol. Yangshuo grinned. Like a demon, he told Xinyu that he would definitely outdrink him. Soon, Yangshuo himself was vomiting away from the drink. Trembling all over, he told the protagonist that he could still drink. After that he told Xinyu that when he married his sister, he should not dare to offend her, otherwise, as an older brother, he would not stand aside. The protagonist smiled widely telling Shinshin that her brother got drunk and finally recognized him as his son-in-law. The girl covered her mouth in embarrassment, saying that her brother was nearby today, so it wasn't that fun. She'd like to take a walk just the two of them. The protagonist stroked her cheek and said that they could take a walk the day after tomorrow, since there was a tournament tomorrow. Yangshuo, lying on the ground, said that he would go with them. The protagonist lay on the bed and said that he already had the phoenix grass, and that the flower would be brought to him soon. Holding a seed in his hand, he said that all he had to do was get the droppings of a magical beast in the form of the king of beasts. He covered himself with a blanket, saying that he would think about it tomorrow. The seal on his hand lit up. The events take us to the next morning. Dailu touched the guy's hand, trying to wake him up. Soon the guy opened his eyes. Suddenly, his eyes widened. He pressed the girl against the wall and asked why she had gotten out on her own. Had the Empress's people seen her? The girl answered, saying that she had gone out for information, and had learned something very important. Xinyu closed his eyes and said that he almost died of fear. His heart almost jumped out of his chest. Dailu pointed at the guy and asked which chest it jumped out of, his or hers. The guy quickly removed his hand from the girl's chest and apologized. Sitting in a chair, the guy asked what she learned by arbitrarily leaving the mark. Raising her hand, the girl said that the fleet admiral, Jean, caught a jellyfish, a spiritual snake of disasters. She knows a lot, and given how the state operates, she will probably be executed in 3 days. Imagining the appearance of a jellyfish, the fox said that she had known her for a long time. She was her friend, Besides, she was a mythical beast of the form of the king of beasts. Sinyu frowned and asked her if she really wanted to save her. Dailu approached the guy and said that the jellyfish had information that Empress Lan participated in the battle to exterminate dragons. They could save her. The protagonist did not even listen to the end and immediately refused. He understood that this was an underground prison in the fleet headquarters. There were a whole 1,000 high-level hunters who patrolled the territory. In the headquarters itself there were hunters of the 10th star, controlling beasts with the blood of the sea god. In addition, among them was the one-armed admiral himself. Raising the girl by the chin, the guy said that he would not go to certain death, and she should not either. Because she is a beast connected to him by a blood contract, she is obliged to obey him. Suddenly, a system window appeared near the guy. The guy looked at the system panel and began to swear loudly. The system issued a task to save the jellyfish. For failure to complete it threatened to give out all the information about Dailu to the Empress. The guy rubbed his chin and said that if he was exposed, his sister would also suffer. But if he completed the task, he would be able to make a contract with the jellyfish, the beast form of the king of beasts, and its droppings could be used as fertilizer for the vines. Frowning and coughing into his fist, he told the fox that they would still go save her friend. The girl was happy and covered her smile with her hands. Xinyun picked up the phone. He read the latest news about the jellyfish on the internet. The fox standing next to him said that spiritual snakes have special blood. If you cut off its head on a full moon, you can get a whole magic crystal, but if you kill it on another day, the crystal will be incomplete. The protagonist slapped himself in the face and said that he agreed to a crazy act. Then he told Dial to return to the mark of the beast trapper, and he needs to prepare. The events take us to the place of the battlefield that the judges chose. Bloody water bubbled, giving the place an ominous look. Yangshuo, who was standing next to the protagonist, said that the lake of the fallen dragon was formed during the battle with the dragons. Of course, this is only rumors. But they say that a giant dragon fell here, whose blood colored the water. Since then it always looks like boiling magma. Sinu's pupils lit up when he said that the test was cruel. If they lost, they could remain without skin. The guy's gaze broke through the water. He passed through layers of water. At the very bottom, the guy saw huge dragon bones. His eye widened in shock at the sight of the bones. Rubbing his chin, the guy mentally said that if he let the beast absorb the bones, it will definitely evolve. Yanshua hit the guy with his elbow, telling him to wake up, otherwise he would have been standing like this from the beginning. Soon, many helicopters appeared above the arena. One of the cameramen set up a camera. Ruashua and Little Sherman were sitting in their room happily and watching the screen. The two teams stood opposite each other. The protagonist put his hand to his chest and said that he had to show his sister and the others what he was capable of. The guy summoned his faithful wolf. His partners also summoned their pets. Tianchi frowned and shouted, saying that he would show them the results of countless training. The guy summoned his snake. Zhouye summoned his dark wolf next to him. The protagonist frowned. He did not understand why the third guy from the enemy team did not summon his beast. Zhouye's partner smirked, watching the opponents. The griffin opened its beak and collected lightning in it. Something rushed at great speed near the guy. The protagonist looked to the side and told Jianshua to be careful. Someone at high speed injured the griffin. A moment later, the shadow monkey appeared next to its master. Shinshin looked at the ninja monkey and realized that their opponent was too inconvenient. Yangshuo frowned and said that this beast is able to instantly teleport several times in a row in a limited area. Suddenly, the red snake created a storm, while the dark wolf began to create clones of itself. The brother and sister hesitated. The sandstorm blocked their view, which made it impossible for them to attack the enemy. The guy smiled and pointed at the underworld wolf and told Zhou to focus on it. A moment later, the dark wolves inflicted wounds on Black Fang's body. The protagonist frowned and shouted, telling the wolf not to stop and to break through this sandstorm. The wolf jumped straight into the storm. He passed through the storm. The ninja saw this and threw kunai of darkness. The kunai hit the wolf's body. It quickly sank into the shadows. It crawled out near its owner. Yangshuo frowned and said that it was too mean to focus all attacks on Sinyu. Lightning struck from the sky. The griffin used heavenly lightning to destroy the shadow wolves. The wolves jumped from side to side trying to dodge the lightning. The shadow monkey ignored this and continued throwing kunai and shuriken. The bone wyvern exhaled a gust of wind, reflecting the enemy's attack. The guy smiled and said that they were wasting their time, because they could not protect the wolf of the underworld forever. The protagonist frowned upon hearing his words. Black Fang's body was enveloped by demonic power, at the protagonist's command. The wounds on his body began to regenerate. Sinyu smiled and said that everything was just beginning. The host looked at the underworld wolf and said that it was a real demonic power. All the wounds of the underworld wolf were completely healed, and it was restored to a perfect state. The guy brought his eyebrows together, mentally saying that the healing effect of the demon's power was simply incredible. If it were another beast, he would have already been lying down without strength. The monkey next to him recoiled back. The red snake hissed and moved away. The dark wolf pressed itself to the ground. The beasts were afraid of the underworld wolf. Black Fang raised its head and began to form a lotus of hellfire. The fire flew up and began to dissipate like ripples on water. Yangshuo opened his mouth in surprise. He could not imagine that the skill of one beast simultaneously contained 4 attributes: wind, fire, darkness, and demon power. The flames rushed towards the enemies. Tianqi clasped his hands together, ordering the snake to use the hurricane blade to extinguish the fire. The snake immediately created a hurricane of sand. The huge tornado caused the lake around it to ripple. The fire lotus hit the tornado straight on. Tianqi was shocked as if he had been struck by an electric shock. He did not understand why his earth element could not suppress the fire. The protagonist stretched out his hand, saying that in front of absolute power, elemental superiority does not matter. The flames pierced the tornado and rushed forward. The operators could barely stand in their places due to the gusts of wind. A huge amount of smoke rose into the air. The red snake could not hold back her tears due to the burns she received. The ninja and the dark wolf also received burns. Xingxin crossed her arms under her chest and realized that Sinyu did not fight with all his strength yesterday. Sinyu pointed his finger at himself and said that since everyone in the White Tiger Academy was so weak, he could handle them alone. The guy grabbed the angry Tianqi and told him not to give in to emotions because the plan remained the same. The red snake once again created a tornado of sand. The monkey began to throw kunai. The clones of the dark wolf rushed to attack. 3 attacks rushed straight at the wolf of the underworld. Tianqi smiled, saying that even with the power of a demon, he would not be able to withstand an attack of such power. The protagonist only frowned slightly. All 3 attacks hit the wolf and created a powerful gust of wind. Armor made of red energy appeared through the smoke. Tianqi froze with his mouth open in shock. In front of them stood Black Fang, clad in armor. He concentrated his own flames into the armor. The guy standing near Tianqi said that this armor can absorb powerful attacks and convert the damage received into armor energy. This combat technique requires not only the high consciousness of the beast, but also a huge reserve of spiritual power from the hunter. The protagonist smiled and asked the opponents if they really didn't notice anything. The guys turned around abruptly and realized that the beasts of Bart and Sister Murong had disappeared. The guy raised his head, saying that they were from above. Lightning struck the 3 beasts of the opponents. The monkey turned around abruptly. However, the bone wyvern still managed to grab the ninja. She lifted him up and dragged him across the arena. The guy gritted his teeth, realizing that the shadow ninja monkey would not have enough strength to break free and he would be thrown out of the arena. The guy hastily summoned his second beast, a huge giant. The protagonist summoned Freya, saying that now they can fight at full strength. The giant struck with his fist. Freya blocked the fist with her barrier. The guy frowned and shouted, saying that he had seen this beast in books. It was a sacred angel of light. But how could a beast of the initial stage stand against a stone giant? Sinyu pointed at the opponent, saying that his beast was much stronger than he could imagine. The bone wyvern threw the monkey out of the arena. It fell straight into the boiling water like magma. The monkey writhed and screamed in pain. The protagonist smiled, standing next to his 2 beasts. He pointed at Black Fang and told him not to interfere in the fight. Yanheng frowned angrily and shouted, saying that he could not defeat their beasts that had already reached an advanced form with 1 beast of the initial form. The red snake hissed and rushed forward. The angel's body blurred. Seeing this, Yanheng shouted, ordering the stone giant to cover the snake. Freya appeared above the snake in an instant. She threw it back with a blow. The snake slammed into the giant's body with a painful hiss. The giant's legs slid back before he stopped. The cameraman and reporters screamed, not understanding what was happening. Pointing at the angel, Yangshuo asked what kind of ability it was, a light kick or something. Sinyu grinned and said that it was a lightning dash. Soy scratched his head and said that this beast had enormous strength. Even a stone giant would have a hard time withstanding its blows. The protagonist waved his hand at Yanheng. He pointed at him, asking how he liked his lightning dash. The boys frowned, saying that they still had a chance. Soy summoned a thunder rhinoceros. Tianqi smiled, saying that he would not give in to anyone a second time. A thunder gray fox appeared next to the boy. The brother and sister raised their hands, realizing that it was time for them to summon their pets. Freya rushed forward, preparing to kick the gray fox out of the arena. The stone giant Yanheng stood in the angel's way. The wyvern and eagle flapped their wings as their mistress ordered them to hold off the enemies. Freya kicked the fox. At the same time, the stone giant struck. The griffin's lightning struck the rhinoceros. The 3 White Tiger Academy disciples were breathing heavily, their legs buckling. Zoi's pupils lit up as he said that he had almost no energy left, and judging from Sinyu's appearance, he still had plenty of strength. Tianqi frowned and said that his strength was only enough for 1 attack. Yanheng looked at the enemies and said that in that case they should use their signature technique. The protagonist clenched his fist and said that the spiritual power of the enemies was running out. They were trying to deliver the last and most powerful blow. The stone giant began to increase in size. A powerful whirlwind of sand formed around the giant. Then, thanks to the ability of the Wolf of Darkness, the students created columns of the stone giant. The protagonist grinned and said that they needed to get ready. Yanheng frowned and ordered to attack. Several giants rushed at the wolf of the underworld at the same time. 3 giants struck. They stood up without hitting their target. Yanheng raised his head. It turned out that the griffin lifted the wolf into the air, saving him from the giants. Black Fang began to concentrate fire in his mouth. Pointing at the wolf, the protagonist told him to finish off his enemies. Xinxin waved her hand, ordering the wyvern to ignite the flame of souls. Clenching his fist, Yanshua ordered the griffin to release all the power of lightning. The bone wyvern opened its jaws. The griffin began to concentrate lightning in its beak. The spiritual power of the 3 beasts was gathered right in the mouth of the underworld wolf. The space in the sky near the beasts was filled with lightning and various types of energy. Flames burst out of the wolf's mouth. The fire rushed towards the giants like a meteorite. A moment later, a powerful explosion occurred in the arena. Fragments of the giants' bodies flew in all directions. The water around rebelled and bubbled. Steam rose from the water. The giant's real body was glowing. The shadow wolf lay defeated on the ground. The red snake was also defeated. Its injuries were the most serious of all. The 3 guys fell from fatigue and disappointment. At this moment, the host declared the protagonist's team the winner of today's fight. The protagonist grabbed the girl by the waist and spun around, rejoicing in his victory. Yanshua clenched his fist and, furious, asked the guy if he was being impudent by pawing at his sister right on air. The protagonist turned around when Yanheng called him. Smiling, Yanheng said that he really was a monster. This time they lost fairly and without question. Xinyu laughed and thanked him for the compliment. The guy turned his head sharply, hearing the 2 directors thanking each other for helping each other. The women's hands were shaking from tension. Xinyu smiled, saying, Ruyan should keep an eye on her star student, because next year he would be transferring to their academy. Ruyan smiled back and asked if she could do it. She raised her hand and, closing her eyes, asked the protagonist to come over. The girl suddenly grabbed the guy. She pressed him to her chest. Pointing at Xinyu, Ruyan said that she saved this guy's life. He will always belong to her. The protagonist, nervously smiling, asked the director to calm down, because they are on live TV after all. The events take us to Rashia's room. The girl squeezed the remote control with force from anger and mentally said that this director is a vile bitch. The events take us to the night city. Yanshua angrily looked at the protagonist, who had only had a couple of glasses today, but was already drunk. Xinxin suggested that the guy just doesn't know how to drink cocktails. Soon the couple laid the guy on the bed. The door of Sinyu's room closed. The guy carefully opened one eye. Raising his hand, he ordered Dailu to go out, because they need to go to the Lake of the Fallen Dragon. The fox appeared next to the guy and asked him where he was going drunk in the middle of the night. Sinyu answered by saying that he figured out how to save the jellyfish, and he needs her to go with him. The girl's eyes widened in shock. The guy held out his finger and said that in order to escape, she needed to evolve, because she was stuck at the 3rd stage of the Beast King, and the dragon power in her had not yet dissipated, so she would evolve if she was given a dragon bone. The girl spread her arms out to the sides, telling the guy that he was really a fool or just pretending to be one. No creature could combine its blood with the dragon's. No matter how much a dragon bone cost, it was just a bone after all. The guy frowned and asked what would happen if he said that he really had a way. The fox smiled nervously and asked if he wanted her to evolve into a 9-tailed dragon fox. This was probably a joke. Dailu couldn't help but purse her lips and frowned. It was raining in the night city. Sinyu and the fox came to the fallen dragon lake. The girl grabbed the guy with her tail when he said that the chance of being noticed due to the rain had decreased. Now she had to protect him with fox fire when he went down into the water. Dailu pulled the guy sharply towards himself. Water splashed in all directions. The fox, having enveloped herself and the guy with the barrier, swam into the depths of the lake. The protagonist frowned and said that they needed to swim a little to the left. The couple sank deeper and deeper into the bloody waters of the lake. The fox swimming in front said that she saw the target. Right in front of them was a huge bone. The fox's eye widened in surprise. Sinyu, who was next to her, said that the heart bone is the smallest, but the densest and hardest part of the dragon. The ring on the guy's hand twisted. A moment later, it began to glow brightly. The bright light from the ring enveloped the entire bone of the dragon. While the bone was being absorbed by the ring, Sinyu told Dailu that when they got to the shore, they would immediately go to the forest to merge. There were many predatory animals there, but no one would interfere with them there. Soon the couple found themselves in the forest. Smiling, Sinyu told Dailu that he would give her another thing for evolution. Taking the crystal in her hand, the fox asked where he got it. She carefully examined the crystal of blood fusion. Throwing a heart pill to the girl, the protagonist said that he was the boss here, and she just needed to take it and keep quiet. Frowning, the guy told the fox that this was a very risky undertaking, and if the fusion with the dragon's blood failed, then she would face a strong rollback. The girl grabbed the guy's hand and asked since when did her master become so indecisive. The 9-tailed fox straightened up and said that from the moment she agreed to go with him to the lake, Everything had already been decided. She wanted to save her friend. She wanted the Empress to no longer be able to hold her back. The guy's ring lit up when he said that she was right after all. The girl took the form of a fox when a huge bone appeared. She opened her mouth and began to absorb everything. Soon the fox swallowed everything without a trace. For a few seconds she stood calmly, not feeling anything. Suddenly, her eyes trembled. The fox bared her teeth, saying that her body was burning from the inside. She raised her hind legs and rushed forward. Dailu ran through the forest, breaking everything in her path. Sinew ran after her, saying that the blood fusion crystal had begun to act. Now she only had to hold on. Suddenly an energy surge occurred right in front of him. The fox bared her teeth and looked towards the city. On the screen of one of the buildings, she saw an image of the Empress. Dailu's pupils narrowed. The protagonist rolled behind the fox and told her that she could handle it. Looking into her eyes, he told her to remember what she had just said. If she couldn't handle it, then everything would be lost. She should hold on, because he would help her become stronger, help her take revenge, help her live under the sun. The girl's eye reflected the image of the guy. She opened her mouth and roared. Sinew landed on the ground and asked her if she was okay. Suddenly, the fox's body was enveloped in thick steam. A naked Dailu emerged from the smoke. She puffed out her cheeks angrily looking at her master. The protagonist smiled, saying that she had done it. Suddenly, the fox appeared right in front of him. She knocked the guy to the ground. The girl sat right on him. Blushing with embarrassment, she asked why he was talking like this was a marriage proposal. Sighing, Dailu approached her master. Her lips trembled as she asked him to say it again. Soon morning came. Now the protagonist was not destined to become a great magician by 30. The dried-up guy sat on a stone, mentally saying that he forgot that the dragon is lustful by nature, and he is only a man. He could not fight the nine-tailed fox, and calling other animals was useless. Their strength would not be enough anyway. Clutching his head, the guy said that this was even crazier than waking up in someone else's bed after drinking. Suddenly, Dailu grabbed the guy by the throat and called him a scoundrel. Moving away from the guy, she asked why he could not control himself. Sinew took the rings and robe, saying that she had better get dressed, because it was indecent to walk naked. Smiling, the girl asked if he was really pretending to be a gentleman even after what he had seen. Throwing a cloak over the girl's body, the guy said that they were both adults. Afterwards, he hugged her, saying that if the shot was accurate, he would take care of the little fox's life. The fox threw a stone at the guy, telling him to go away. The protagonist, stroking the bruise, looked at his phone. He showed the screen to the fox, saying that even though a fox of discord had run between them, he now congratulated her on her perfect breakthrough and successful evolution. The girl froze, noticing 2 dragon horns on her head. The guy's eyes sparkled. Posing and smiling, Dailu said that all the injuries had also healed. Giving the girl a thumbs up, Sinew said that she was the first summoned beast in the world who managed to absorb the blood of a purebred dragon. The events take us to the hotel. Dailu frowned while the guy in front of her said that the prison was very well guarded, and they could only save the jellyfish on the ice island in 2 days, and the competition was in 6 days, so they had to make it in time, otherwise people would suspect something. Lowering the phone, Sinew asked the fox if she had any questions. Covering her mouth, she asked how he was going to compete with those with the 9th star if he only had 2 or 3,000 spiritual power. The protagonist smiled widely, saying that he had one way, but he would need a dragon elixir, and for certain reasons he would have to prepare it himself, and he would also need her blood. The girl immediately cut her finger, saying that he could take as much as he needed. After that, the fox drew blood into a flask. Licking the girl's finger, the guy said that this is not how to treat your body. Dailu froze with her finger in her mouth. Suddenly, the guy's phone rang. He picked it up. On the screen, he could see that Shinshin had sent a message, reminding him of a meeting tonight. The events take us to the evening. Yanshuo waved his hand calling the guy. Sinew saw him and asked why they came so early. Yanshuo's face twisted in disgust when he said that his sister insisted on it. Shinshin in her new dress approached the guys, saying that she had been waiting for them for a long time. Approaching the girl, the guy asked her if she could help him with something. Raising his hand, he said that he needed special ingredients, but they were too expensive, and he could not buy them. The girl smiled and said that she could help him. The protagonist put his hands on the girl's shoulders, saying that she was beautiful. Yanshuo angrily reminded that he was still here. The girl smiled and told her brother that she would go with Sinew for herbs. The guy took the hint and said that he had some business today. Pointing to the protagonist, the girl's brother asked him to go away with him. Hugging the guy, Yanshuo told him to watch himself, because he could still forgive him for groping her, but if he took her to a hotel, he would most likely kill him. After that, Yanshuo waved his hand and said goodbye to the couple. The events take us to the herbal shop. The protagonist, looking at the purchased herbs, was happy and thanked Shinshin. As gratitude, he decided to prepare strengthening elixirs suitable for his beasts. The girl clasped her hands and asked the guy if he noticed anything. Sinew, looking at the girl who closed her eyes, realized that she wanted him to praise her image. Turning around, he said that nothing seemed to have changed. This greatly offended the girl. Following the guy, she wondered if the guy really hadn't noticed anything. The couple walked down a dark alley. Shinshin pressed her hands to her chest. The protagonist turned around abruptly, asking the girl what had happened to her. The black cat meowed. Shinshin, who had fallen to the ground, said that everything was fine, she had just been scared of the kitten. Sinyu, approaching him, grabbed her leg, and realizing that she had sprained her ankle, said that she should be more careful. Standing with his back to the girl, he said that the street was quite slippery, it would be better for him to carry her. The cat narrowed her eyes sarcastically and licked her paw. Shinshin climbed onto the guy's back. Her chest pressed against his back. The girl, embarrassed, called out to Sinyu, who looked at her embarrassedly and asked if something had happened. Shinshin looked up at the sky and said that it had started raining. The protagonist ran under the rain. Soon they found themselves in the guy's house. Sinyu dried himself with a towel. Then he looked at the girl. Throwing her a towel, he said that she had better dry herself if she didn't want to get sick. Maybe she could help him change his clothes, massage his ankle. The girl sighed and said that she could handle it herself. Suddenly, the guy fell in front of the girl. He began to massage her ankle. Continuing to massage, the guy asked Shinshin if this was the first time she had sprained her ankle due to a magical beast. The girl was surprised and asked how he knew. The guy answered by saying that he was a doctor after all and could treat both summoned beasts and people. Frowning, Shinshin said that it happened when she was 5 years old. She was at the sea with her father. Her father saved the girl then, but lost his arm. Looking away, she said that compared to what her father had gone through, her injury was nothing. Sinyu stood up and turned around and said that she should take it easy on her leg in the next few days, and then she would definitely recover before the final. Suddenly, the girl touched his hand. Embarrassed, she asked if he would help her to the bathroom. The protagonist nodded, agreeing to the request. Soon, Shinshin found herself in the bathroom. She was taking a hot shower. The rain outside did not stop. Coming out of the shower, the girl mentally asked herself if she was being too straightforward. Suddenly, instead of Sinyu, she saw her brother on the bed. He asked her how her leg was, if the pain had gone away. Turning around, the guy said that Sinyu told him to come, and he himself went away on business. Frowning, Yangshuo said that he knew that she liked him, but she was going too far. Feelings can push her to rash actions, so she should learn to control them. The girl looked at her phone and agreed with her brother. Meanwhile, the protagonist raised his hand and ordered Dailu to come out and help him with the elixirs. The fox appeared and asked the guy why he didn't stay with her. The guy answered by saying that she knew the answer herself, and now they needed to create at least 2 perfect dragon elixirs. The girl puffed out her cheeks and said that now they couldn't even joke. So the preparation of the potion began. The fox processed the ingredients with flame, and the guy mixed everything thoroughly. The rain outside still did not stop. After many hours of work, 2 pills appeared in the guy's hand. His eyes involuntarily closed. He was too tired. Dailu caught the fallen guy. Smiling, she thanked him. Sinyu stood in front of the mirror and exclaimed that it was time for him to set off on a journey full of deadly dangers. Dailu widened her eyes and suggested that the owner should not go, since he had no reason to risk his life for the sake of a summoned beast, and then added that she had the form of the king of beasts, and she could probably get out unharmed. Snapping his fingers on the assistant's forehead, the protagonist asked her to stop, since he had already said that she was not just a summoned beast for him, but part of the family, and no matter where this path led them, he would go with her to the end. Adjusting her hair, the 9-tailed fox called out to the owner, to which he noted that besides, he was doing this not only because of her. Spreading her arms, the girl clarified with him about the academy, and added that he would have to disappear for a few days, and this issue should not be left to chance, to which he replied that he said that he was going to his sister and he needed to get home as soon as possible, after which the director gave him 3 whole days of leave. The sports complex building appeared and someone said that the protagonist had taken a vacation and gone home, so he would not be attending training for the next few days. Shinshin looked away sadly and said that she thought so, to which her brother asked where she was going. Frowning, the youngest daughter of the Murong family explained that she was not feeling well, so she would skip training and return to the hotel, to which he said that she should go and rest then, and he thought about what his sister had talked about with Sinyu yesterday, and why she was so depressed now. The teacher held a notepad in his hand and noted that everyone had scattered, and no one wanted to go to class, and they did not even care that the teacher was there. Palm trees were visible on the beach. The heroes were standing by the shore and looking at the sea wave. The protagonist extended his hand forward and said that swimming straight from the azure beach to the island of ice and fire would be the fastest way to get there, and then asked if Dailu could swim that distance. Raising her eyebrows, the 9-tailed fox exclaimed that she was a fox, not a shark, and that if she spent too much time in the water, she would feel ill, to which the owner asked what he could offer in that case. The assistant grinned and asked to watch carefully. Sea waves began to rise to the surface. Magical animals appeared in the water. Standing in front of the ocean, the protagonist ordered to stop wasting this energy, because such manipulations could only lure all the sea monsters, to which the fox said that this was exactly what she wanted. Spreading her fingers, the girl exclaimed that here he is. A whale in chains jumped out of the water, and the boy said that it was a royal laurel tiger whale, a magical beast of the first stage beast king form, strong, but unlucky to meet a fox. The animal dove into the depths of the ocean. Standing on the mythical beast, Dailu shouted for it to swim forward and take them to the island of ice and fire. The fox asked if her master was nervous, to which he closed his eyes and asked if she would believe him if she said she was not nervous. The girl grinned and noted that it was not too late and there was still a chance to refuse, to which the protagonist said that he did not regret his choice, after which he asked to wake him up when they reached the island. Dailu called out to the owner, to which he, closing his eyes, clarified that again. Closing her lips, the nine-tailed fox replied that it was nothing, at the same time deciding that she would protect him all her life. Ice and fire cliffs were visible on the island. The main naval base appeared. Jean held a cigar in his mouth and said that Yanshuo and Xinshin were on the right path. Holding a newspaper in his hand, the admiral noted that their friend was also extremely talented. Folding his hands behind his back, the old man asked why the man did not take a vacation and visit the children if he was so worried about them, to which he clarified what brought the general here. Baiyu frowned and said that the execution of Medusa was a serious matter and the empress was worried, so she sent him to supervise the process, to which Jean asked if the princess did not trust him anymore. People in red robes appeared, and the old man said that he knew what was happening on land, and not long ago in Sakurano, cultists tried to break through the border, but they were pushed back, and in the south, there was also unrest, only fugitives and bandits, and then he added that the worst thing was the people from the Flame Alliance, who would not leave Medusa alone. Closing his eyes, the Navy Admiral asked if they knew that the general was already here, to which he laughed. Gritting his teeth, the old man asked if he thought that they would dare to stick their nose in here when they knew that there were two generals here. The young men's eyes widened in alarm. The man lowered the corners of his mouth and exclaimed that they should stop pressuring them, because they were trusted people, and then added that it was really time to start, and ordered the prisoner to be brought in. The iron elevator was going up. The girl with the crystal on her forehead was chained. A huge guillotine towered in front of her. Clenching his fist, the ground forces general exclaimed that Medusa's atrocities were countless, and the fact that she managed to survive until today was already the empress's mercy. The prisoner asked him again, her eyes widening. The magical beast frowned and said that this was ridiculous, and if they considered her a monster, then who was Lan, who had more dirty secrets than everyone else put together? Dailu asked if Medusa was guarded by two generals at once, and how they could fight them at all, to which Sinew gritted his teeth and suggested waiting a little longer and waiting for a chance. The protagonist's lips turned down, wondering if there was anyone else here. The waves raged between the rocks. Jean spread his fingers and told everyone to prepare the Dragon Fang execution weapon. The assistant began to pull the rope. The huge blade rose up. Medusa's eyes widened and she exclaimed whether Lan thought that if she died, her dark secrets would forever remain at the bottom of the sea. Bright streams began to emanate from the body of the mythical beast, and the girl declared that sooner or later the sins she had committed 200 years ago would come to light. The young man clenched his jaws from the weight. The other guy was tightly clutching the chain in his fist. Suddenly, the soldier's eyes were covered in red vessels. Magical streams enveloped his blade. Rays of energy were approaching the warrior's face. Baiyu spread his fingers and shouted that one should not inhale the spiritual mist. Tree branches began to break through the ground. The jellyfish attacked the Navy members with its fine branches. The mythical beast opened its mouth and screamed. Gritting its teeth, the ground forces general said that this monster was truly incredible, since it could still use illusions even in this situation. Lowering its brows, the spiritual catastrophe snake asked if the old man had forgotten what happened to his family, since out of the 5 great clans, only his was exterminated, and now the descendant of the Bai family serves the Lan and calls it loyalty. But hasn't he betrayed his ancestors? Baiyu frowned and told the brat to mind his own business. The youth pointed to the side and exclaimed that the electrical room was here, and once they cut off the power, everyone would begin to act. Sinew was planting a bomb on a pillar, and the strangers were shouting for the Navy to raise their hands or else they would be fired upon, to which they cried out that things were bad and it was an ambush. A shell was fired from the barrel of the cannon. A moment later, there was a huge explosion. Spotlights illuminated the area, and people shouted that it was a disaster, because someone was attacking the prison. The man in the robe extended his finger forward and ordered his allies to attack. The people and magical beasts rushed forward. Lowering his chin, the ground general ordered to stop panicking and activate the defensive protocol and block with the edge, so that not even a fly could fly away. Opening his mouth wide, Jean ordered to continue the execution, and once Medusa was dead, they would have no reason to attack anymore. Sinew asked Dailu to act, to which she pushed off the ground with her foot and told her master that she could be trusted. A magical barrier appeared in the middle of the space. The 9-tailed fox dragged Medusa along with her. The assistant galloped up the cliff. The admiral frowned and was surprised by what he saw. The mythical beast did not understand what Dailu was doing here, to which she turned her head and asked him not to say anything, but to get out first and then discuss everything. Raising 2 fingers, Jean said that the 9-tailed fox was being sought throughout the dragon state, and she herself decided to show up here, which was quite bold, after which he added that it was all the better, because it would send them both to the next world. A silhouette of a man appeared on the cliff. Suddenly, a huge whale swam under the island. Raising his eyes, Baiyu asked his partner to wait and look there. The members of the navy noticed the protagonist in a demonic mask in front of them. Raising his head, the old man asked what clan the protagonist was from. The boy frowned and explained that they didn't need to know that, because he only came for that snake, and whoever got in his way would die. Frowning, Medusa couldn't understand how this young man could say such things with his spiritual power, and how this second star hunter even had the courage to address him like that, and Dyla thought that her master had gotten into character quite well. The men in robes stood at the foot of the mountain and asked who this man was, and maybe he was one of them, but it didn't matter now, and they needed to help first. With a cigar in his mouth, the Navy Admiral said that the man in black would only get one thing for invading the Navy headquarters, and that was death. The old man opened his mouth wide and shouted that whoever captured him alive would receive a generous reward. Sinew opened his mouth slightly. Medusa looked up and thought about how his spiritual power had only increased tenfold. The protagonist said that he would have to hold out for 10 minutes at most, and then the 9-tailed fox would be responsible for his life, to which she bit her lips and replied that she understood everything. Pointing a finger in front of him, the admiral exclaimed that everyone needed to move forward. The soldiers and magical animals rushed to attack. The members of the navy approached the cliff on the cliff. Standing behind his assistant, the protagonist exclaimed for her to act, to which she asked her to take care of Medusa. Dailu crossed her arms. Suddenly, a stream of bright magic formed under her feet. A powerful energy column rose above the island. The boys opened their mouths in fear and screamed loudly. The fox slipped past the wolf. The young man in the black robe foamed at the mouth and said that this just shows that this man is really from the Flame Alliance, to which he asked why they were also being attacked. Gritting his teeth, Jean noticed that this fox seemed to have evolved. Baiyu frowned and saw that the dragon's scales, horns, claws, and pupils reminded him of the dragon's power that had disappeared 200 years ago, and the admiral said that this guy was extremely dangerous, so he couldn't be allowed to leave the island of ice and fire. The ground general clenched his palms and exclaimed that he knew it himself. Suddenly, the ground began to crack. Sinew appeared in a dark cloak and a demonic mask. A monstrous plant rose above the island. The 9-tailed fox spread its arms out to the sides. The monstrous flower swallowed the team into its mouth. The heroes began to fall down and scream loudly. Red streams appeared around. The soldier put his hand to his head and said that this was a beast of the form of the king of beasts, a cursed demonic flower, to which the other remarked that it was better to see once than to hear 100 times, and this plant beast with an ancient lineage looked incredible. The youth raised his head and exclaimed that as expected of the god of plant beasts, this one destroyed the enemy with one blow. Sinew looked away. Putting his palm on the ground, the protagonist asked where they were. Medusa lowered the corners of her lips and explained that this was the stomach of the cursed demonic flower. Suddenly, magical monsters swooped down on them. The spiritual snake of catastrophes widened its eyes in fear. The protagonist's pupils sparkled brightly. Dailu formed a magical protective field around her partners. The guy frowned menacingly. Pointing his finger to the side, the young man asked to use the dragon's breath and attack the weak spot on the right. At the same second, the spirit of the magical beast rushed through the air. The stem of the demonic flower began to be covered with red bumps. The admiral asked how the general was feeling, since 6 minutes had already passed, to which he opened his mouth and said that after being swallowed by the demonic flower, one can experience torment, as if his flesh begins to decompose, and his bones are ground into powder, and even if this dragon fox can do something, she will not be able to get up. A moment later, the monstrous plant burst into pieces. The magical beast suddenly burst out. Lowering his eyebrows, Baiyu did not understand how this was possible, and whether the girl was able to escape from the stomach of the damned flower, although this simply could not be. Jean dropped his jaw and noted that the power of the dragon flame was truly impressive, and even the cursed demon flower with ancient blood could not withstand this attack. The man stood on the roof and shouted that they had been fighting the Flame Alliance for 100 years, and the guy had such power, but was not even in the top 10 wanted list. The protagonist stood on the animal's head and laughed. The Navy Admiral extended his palm and said that since the stranger did not want to reveal his identity, then they would have to arrest him and slowly interrogate him in an underwater prison. At that moment, a huge whale emerged from the water. The protagonist frowned in fear. The sea animal opened its mouth, filled with fangs. The dragon fox clenched its teeth in anger. The young man lowered his eyebrows and said that this was a very powerful destructive force. The magical whale began to emit waves of magic in front of itself. The magical animal released a stream of flame from its mouth. Suddenly, a bright flash of energy appeared in the air. Blood appeared under Sinew's eyes, and the protagonist informed Dyla that they could not drag out the fight, because the medicine would only last for a little over 3 minutes. The assistant waved her tail and exclaimed that in that case, they should quickly leave. The ground general spread his fingers and said that it would not happen that quickly, and used the myriad vines execution. The sharp branches of the plant enveloped the body of the nine-tailed fox. Raising his fist, the old man shouted that although they had burned his flower with dragon flames, plant beasts by nature did not feel pain, so the strangers had miscalculated. Looking down, the young man realized that they were being attacked from both sides, and surrounded from the front and back, so all was lost. The animal wrapped in vines howled loudly. A trident appeared above the huge whale. Sharp spears rushed towards the protagonist. Sitting on the beast's head, the protagonist asked Dailu to stop resisting and suppress the dragon's power and turn off the energy shield. Looking up, the nine-tailed fox asked why this was necessary, to which the owner exclaimed that it was necessary to just do it. The vine branches burst out from the ground. Clenching his jaw, the ground general did not understand why this fox suddenly stopped struggling and even refused to defend itself. The admiral lowered his eyebrows and noted that in any case, no enemy could withstand the blow of the sea god Leviathan's trident. Suddenly, a powerful explosion occurred, and Baiyu exclaimed that they were still alive, to which Jean said that this could not be. A magical dragon appeared among the gray clouds. Gritting his teeth, the Navy admiral shouted that it was a dragon soul. The ground general raised his eyes and cried out that this bastard had actually released the dragon's soul, and he didn't understand who it really was. Gritting his teeth, Dailu asked if she had survived, to which Sinyu explained that it was her ability that automatically protected against fatal damage and was perfect for fighting Leviathan and the cursed demonic flower, and the assistant asked if the master was too calm, and the system reported the girl's characteristics. With his eyes bulging, the protagonist reported that his spiritual energy was almost at zero, and in a minute he could lose consciousness or even die, so he needed to leave here as soon as possible. The nine-tailed fox's eyes turned white, and she exclaimed that in that case, they would do so. Gritting his teeth, the old man shouted that they would not leave. Huge vine branches burst out from under the ground. With her claws spread, Dailu shouted for the enemy to disappear. At the same moment, a powerful energy pillar formed above the island. Lowering his eyebrows, the protagonist exclaimed that it was a bloody gaze. A magic funnel appeared above the body of the magical beast. In the middle of it, a bright eye was visible. Lowering his jaw, Jean explained that they represented the honor of the Dragon State's navy, and billions of its citizens were behind them, so they could not allow strangers to escape from the islands of ice and fire, and then asked Leviathan to use the sea god's trident. Suddenly, a high wave formed on the surface of the water. Streams of liquid merged into a magic weapon. The magic blade rushed forward. A bright sword flew out of the purple funnel. The forces of both weapons clashed. A flash of light appeared in the air above the sea. A moment later, a powerful explosion occurred on the island. Grabbing his horns, Sinyu screamed loudly. Gray clouds thickened in the sky. At the same second, raindrops appeared. The Navy members looked at the destroyed base. Holding a cigar in his mouth, Jean exclaimed that they had escaped. Baiyu lowered his eyebrows and asked if this was the power of the dragon soul, and remarked that he was still old for this. The man extended his hand forward and shouted that this was the Navy headquarters and no one could just come and go on a whim, and then ordered all available ships to comb the coastal waters. A moment later, huge ships descended on the water. Suddenly, one of them sank. The people reported that something had happened and they were under attack from the Southern Island Alliance, to which the admiral turned his head and asked again, and the soldiers added that the first ship had been hit and had a leak in the hold. The radio on the control panel vibrated, and the sailors asked not to worry, because these people were not their equal, and then reported that the turbine of the seventh ship was out of order, and the third ship was coming to the rescue, so there was no need to worry. Frowning, Jean remained silent, when suddenly he was told that their captain was injured. With his mouth wide open, the man shouted that they should stop searching for the man in the black robe, and then asked Leviathan to urgently rise to the surface and help them. Dailu widened her eyes, not understanding where her master was. Sinyu went into the depths and thought that the side effects of the dragon elixir were too strong, and he could no longer do it, and he also wanted to sleep, because it was very cold here. A huge snake swam near the body of the protagonist. The jellyfish emerged from the water. Grinning, the spiritual snake of disaster said that this was an ordinary person who could withstand 2 9-star hunters at once, and this was really impressive. Medusa loudly apologized to him, bringing Sinyu to her mouth. The night sky was visible, and the protagonist thought that he needed to get ready, because he couldn't sleep now. The gray clouds thickened, and the protagonist decided that he needed to come to his senses as soon as possible. The guy opened his eyes. The young man saw a blurry silhouette of his assistant. Putting her palms on the head of the master, Dailu exclaimed that he finally woke up, and she was very scared, to which he asked if they managed, and why his face hurt. The trapper clarified where they were, to which the nine-tailed fox turned her head and said that they were inside Medusa, but he didn't need to worry, because no animal moves underwater as fast as she does. Grinning, the protagonist said that the main thing is that they succeeded, and noted that this time he really kept his word, and then apologized. The girl lowered her eyebrows and screamed that he should not sleep. The spiritual catastrophe snake emerged from the water. The mythical beast frowned and said that the protagonist was seriously injured and unconscious, and his condition was very serious, and there was an uninhabited island ahead, so they could stop there for now. Rocky mountains of ice and fire appeared. Jean lowered his jaw and said that even the two generals could not deal with the enemies, and it was a shame, to which Baiyu suggested that they should think about how to survive the Empress's wrath. A bright flash of light appeared in the dark sky. A magical dragon descended from the sky. The Navy members raised their heads. Gritting their teeth, the men called out to the Empress. Lan frowned menacingly and asked where Medusa was. The Navy Admiral, holding out his palm, admitted that unfortunately he had failed to justify her trust and the prisoner had escaped, while the Army General noted that they had also been attacked by other forces, otherwise the man would never have escaped. The girl's eyes widened and she shouted that she didn't want to listen to their excuses, but wanted to know who had taken the mythical beast. The old man's eyes visibly narrowed in fear, and he explained that it was a man in a black cloak and a mask with a demon's face, and that the nine-tailed fox was his battle beast, and that was all they knew. The Empress waved her hand and asked how anyone could possibly understand that two generals were unable to protect the naval headquarters. Kneeling down, Jean admitted his guilt and declared that he was prepared to take the punishment he deserved, and Baiyu pointed out that they had the power of a dragon, and the fox even had a dragon's soul. Gritting her teeth, Lan thought about his words and realized that it simply couldn't be true. Raising her hand, the girl asked to know where the man in black had fled, and then said that they would discuss their punishments when they returned, when suddenly the subordinate cried out that the enemies had gone to the southeast. The Empress's mythical dragon stood on a cloud. Frowning, the old man thought that even the princess had decided to intervene, so great changes were coming to the dragon state. Suddenly, it began to rain in the sky. The heroes were warming themselves by the fire in the cave. Medusa, closing her lips, admitted that she did not think that so much would happen to her during this time, to which Dailu noted that without her master she would have died long ago, and the interlocutor asked if they were too close. Sinyu asked for water, when suddenly his assistant decided to help him, and Medusa lowered her eyebrows and exclaimed that there was no fresh water on this island. The girl ran her finger along the blade of the knife. Drops of blood began to flow into the protagonist's mouth. The spiritual catastrophe snake widened its eyes and wondered if the fox had really decided to spend its own blood for a certain person. Sharp fangs appeared. Two hands suddenly appeared. The boy saw hallucinations of a dragon and did not understand what had happened or where they were. The Empress lowered her sword, and Sinyu was surprised by what Lan saw. The girl extended her palm forward. Suddenly, the image shattered into pieces, and the protagonist screamed loudly. The protagonist continued screaming with his mouth wide open. Smiling, Dailu exclaimed that the master had finally woken up, and said that he had slept all morning, and she had been worried. Closing his eyes, the trapper asked where they were this time, and the nine-tailed fox said that it was an uninhabited island near a magical strait that was outside the jurisdiction of the Dragon State's fleet, so there was no need to worry, to which he thought that he was dizzy and that it was some kind of dream. Licking his lips with his tongue, the guy noticed that he could taste the dragon's blood, and asked if the assistant had given him her blood to drink, to which she replied that after losing consciousness, he was severely dehydrated, and there was no fresh water on the island, so this was the only way, and the young man thanked her and said that he appreciated it, and the system reported that the affection level had increased. Entering the cave, Medusa asked how long they would be making out here, and the protagonist was surprised by the crown on her head. The spiritual snake of disasters looked up. The girl handed the protagonist a glass of water. The mythical beast smiled. The trapper's cheeks turned red. Crossing her arms, Medusa said that there was no need for gratitude, because she was the one who should be thanked, because Sinyu saved her life. With wide eyes, Dailu explained that this was the highest form of gratitude in the snake tribe, to which the protagonist said that all these formalities were not necessary, because it was not difficult at all. Frowning, the mythical beast said that the snake tribe always repays kindness, especially for saving a life, so she herself will do whatever she wants for him, after which she asked him not to be shy. The protagonist widened his eyes and asked her again. Smiling, the trapper said that in that case everything is simple, and he wants her. Pointing his finger forward, the guy exclaimed that he wants her, to which she said that it is understandable, but decided to refuse. With bulging eyes, the young man did not understand why he was refused. Sinyu sat by the fire with his companion. Medusa closed her eyes and explained that she was ready to do everything for him except sign a blood contract, to which he asked why such a decision was made. The girl turned away and exclaimed that because orcs would never be slaves, and the protagonist noted that it would come with food and shelter, but the mythical beast still refused. Raising her eyebrows in alarm, Dailu thought about how she had once been forced to sign a blood contract with him, although in the end it led to the best. Suddenly, blood flew out of the protagonist's mouth. The trapper began to fall and admitted that he thought that if he risked his life for Medusa, he would be able to warm her cold heart. But he was wrong, because there was no room for warmth in her soul, to which she objected, and the fox did not understand why there was blood from her mouth again. Closing his eyes, the boy said that since she did not want to sign a blood contract with him, he no longer had a reason to live, and in the next life he would never save such an ungrateful snake, to which the nine-tailed fox exclaimed that she asked her master not to leave her alone. Squinting, the spiritual snake of catastrophe shouted that she would sign the contract, but asked him not to die. Taking the girl's palm, the young man cried out that Medusa was very kind and he had a new incentive to live. Pulling the cheek of the master, Dailu asked since when he began to manage to manipulate so shamelessly, to which he replied that in such a situation all means are good, and besides, is death better than a blood contract, and why is it so bad? And the girl clarified what would have happened if the moral pressure did not work. The protagonist grinned and explained that he would have simply caught her and handed her over to the authorities for a reward, since that way she would definitely give in to his pressure faster, and Dailu thought that honest people were almost uncommon in their day, and Medusa was simply a model of morality and ethics compared to him. Sinew offered the mythical beast to sign a blood contract, to which she frowned, but agreed. The protagonist left a blood imprint on the girl's forehead. A magical seal formed under her feet. A bright symbol appeared on the forehead of the spiritual catastrophe snake. The protagonist grinned and exclaimed that from that moment on Medusa became his, to which she asked if she really had signed a blood contract with a human, and thought that it was all a dream, and the nine-tailed fox said that she understood her. The system showed the full dossier of the mythical beast. Gritting his teeth, the hunter thought that Medusa was really strong and wanted another dragon bone, then decided that he needed to find the Eye of Rebirth and the Dungeon Lord's magic crystal to help her evolve into a world wanderer. Suddenly, a bright bolt of lightning appeared in the sky. The boy grabbed his hand in confusion. Dailu widened her eyes and asked if her master was in pain, since he looked terrible, to which he said that he had a bad feeling. Although the danger had already passed, his heart was still pounding. With bulging eyes, the young man thought about the fact that he had saved the spiritual catastrophe snake, and the system had not given him a reward, which meant that the task was not yet complete. Turning his head, Sinew shouted that he and his assistant needed to leave the island immediately. Putting on his mask, the protagonist noted that otherwise it would be too late later. The nine-tailed fox agreed to do whatever the protagonist said, and Medusa frowned and said that she was a faster swimmer, so they could climb onto her back. The magic funnel descended to the water. Suddenly, the fragments of the uninhabited island flew apart. Turning her head, the girl noticed that the island had been leveled. Putting his hand on his knee, the hunter noted that it was above. A black silhouette was rushing towards them from above. The Empress spread her fingers and said that he had a black cloak and a mask with a demon's face, after which she assumed that she was not mistaken. Raising her head up, the fox asked if the sacred Shilin in front of them was seven-colored, and then cried out that it was definitely her. A huge snake rose above the ocean, and Dailu noted that they were pursuing them, so she did not think that she would be able to escape. Frowning, the protagonist thought that the strongest of all the trappers was the Empress, but why her, and then realized that his spiritual strength was already running out, and there were no more pills left, and he could not technically use it, so it was unclear what to do. Clenching her palms, the fox asked the owner not to worry and trust her. The white dragon descended on a cloud. Lowering the corners of her mouth, Lan said that the little fox was lucky to merge with the dragon's blood, and then asked the man in the black cloak to reveal his identity, and then she would keep his body intact. Reaching out her hand, Dailu asked her to wait. The woman's eyes widened, thinking. The fox opened her mouth wide and said that she was ready to swear allegiance to her right here and now, because she would be able to keep her master alive, even if it meant imprisoning him forever. The girl closed her lips and exclaimed that it was not proper for the dead to talk to the living. The huge snake opened its mouth and the protagonist shouted that there was nothing to discuss and that they had to fight it, and Medusa supported him and cried out that there was always a way out. The Empress frowned and muttered that they had chosen their own fate. The golden dragon began to wrap around Lan's body. The nine-tailed fox raised its eyebrows in alarm and was surprised by the dragon's strength. The girl's silhouette was enveloped in bright energy flows. The Empress appeared in a black mask and with wings on her back. Dailu brought her fingers to her face and exclaimed that this was a black dragon soul and a very sinister energy, but she did not understand what kind of monster it was and whether it was not a human. Sticking out its tongue, the huge snake explained that this was the real face of this woman, and she wanted them to take this secret to the grave. The nine-tailed fox lowered her hand. The girl noticed that they had no chance left, spreading her fingers. The white dragon rushed forward. The assistant's eyes widened and she shouted that she couldn't just give up. A moment later, the fox transformed into a magical beast. The Empress's pet split into several pieces. Blood flowed from the magical beast's mouth. High waves rose above the water. Suddenly, the opponent tore off the fox's paw. At the same moment, the rival cut the magical beast's ear. Lan used magic to split the magical beast into pieces. Sinew frowned and shouted the assistant's name. Dailu meekly fell down. The spiritual snake of disasters lowered its head and asked her to hold on. Grabbing the nine-tailed fox by the head, the protagonist asked if she was injured and asked her to wake up. Raising her eyebrows, the wounded girl called out to her master. Raising her hand, the fox muttered that they had only recently met, and if only they could have spent some more time together, and then admitted that she was very sorry, and if only she had not dragged him into all this. Tears appeared in the protagonist's eyes, and the trapper exclaimed that the assistant was not to blame, since he himself had decided to help her. The girl pulled the master closer to her. The nine-tailed fox reached out to kiss the boy. Smiling, Dailu apologized and assumed that she would leave first. The fox's hand fell on the snake's body, and the girl muttered that the young man was her master. Running his fingers over the assistant's face, the protagonist called out to her. Tears flowed from the fox's eyes. A memory appeared in which the mythical beast frowned. In the vision, the girl licked the blood from her master's neck. The protagonist hugged his assistant tightly. Lan closed her lips and said that he should not worry so much, because soon they would be able to reunite with her. Bright lightning spread across the entire sky. The Empress raised her hands and formed a magic funnel. The spiritual catastrophe snake stuck out its tongue and said that it would protect the master until death, and she and Dailu would wait for him, to which he loudly objected. Medusa closed her eyes and asked the guy again. The protagonist's cloak fluttered in the wind, and the young man shouted that this was not the end he wanted to see, and the nine-tailed fox should live. A magic crystal appeared in front of the protagonist. The magic stone began to emit a bright glow. Bubbles suddenly rose into the air. A shockwave rushed from under the body of a huge snake. Frowning, Lan did not understand if it was a dragon tear. A mechanical watch appeared and the countdown began. A magical stream cut the assistant's hand. Suddenly, the wound began to heal. A moment later, the limb was completely healed. Lan swung her elbow. The Empress opened her mouth in alarm. The girl lowered her eyebrows in bewilderment. Rock fragments began to fall into the water. The boulders formed a large pile. Suddenly, the rocky plain was restored. Sinew saw Dailu's silhouette in her eyes, and the girl called out to him. Lowering her eyebrows, the nine-tailed fox asked why the owner was in the clouds. He muttered something that they had succeeded, and the assistant asked him again. The fox opened her eyes wide in surprise. The protagonist kissed the girl. Putting her fingers to her face, Medusa asked what they were doing here. Pushing the fox away from him, the protagonist exclaimed that there was no time to explain, because they needed to leave quickly, and asked the mythical beast to swim towards the strait, where there were many other beasts, and the more smells, the better. Raising her eyebrows, Medusa agreed. At that very second, the spiritual snake of catastrophes dove under the water. The white dragon stood on a cloud, and Lan said that the trail was lost here, and further on the strait of magical beasts began. Gritting her teeth, the Empress noted that they had escaped after all. The girl looked at the island in the distance, and declared that the next time they met the man in the black cloak, not even bones would remain of him. The northern lights appeared in the sky above the island. The mythical beast suggested that no one was chasing them anymore, to which the protagonist gritted his teeth and explained that if they were found in the strait of magical beasts, then all that was left was to accept death, and Dailu asked how he knew that Lan would pursue them. Grabbing his assistant by the hand, the protagonist exclaimed that he could not lose her, and would not survive it a second time, to which she clarified what they were talking about, and the spiritual snake of catastrophes asked if the guy had confessed his love to her. Clenching the crystal in his fist, the hunter said that it was a dragon tear that he had accidentally activated, and then suggested that they touch it, because maybe then they would understand everything. The girls looked at the magic stone in bewilderment. The night sky appeared. The protagonist asked if the nine-tailed fox was crying and if everything was okay, to which she, wiping her eye with her finger, replied that she just had sand in her eyes, and Medusa was silent, displeased. The system reported that the protagonist had completed the task and was receiving one purebred dragon egg as a reward, to which the hunter grinned and thought that since the reward had already been given, it meant that they were really safe. Lowering the corners of his lips, the guy said that Dailu had told him that Medusa knew the secret of that battle with the dragons that had happened 200 years ago, and then asked if the girl could tell who Lan was, to which she explained that the Empress had once exterminated dragons in flocks, but in the end she herself became what she had fought, an ominous dragon. And 90% of the strongest warriors of the dragon state had participated in that war. The silhouettes of the warriors were visible, and the spiritual catastrophe snake noted that at that time, there were two strongest fighters, namely Lan and Lien, and at that time, the Empress had not yet held such a position, and the other warrior was not the leader of the rebels of the Flame Alliance. A child peeked out from behind a rock, and Medusa said that at that time, she was just a small snake hiding in a rock, and they fought in the Dragon Valley, where she had her hideout, so she saw the entire battle with her own eyes. An ominous dragon appeared, and the girl reported that after Lan killed countless dragons, she stood in the center of the valley covered in dragon blood and laughed hysterically, and then turned into a black dragon that was much larger than its brethren, and obsessed with bloodlust, she destroyed the entire valley, not distinguishing between an enemy or an ally. Stretching her palm to the side, Medusa said that when the battle was over, all the dragons were destroyed and almost all the hunters died, and the only survivor was the current leader of the Flame Alliance, and she herself was able to escape death. But despite this, Lan still wanted to kill her, to which Sinyu said that now it was clear why Lien betrayed the Dragon State and created the Flame Alliance against the Empress. Putting his fingers to his chin, the protagonist did not understand how she managed to become an evil dragon at all, and whether it was her or the number of dragons destroyed, and how many Lien killed then, after which he realized that Medusa was not a direct participant in the events, and to find out more, he had to ask the head of the Flame Alliance himself. Moving his hand away from his face, the protagonist thought that this was impossible, because he himself was a student of the Azure Dragon Academy and a trapper of the Second Star, and that person was the leader of the Flame Alliance rebels, and they would not be able to meet, but he did not understand what would happen to him and his sister if he really did end up connected with him. Lowering her eyebrows, Medusa asked what the gentleman was going to do next now that he knew the truth about Lan, to which he asked if he could become a fighter for justice and accuse her of the atrocities of 200 years ago, because it was not even funny, and there was no point in feuding with such a monster. Raising her eyebrows, Dailu noted that after this incident, the Empress had already set her sights on him, and would not leave him alone, to which Sinyu replied that the girl was hunting for a black cloak, to which she had nothing to do. The nine-tailed fox widened her eyes and said that they were one person, to which the protagonist asked his assistant not to bother her head and suggested that they rest for a while, and then slowly head to the city. The magic crystal in the protagonist's hand began to glow brightly. The hunter grabbed his head and sighed heavily, when suddenly the fox called out to him. Pitch darkness appeared, and the guy did not understand where he was or why it was so dark. A huge dragon appeared in front of him. Turning around, the young man shouted that it was a black dragon, but did not understand how it managed to get here. Gritting his teeth, Sinyu loudly asked who had the idea to put a mirror here. Suddenly, the protagonist's eyes noticeably increased. The protagonist spread his arms out to the sides and shouted that his body was being covered in dragon scales. Wings appeared from the hunter's back, and the guy cried out that he did not want to turn into a monster. Opening his mouth wide, the young man shouted that he would never do that. Dailu asked how he was, to which Medusa, holding the protagonist, replied that he was very weak, also had a fever, and would probably remain unconscious for several days, because the human body was too weak, after which they clarified what to do now. The girl, turning her head, explained that the milk of a magical beast could increase his immunity and ability to recover, and the fox asked where she was looking, and added that she definitely did not have it. The mythical form of the king of beasts, sighing heavily, exclaimed that she understood everything and would now go get it. A dark entrance to the cave was visible. Suddenly Sinyu, opening his mouth wide, shouted that he was not a monster. Lowering his eyebrows, the protagonist said that it was good that he only dreamed it, because he almost died of fear. The guy, putting his palms on his knees, asked Medusa where they were and how long he slept, and she was glad that he woke up. Showing 3 fingers, the girl explained that they were still near the magical strait, and he had been asleep for 3 days, which made the young man ask in confusion about the supernova competition. Squinting, the hunter said that it had been about 5 days since they left the city, so they needed to return urgently to make it to the finals, otherwise the academy might suspect something, and if the Empress noticed, then he would definitely be finished. Suddenly, Dailu, shuffling her legs, exclaimed that it was great, because he had woken up, and the spiritual snake of catastrophes told the master that she understood that he was in a hurry, but he needed to calm down first, to which he asked how else. Sinyu, noticing the flask in the fox's hand, asked what it was, and she said that it was the milk of a magical beast, so let him drink it. The protagonist, his eyes wide, said that he was a human and drank milk tea at most, and that the beast's milk was too disgusting, so he simply couldn't, after which the girl firmly said that she wouldn't do that, because she had to drink it. Medusa, crossing her elbows, asked the gentleman if he knew how he had managed to stay unconscious for 3 days, and said that it would strengthen his immunity and restore his vital energy, and that this fox had sacrificed a lot for something like that. The protagonist lifted the corners of his lips in bewilderment. A moment later, the guy looked at the flask in surprise. The spiritual snake of disasters, raising her palm, asked him to stop hesitating and added that she had gotten it especially for him, and if he didn't drink it, she would be very upset. Stretching out her hands, Dailu said that she had put a lot of effort into it, so he had to drink it, to which she received a positive answer. Sinyu pursed his lips and thought that the fox had sacrificed a lot for him, so she couldn't hurt her again. A second later, the protagonist brought the flask to his mouth. Through the sweat on his face, the protagonist said that this was the milk of the Silver Tiger Empress. Medusa smiled and asked if he was scared, and explained that she was not in lactation, so she hunted female magical beasts every day, to which the guy objected that he almost died of fear, and Dailu asked what he was thinking. The young man, turning his gaze to the side, asked how long it would take to return to the coast of the Dragon State, given her maximum speed, after which the girl said that half a day would be enough. Holding a flask in his hand, the trapper asked if they could catch the beast since they still had time and then roast it together, to which Medusa replied that he should just wait and they would be back soon. Sinyu, smiling slightly, exclaimed that since they had left, he could now see what reward the system had given him. An image of a dragon egg and its characteristics appeared on the screen. Lowering his eyebrows, the protagonist said that he could not grow anything even from a seed, and here was a real dragon, and also added that it was still a magical beast, and therefore the conditions were more severe. Suddenly, the protagonist noticed a hole in the cave. Dailu, holding the beast, said that they had returned, and Sinyu was surprised by their speed. A fire appeared, over which meat was roasting. The guys ate the food with appetite. Medusa, closing her eyes, wondered if they were that big in humanoid form, and if she had that much, was that big for her too. The spiritual snake of catastrophes, moving her lips, asked what the gentleman was thinking about, and he asked a counter question about what she thought their relationship was like, to which he answered that he was her savior, so he could speak frankly. The protagonist, smiling, asked if she could give him some feces, which made the girl ask him again in bewilderment, and he repeated his question. Medusa, baring her teeth, asked if he was looking for death. Dailu tried to restrain the mythical beast, who objected that he should not stop her, because he would kill this pervert. The protagonist, bulging his eyes, told the fox that the spiritual snake of catastrophes refused, so could she do it? The girl, lowering her eyebrows, asked if she didn't want to, then she had to, and then added that he really was a pervert, and how could he be so corrupted? The mythical beast, frowning menacingly, called him a pervert again. The boy, holding the pot, explained what he needed for fertilizer, and asked why they looked as if they would rather die than agree. Dailu, raising the corners of her lips, said that she and Medusa were no longer wild animals, and that they also had pride and dignity. Sitting down on the ground, the young man exclaimed that she was right, because he had been too rude to them, but he really needed it, and the main thing was for the magical beast to have the form of the king of beasts, to which the girl replied that other magical beasts would do too. The spiritual catastrophe snake raised its hand and said that it was not a problem then, because there was a magical strait here, at the bottom of which many beasts of this level slept. The depths of the water showed up. Bubbles were visible, inside of which a fire was burning. Suddenly, a powerful splash of water was heard. A dark entity appeared, which clarified who dared to disturb its peace. The girl, with her mouth wide open, shouted that they had even thought of throwing fire into the sea. The beast hunter, putting his hands on his hips, said that this was a mutated imperial whale, and also that it was a great rarity, to which he was asked who he called a rarity. The magical creature, swimming in the water, asked if he was a man, and whether he was tired of living, and Sinyu suggested going ashore and fighting him, after which they objected that they would tear him to pieces in 3 seconds. The mutated emperor whale suddenly surfaced and shouted that there wouldn't even be bones left of him. Suddenly, a wide shadow appeared above her. Medusa, clenching her fist, asked if she wanted to kill her master, and added that she would see if she had enough strength, and Dailu asked if she dared to insult their master, and if she had already thought of how she would die. The girl, lowering her head, begged for mercy and told him that she had a mother and 3 unhatched eggs. Closing his eyes, the protagonist wondered if whales didn't give birth to babies, and also wondered why they would kill her, because they weren't some kind of villains. The protagonist explained that he just needed her to go poop once, and so they would immediately let her go, which made the mutated emperor whale, his eyes bulging, perplexed. Having hit the guy with her tail, the magical creature called him a pervert. An unusual monster was seen swimming in the water. The young man, folding his legs, said that she had run away after all, and asked what was wrong with that, and why was it necessary to hit him at all, to which Dailu exclaimed that it served him right, and he added that at least he managed to get fertilizer. The fox, being on the head of a huge creature, told the owner that there were snowy mountains ahead, and if they crossed them, they would find themselves in the city of 4 spirits, and he suggested that they first rest, because he needed to wash himself, otherwise someone might suspect something due to the too strong smell. After some time, a high waterfall appeared. The beast trapper, holding his clothes, asked Dailu if he wanted to wash together, because he could rub his back, and also knew a massage for breast enlargement, to which he refused. Smiling, Medusa said that youth has a lot of energy, and the gentleman is very hardy. The fox, covering the girl's mouth with her hand, asked her to shut up, after which Sinyu exclaimed that he was glad to see that they were getting along, and he heard that in the Silver City the girls were also not bad. The spiritual snake of catastrophes, lowering her eyebrows, shouted that she was not some girl, to which the protagonist clarified whether they were there, and Dailu replied that she did not understand what he was talking about at all. After some time, the guy found himself in a dense forest. Suddenly, a rabbit jumped out of the branches. The small animal landed on the young man's head, and he asked what it was. Taking the animal in his hand, the hunter asked if it was an electric hare. A moment later, many wild dogs quickly ran forward. A pack of storm wolves angrily opened their mouths. Sinyu turned his head and said that they must have taken him for a rival in the hunt. The protagonist, raising his eyebrows, asked Dailu if she knew. A second later, Medusa frowned menacingly. The protagonist, looking at the fox, exclaimed that she was very cruel because she had spared no one, to which she clarified that she was saving him, and he was still unhappy. Throwing the hare, the guy told him to remember that the strongest survives, because next time he would not be helped. It was visible how the animal quickly jumped, and the young man added that now he should run. Suddenly, the electric hare got into the hunter's pants, which made him perplexed. Sinyu, pulling down his pants, ordered the rabbit to quickly get out, otherwise he would sue him for harassment, and the girl asked if he really threatened him with a lawsuit. Grabbing the little beast by the ears, the protagonist asked it to stop sticking to him, because he had been wanting to cook a rabbit in soy sauce and pepper for a long time. Bringing the electric hare to his face, the protagonist explained that he would give it another chance, and if they were bound by fate, he would leave it. The animal tucked its paws, and the system showed its characteristics. The guy, smiling, was surprised that the animal reset the cooldown of the ULT, and added that he was the god of supports. Lowering his hand, the young man exclaimed to the girls that the rabbit would go with them because it wanted to make a bloody contract with him, because it would become his battle beast, to which Medusa asked if the gentleman had gone crazy, and explained that this electric rabbit was incapable of developing, and was even more useless than a flea-ridden dog, after which Dailu objected that since the owner decided so, it means he has reasons for that. After some time, the city of Silong appeared. An open arena was visible, and everyone could be heard cheering on the decisive battlefield of the supernova competition. Sinyu and his team appeared on the screen. On the opposite side were the opponents, and it was said that today's match would be between the teams of the Azure Dragon Academy and the Red Crane. Yangshua, with his mouth wide open, asked where the protagonist was hanging around, since he was not answering calls or messages, and there were only 15 minutes left, so he hoped that he was not going to miss the fight. Shinshin asked her to call him again, to which the guy spread his arms out in different directions and exclaimed that he had already called him 15 times, and always the same thing, namely, the subscriber was out of range, after which the girl suggested trying one last time. The young man, holding the phone, replied that he would try now. Yanshuo's eyes bulged when he heard that the subscriber's account did not have enough funds. Raising the corners of his lips, the guy said that this was a different matter, because now at least he was in the coverage area, and since it was a matter of balance, he would throw him a little. Suddenly, the protagonist opened the door and told the guys that they hadn't seen each other for a long time and missed them very much, to which the young man asked if he was making fun of him because he showed up after he topped up his balance, and let him return his money. The beast trapper, stretching out his finger, shouted that since he had paid for his connection, he should not dare to disappear again, after which he received a positive answer. Shinshin, widening her eyes, clarified whether he had not gone to Longing to see his sister, and why she had called him so many times, and he was always out of coverage. Sinyu smiled and explained that he almost forgot to say that she was especially beautiful today. Lowering his eyebrows, Yangshua said that he was simply lying to her, and that she should not be led astray like a fool in love. It was heard that there were 10 minutes left before the match, so they asked the participants to get ready and go on stage for the opening ceremony, after which the guy crossed his arms and told the team that it was time to go out. The girl blushed sharply and said that she needed to go to the toilet, to which the protagonist asked her not to linger. The entrance to the toilet was visible. Zelian appeared in the reflection, and she said that they met again. Shinshin, turning her head, asked what she was doing here, to which she received a question whether she expected that she would also participate, and clarified whether she replaced Liner. Raising her eyebrows, the girl said that she was sick and injured, and asked if it was bad that she replaced her. Extending her finger, Zelian exclaimed that although they were childhood friends, she should not expect mercy in the arena. Shinshin, approaching the door, replied that she would see who would defeat whom. The girl raised the corners of her lips and explained that she would definitely embarrass her in front of everyone in this tournament. Wei-in crossed his elbows and told his sister that time was almost up, so they should go, to which he received a positive answer. A moment later, the two joined hands. The brother and sister could be seen walking down the hallway. After a while, the host, holding the microphone, exclaimed that they were greeting the audience at the Supernova competition finals. It was said that the Red Crane Academy team was on the left, and the girl, waving her hand, wished good morning to the spectators. The visitors, with their jaws open in joy, shouted that it was Xia Lian, which meant that the rumors about Liner's illness were true, and they would also agree to marry her even if they had to have 20 children with her, and her brother was a real handsome man. Turning his head, Yanshu explained that these siblings were from the Xia family, and they were not ordinary people, because their father was a 10th-star trapper, as well as one of the Empress's advisors and the chief strategist of the Dragon State, to which Shinshin added that it was said that Wei-in had a chance to become Princess Qian's future husband, which made the protagonist very surprised. They heard the Azure Dragon Academy team coming out from the right, and the guy opened his mouth and said that the time had come. The host said that their dear Empress would be the judge of this competition, and she raised her palm. The man with a mustache, holding his chin, told the Empress that this guy's name was Sinyu, to which she exclaimed that he would soon fight his beloved son, and she was also interested in who would win, and the advisor replied that everything depended on their skills, and asked if he could somehow affect the outcome. The secretary closed her eyes and asked if she had found out anything about the man in black. The girl, looking forward, said that the Imperial Association had sent all the Silver Priests to secretly check all the 9th and 10th Star Trappers, but so far without result, and the assistant said that the man in black might not be a high-level trapper at all, but an influential official. Squinting, the man added that he might be a small figure from a backwater city in their country. The protagonist could be seen frowning menacingly. The protagonist's eyes widened sharply, to which Shinshin asked what had happened to him. Sinyu, lowering his eyebrows, replied that nothing. Biting his lips, the protagonist thought that although he had survived Lan's attack, the memories of it still frightened him, and he hoped that she would not find out that he was the man in black, because he was only a 2nd Star Trapper. The host explained that this year's tournament was a knockout tournament, and asked the participants of both teams to go to the arena for the final battle, while Yangshuo, with his hands down, said that he would be the first, so let them watch and learn, to which the protagonist asked not to lose to him in the first battle. The battlefield appeared, and it was heard that the teams needed to choose the first participant. The commentator said that the Red Crane Academy immediately played its trump card, namely Weian, who was warming up his fingers. The guy, through the sweat on his face, thought that he would fight Dongfang or Xiaoliang, and did not expect to face such a strong opponent from the very beginning, after which he added that he was the son of the Admiral of the Dragon State Navy, so he cannot disgrace himself in front of his brother and sister. The opponent raised the corners of his lips and said that it was over, to which the eldest son of the Murong family asked what exactly was over, and was told that as soon as he stepped into the arena, the fight was already over, because he would single-handedly destroy their entire team. The particularly gifted disciple frowned and shouted that he should not dare to underestimate him. A moment later, a white griffin circled above Yangshuo. Weian raised his hand and summoned a demonic flame beast. The boy's eyes bulged, wondering what kind of monster it was. The protagonist's pupils widened sharply, and he wondered where it had come from. A monster with 3 heads was visible, and the system wrote down its characteristics. The white griffin opened its mouth, after which the artificial intelligence gave a description of it. Sinyu, turning his gaze to the side, said that he thought Yangshuo would have a chance if he attacked the tail of this chimera, and Shinshin sadly said that her brother did not know this, and received the answer that there were many cameras around, so they could not tell him about it. The protagonist, clenching his jaw, thought that the white griffin's advantage was high explosive power and damage, and the first 3 minutes would decide the outcome of the entire battle. But if he did not take the initiative into his own hands, then his low endurance would play a cruel joke on him, so he would have to help him develop his beast later. Suddenly it seemed like Yangshuo's pet released a magic beam. Weian ordered his creature to take the blow, after which it stood still. Lightning appeared on the monster's body, and the host reported that the demonic flame beast had withstood the white griffin's signature move and was completely unharmed, and Weian had not even activated his spiritual energy. The particularly gifted disciple clenched his fingers in confusion. The youth, in a slight haze, muttered that he had deliberately taken the attack that his white griffin was so famous for. The opponent, smiling, said that the white griffin was a fighting beast that relied on quick dominance, but was extremely weak in a battle of endurance. Yangshuo, with his mouth wide open, exclaimed that he understood this very well and did not need his advice, and then asked his pet to continue the attack. Weian, baring his teeth, called him stubborn and ordered the demonic flame beast to use the hungry tiger dash. The monster suddenly rushed forward. Unexpectedly, the magical essence began to gnaw at the eagle's wings. A moment later, the opponent's beast slammed the white griffin into the ground. The audience, with their jaws open in joy, shouted that the demonic flame beast was very cool, and it was not for nothing that he was the son of strategist Xie. The guy, raising his palm, said that he should not get so carried away, so let him let go of the griffin. It was clear that the bird was bleeding. The young man, lowering his head, said that this was enough, and therefore he could give up. After all, this was just a competition, to which Yangshuo replied that he would never lose to him, especially with his sister looking at him, so they would continue. Suddenly, Sinyu covered Shinshin's mouth, who was trying to talk to her brother. The girl asked why he stopped her, and the protagonist frowned angrily and explained that at that moment he was not a participant in the competition at all, but her older brother. The particularly gifted disciple, with sweat on his face, thought that the white griffin's wings were badly damaged, and that using the skill would require more spiritual energy, and he couldn't lose to the Xia family in front of his sister, so he had to take a risk. Opening his mouth wide, the eldest son of the Murong family summoned the steel gorilla. The pet opened its mouth and screamed loudly. The boy stretched out his palm and asked it to use the steel giant staff. It was seen that the healthy beast suddenly kicked off the ground. The youth shouted to the white griffin to use the power of thunder, and lightning appeared around it. The beasts quickly rushed forward. Suddenly, The steel gorilla powerfully slammed its fist onto the ground. Wei-an, lowering his eyebrows, told the demonic blazing beast to use the absorption skill. A second later, bright flames came out of the monster's mouth. The power of thunder and fire suddenly collided with each other. Clenching his jaw, Yanshua didn't understand how he could stand it, since he had practiced this move many times. His opponent opened his mouth wide and shouted that it was the end, and at the same time, he ordered his pet to use the blue demon roar. Suddenly, the magic beam reached the steel gorilla and the white griffin. It was clear that the beast was bleeding, and the announcer announced that the fight was over, and the winner was Wei-an from the Red Crane Academy. The white griffin was lying on the ground unconscious. The guy, smiling, exclaimed that he was not his opponent, and let the next one come out. Sinyu, lowering his eyebrows, said that the fact that Wei-an had such an incredible battle beast was most likely the work of his father, to which Shinshin replied that his father was a 10th star hunter, and with his strength, catching a beast with demon blood was easy, after which the protagonist clarified whether something happened in the past with her and the CF family. The girl, remembering how she had grabbed the monster's wing in the past, said that when she was a child, she and Zillion had had an argument over a bat with bone wings, and that the beast had been captured when the Empress and her army were fighting outside the palace. It seemed like the little girl had pulled her hand away in pain. Shinshin asked if she was okay, to which Zillion, frowning angrily, replied that it was all her fault for disgracing her and taking away what belonged to her. The child, with her mouth wide open, exclaimed that the Xia family never forgot a grievance. Sinyu, raising the corners of his lips, asked if his eyes were red, since his pupils were gray, and the youngest daughter of the Murong family explained that it was called heterochromia, a genetic trait of the Xia family, and other than the difference in color and the frightening appearance, there was nothing special. Suddenly, the protagonist's eyes widened. Wei-an kept his hands in his pockets, and the system reported that the Eye of Foresight can track the enemy's movements, predict their attacks and the angle of attack, and can also discreetly exert a frightening effect. The protagonist, holding his chin, thought that Lan and the Xia family were the two most important figures in the dragon state, and both were related to the beast, and it seemed that there were still many secrets left from the time of the extermination of dragons. The daytime sky was visible, and it was said that the second duel would begin soon. The girl lowered her hands, and the host said that on one side of the arena they had Wei-an from the Red Crane Academy, and on the other Shinshin from the Azure Dragon Academy. The villager asked him to teach her a good lesson, and also not to hold back, because he could even kill her beast, to which the guy, turning around, replied that he would do what he could. The boy, spreading his arms out to the sides, exclaimed that she should surrender while she still had a chance, otherwise something even more terrible would happen to her than her brother. Shinshin's eyes widened and she said that she was not afraid of him, and the commentator said that this would be a battle of titans, after which he asked whether Wei-an would be able to win a second time in a row, or whether the especially gifted student would defeat her opponent and avenge her brother. A moment later, the bone-wing wyvern appeared. The beast suddenly released a powerful flame from its mouth. The green fire quickly reached the enemy's pet. The boy, lowering his eyebrows, ordered the monster to dodge. A second later, the demonic essence quickly jumped to the side. The commentator, holding the microphone, asked whether the demonic flame beast decided not to take the attack this time, but to dodge, and whether it was afraid of the bone-wing wyvern. The secretary closed his eyes and said that Shinshin had learned of the demonic flame beast's vulnerability from that youth, and that it was truly incomprehensible. The Empress turned her gaze to the side and asked the advisor who he thought would win this time, to which he explained that his son had inherited the Eye of Foresight, so was there any point in asking, and then added that it was not that simple with that youth, because if they clashed, how would a father root for his son? It seemed as if the bone-wing wyvern had fired a magic beam at the enemy. Suddenly, the monsters' heads began to spin. Sinyu clenched his fist and exclaimed that this was a great strike, and thought that the demonic flame beast's 70% immunity only affected physical and magical attacks, and the undead flames looked like fire magic, but spiritual attacks were the flame beast's weak point. Suddenly, the girl stretched out her hand and commanded her pet to use the skill rain of necrotic arrows. A second later, many magic projectiles appeared. The magic bullets hit the enemy beast's body directly. Wei-an shouted at the demonic blazing beast that it needed to use Blood Whirlpool, and it opened its mouth wide. The boy added that his pet needed to use the reflection ability, and at the same time, many projectiles rushed in the opposite direction. The magic arrows tore the bone-wing wyvern into small pieces. Shinshin lowered her eyebrows and muttered that the blazing beast had too many abilities, and the tiger head was still hiding its abilities. Suddenly, the young man, flexing his fingers, said that he was already tired of this, and therefore it was time to end it. The girl asked the bone-wing wyvern to recover, use the ultimate wrath of the undead, and a green aura appeared behind the evil spirit. Suddenly, bone hands appeared in the sky. A moment later, a powerful beam struck the enemy. The particularly gifted student stretched out her palm, happy about the successful attack. An unusual force was visible near the enemy's pet. Wei-an bared his teeth and thought that he had to do something, Otherwise he would be in a losing position. Shinshin bit her lips and muttered that although Undead Rage was a powerful skill, it couldn't finish off the demonic blazing beast, so it was time for her to deal the killing blow. Opening her jaw, she shouted to her pet to attack. Suddenly, a magic sword quickly cut through the air. The boy, grinning evilly, explained that it was useless. A second later, his pet swung its tail sharply. The particularly gifted disciple's eyes widened in confusion. Sister Youngshuo raised her eyebrows and thought that she had spent all her strength on Undead Rage and now she couldn't summon a second beast. Zillion joyfully raised her hand and shouted that this was her end, and that she had lost after all, and also asked her brother to quickly finish off her Bonewing Wyvern, to which he called Shinshin and her brother worthless, adding that they did not belong here. Suddenly, a guy approached Weian and tried to call him, and he sharply exclaimed about the Blue Demon Roar ability. A moment later, a bright beam of light flew out from the mouth of the demonic beast. The youngest daughter of the Murong family, her eyes bulging, ordered the pet to quickly dodge. Suddenly, a healthy dog flew over her head. It seemed as if two powerful forces collided with each other. Sinyu angrily clenched his fists. Through the sweat on his face, the opponent did not understand how this guy's beast so easily repelled the Blue Demon Roar. The protagonist, holding out his finger, asked what he was doing, because according to the rules, if one of the participants runs out of spiritual energy, then he is considered a loser, so why is he ignoring the judge's words and continuing to attack? The young man, smiling menacingly, replied that this was too mean, but if that attack had hit the Bonewing Wyvern, then it would not have been able to recover from something like that, and how was he supposed to know if it still had spiritual energy? Because the judge did not give a sign to stop. The man waved his palm and clarified whether the judge had failed to stop the battle in time, after which he said that this was a very serious mistake, and asked if someone could take this incompetent idiot away, because now he is banned from judging for life. Suddenly, the host was taken away, and he apologized and exclaimed that he was really wrong, and at the same time, the protagonist muttered that he had put all the blame on the judge right in front of everyone, so the old fox had completely lost his conscience. But the Empress did not stop him, and it seemed that she was not going to interfere. The commentator, squeezing his fingers, said that it seemed like there was a small misunderstanding, but fortunately everything was settled now, and the second fight was over, and the winner was Weian, and in the next fight he would fight the last participant of the Azure Dragon Academy. Shinshin, touching the trapper, explained that she could have one, but something was clearly wrong with this guy, because he seemed to know where he would attack, to which he replied that everything was fine, and let him do the rest. Frowning, Zillion thought that if it weren't for Sinyu, her brother would have already finished off the Bonewing Wyvern, and after meeting her brother, he would beg for mercy. The disciple handed over a pill and said that according to the rules, if a participant defeats 2 opponents in a row, he will receive 1 spiritual energy recovery pill. Taking the medicine, Weian said that he himself knew. Suddenly, the commentator, with his mouth wide open, shouted that only Sinyu remained in the Azure Dragon Academy team after the defeat of the Murong brother and sister, and at that time no one was knocked out of the Red Crane Academy team, and asked whether Weian would be able to maintain her winning streak, or whether the protagonist would be able to turn the situation around. The young man, smiling, explained that if he surrendered himself, his beast would be almost unharmed. Suddenly, the guy clenched his jaw in fear. The protagonist angrily looked ahead. The opponent's eyes widened and he muttered that he had a very scary look. Sinyu extended his fist and said that now his sister would see with her own eyes how miserable her brother would be, and then he would deal with her beast. Weian raised his finger and asked if he wanted to destroy her sister's battle beast, then explained that he should defeat it first, and ordered the demonic blazing beast to attack. The protagonist, spreading his fingers, asked his pet to use the Black Fang skill. The opponent exclaimed to the beast that he should use the Bloody Whirlpool ability, and at that moment, fire appeared in its mouth. Unexpectedly, the protagonist's dog powerfully attacked with its claws. The monster's body was covered in scars, and the host said that this was incredible, because the underworld wolf struck 28 times in a row, and he acted for sure, and the demonic blazing beast did not even have a chance to use the ability. The youth lowered his brows and said that he had enough of taking the blows and should retreat. A moment later, the hunter asked Black Fang to capture the enemy, and he bit into the beast's paw. Suddenly, the magic chains bound the body of the opponent's pet. The storm dog quickly flew up. A second later, the wolf delivered a slashing blow to the opponent. It was seen that the demonic blazing beast suddenly rushed down. The monster hit the ground with great force. The opponent's pet lay unconscious. Weian bared his teeth viciously. The secretary closed his eyes and said that this was strange, and asked why his strength and aura were so different from a few days ago. The youth shouted that he would not hold back any longer, and ordered the demonic blazing beast to use the flame punishment skill, after which it opened its mouth. A bright beam appeared, and the commentator said that Weian's pet was finally showing its true strength, and the underworld wolf would not be able to dodge something like that, and if he went outside the arena, he would lose. Sinyu lowered his eyebrows and told Black Fang to use dark hunting. A second later, A magical aura surrounded the dog's body. Suddenly, a magical beam exploded powerfully in front. Suddenly, Storm Dog was behind the opponent. The protagonist's pet sharply bit into the opponent's tail. The guy, grinning evilly, exclaimed that he was caught, and this was the end. The protagonist, smiling, clarified if he was sure. A moment later, a bright explosion was heard. Frowning, the young man wondered if this was not his real body, but a clone. The beast hunter ordered Black Fang to use Hell Howl, after which an unusual energy was visible in his mouth. A second later, the demonic flame beast was knocked down by the magic power. The enemy's pet quickly fell to the ground. Wei-yin, with his palm on his face, asked how this was possible, since he had predicted its next move. Adjusting his glove, the boy said that he admitted that he was indeed worthy of fighting him seriously, but now everything would be completely different. The young man, stretching out his palm, told the demonic flame beast to use the ability of the second form. Suddenly, the monster began to increase in size. Several sharp paws came out from its back. The host, with sweat on his face, asked if these were 3 heads and 6 arms, and then added that the demonic flame beast had completely changed. The eyes of the enemy's pet were shining brightly. Sinew, with his mouth wide open, clarified whether this was a humanoid form, and explained that it would not help him anyway. Suddenly, a magical glow appeared in front of the protagonist. Wei-yin's eyes widened and he asked if this was the second battle beast, and who he was going to summon.